I think a lot of what really comes down to it at the beginning of these dungeons that we've seen, especially out of Method EU Nagura, is that they pull the whole room, and they do it successfully. Something that I only think one or two other teams has done, and some of them, when they've tried, have just failed miserably and had a lot of deaths. So we'll see if 40K is up to that challenge, as Method EU likely will be pulling the entire room's worth of trash for the Golden Serpent here.
Yeah, and as you said, Skittish being basically a non-affix, the graphics also agree here, as it's pretty much not shown at all. And we see Method EU here preparing for this very first pull. Now, the one thing you get to see, getting rid of these first kind of mobs that have the absorb shield, right? So that's why we saw now dealing with them as soon as they spawn, and now they're pulling the whole room on top of each other with the tricks coming out of the rogues. Now 40K doing the very same thing, and both of them just popping their bloodlust, making sure to deal with this. Now in the past we had affixes that were way more dangerous for King's Rest, and these affixes not such a big deal, and that's why this pull just gets a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, 40K
difficult.
40K not doing the same thing though. They do the same thing in terms of popping bloodlust, but they left one of the champion packs on the side, so certainly a more modest pull coming out of 40K. Same strategy from both teams. Pop all your offensive cooldowns, get bloodlust rolling, kill this as quickly as possible. But on the side of 40K, they left a champion and a witch doctor over at the end that they've now started working on. Much safer for the tank and the rest of the group, of course, with the amount of whirlwind and tornadoes going around, but certainly not the most efficient thing you can do in terms of you know, speed clearing. Actually, they left two groups up. One of the two bone warriors were on the side as well, so they're dealing with the other two of the four pulls right here, certainly the least dangerous ones, but nonetheless, Method U's already procced their first reaping, is waiting for the Golden Serpent to make its round around the pool, and has started. Zaylia, unfortunately, eats one of the Shadow Smashes to the face, will have that debuff now for a minute, 20% health reduction for a minute. That could actually be pretty deadly with that spit gold from the Golden Serpent, Nagura. Yeah,
definitely, especially if Zaylia keeps getting the spit debuff on him. Now, of course, it's RNG on who gets the debuff. It can be anyone except the tank. So if Zaylia gets a couple of them in a row, runs out of defensive cooldowns on top of just having this debuff on him, it might be a problem. But we see the first one going on Maris here, as you see this big gold just doing so much damage, and then having the Grievous on top too. But as we mentioned, as Sloop mentioned earlier on the desk, it's just, you know, you have to heal the spit gold anyway, and other than that, there's no AoE damage. So the Grievous is really not a big deal on this boss.
Yeah, not a big deal at all, as 70% is about to be hit here for Golden Serpent on Method EU side. 40K has now procced the Reaping, pulled it on top of the Golden Serpent as well. Of course, does not have that Bloodlust available. They used it at the same time Method EU did, but their strategy is just slower at the moment. I mean, straight up, they had to do the trash in two pulls. Method did it in one, so a fair bit behind here, about 23-24% separating the two teams right now, as 40K is trying to close that gap as quickly as possible, but it's going to be hard to get a huge amount of raw single target damage when the comps are the exact same and the players are already high caliber.
Yeah, it's also one thing to note about 40K's King's Rest strategy, because they were pretty much the only team that didn't adapt their strategy to the Method EU one. The 40K actually pulled the construct that is on a bridge by itself, making the pull very inefficient, and they did not do the Method EU thing where later on the bridge they will double CC something and then Shadow Melt to get the exact percentage, basically. So we'll see if 40K actually just changed their strategy now to, in my opinion, the better strategy, which is Method EU ones, but we're going to see later on what exactly they're going to do.
It would be neat to see any of the teams just innovating in general and coming up with something new, not exactly being forced to do so by these affixes. That, you know, there's no bolstering or anything of the sort or teaming that's going to force you to do something different than what we're used to seeing. So, and King's Rest not exactly the most open dungeon either, in terms of encouraging to have a crazy wild strats and having a various amount of trash that you can skip and pull and do what you want with. So pretty locked in that sense, but we'll see exactly how they opt to pull the trash, especially at the bridge after Machimba, the second boss. But that's a ways off right now as the Golden Serpent. It's 25% for Method EU. Both teams, of course, at 22% apiece. They have dealt with the exact same trash in the exact same room, as 40K hits 41% on there. So this 20-22% gap between the two teams being maintained throughout the entire fight.
Yeah, we actually see Zaylia here struggling a little bit to heal the Spit Gold debuff away, because he got the debuff on him. This is the third time in a row, so at this point he probably ran out of cooldowns. He does not have Bark Scream, probably doesn't have Iron Bark ready. As he drops really low, he's gonna die to the next tick here. Yep. Yeah, there's no way, not even Bear Farmer is gonna save him. They don't have a Battle Rest available. So they will be able, they most likely will be able to do this because the boss is already so low. But the Grievous and the Spit Gold on Gingy, they're probably out of defenses here, as we see the cheat death proccing and now just dropping so low, having the 4 stacks of Grievous, as we see the the Trinket blocking too. Now might just go down here.
This is actually going to be really close right now, just spiraling out of effect right now with the Grievous going up, but they managed to pull it off barely at the end. Immediately Fish Feast go down. Thank God for that cheat death trinket. Thank God for cheat death for Rogues. They managed to squeeze the kill out at 10% when Xaylia fell. He releases while the rest of the team eats up, drinks up, rebuffs, and heads over, but that was a close one for them. Fourty K looking nice and stable right now. Spit Gold debuff is out on Igloo, runs it to the side. He does have the cooldowns and the mana to deal with it. Method EU now heading into the Gauntlet area.
Okay, so Ali actually made a mistake here. As he was running back in, he actually pulled one of those mobs that fixate you, the one that with the Absorb Shield, and he did get feared. Now, hopefully he did get the Shadow Melt off and managed to de-aggro them. As you can see, the Colossus, the Guardians being pulled here, so he probably managed to get the aggro off. No, he didn't get the aggro off. As you see the minions of Zul coming in here. Now, on the other side, 40K, we actually see a death coming in from Lacelle.
And of course, those mobs were not all killed. We saw the fear coming out for Frag and Mears there on the left side for Method EU, but they did manage to recover from it. A bit of a hiccup, not the most clean run we've seen coming out of Method EU from this dungeon, but now does not, for the next 4.5 minutes or so, does not have the cheat death trinket available. Gingy's also vulnerable, does not have the cheat death. So Method EU a bit on the back foot here as 40K has moved over into the Gauntlet area as well. It looks like they haven't pulled the two Colossi at the beginning, the two Constructs. I'm not sure if they will, or if they have some other routing plan for the trash. Certainly a dangerous pull, but a very efficient one if you do it.
Most definitely. It's just super efficient to get this extra percentage here from the Guardians. And as we talked about earlier, this is just a dungeon where you don't have many options to you because it's just such a straightforward dungeon, and you don't have that much trash available to you to pick and choose what you're going to pull. This is why we see 40K actually do pulling those Guardians. They just pulled them a little bit later on.
Yeah, so the Guardians coming in for 40K. Now, these Guardians, at 50%, they'll increase their attack speed by 50% as well. So doing a fair bit of damage right now to the tank. But the thing to note here as well is that their frontal. Their frontal is really the most deadly thing. We've seen a lot of teams have issue with that. When the frontal goes down and you're in it, it will stun you and do a tremendous amount of damage. So you constantly have to spin around the constructs and stay in melee range. Just makes it a lot easier, of course, to dodge rather than being out at a distance. But a damage coming in here for Method EU as they've dealt with their second Reaping Wave. Xaylia finally heals up all of the residual Grievous from the players. Actually, excuse me, the second Reaping Wave comes in now as he heals up the residual Grievous from the players, and they get ready for the King and Queen combo with the Shadow Bolt and the Blade Storm.
Yeah, so the one problem we've seen with this combination here of the King and the Queen is the mind control that comes out, because none of these players are able to actually dispel the mind control, because there's no Blood Elves, of course, since they're all Alliance, and there's no other offensive dispel available to them with the classes they are running. So it can go bad, as we see the Mara is actually getting MC'd, and he might get hit by one of those things on the floor, but it should be alright. Mara should be surviving here, but yeah, that's one thing that can cause a death here. But usually it's easy to recover because it's on a damage dealer, and they're just very easy to just get rest back up.
Yeah, so Method EU just a bit ahead right now as they're dealing with the final King. I don't think they've dealt... Yeah, of course, they still have the Archer Queen on the side with the Bone Raptor. In just a moment, they'll be getting that spawned on top of them, whilst 40K is halfway through the third part of the Gauntlet, 3 of 4, that is. So they're just a bit behind. Lofus dips down to 7% from the Blade Storm. Just takes a fair bit of damage. Didn't move out quickly enough when King Timalji started doing his whirl. Players move well out of the way here for the Shadow Smashes and the resonant green swirly AoE from the Souls dying, the Lost Souls. 40K, 45% on the board. Method EU, 48%, and Method EU will get out of this Gauntlet first by the looks of it.
Yeah, so once Method EU gets out of this Gauntlet, they will most likely shroud this construct on the bridge area here that I talked about it earlier. 40K used to pull this construct actually and solo it basically, being kind of inefficient, while Method EU just skips the construct and does some more trash later on. So we'll see what Method EU does. On top of that, what we've seen in the past from Method EU is just kind of pulling all the blobs together and just pulling the construct on top too. So having very efficient pulls, and there's no affix at all that will prevent them from doing so, as it's Grievous and Skittish. So we're most likely going to see a huge pull here coming out from.
Yeah, Full Room coming in as now charges into the first of the Embalming Fluids, also known as the Ooey Gooey Rich and Chewies. Now the constructs on the side have not actually been pulled yet. It looks like they're just trying to get everything together and stabilize threat on the tank, and shouldn't be too hard with the 2 ticks of the trade, but they're actually leaving the constructs on the side this time, which in past we've seen them pull the constructs on top of them. So just playing it a bit safer, wanting, of course, likely to desync their cast of the Entomb, which will put the closest player into the closest tomb to the construct, and pulse shadow damage on the group until their fellow members have freed them. So Construct 1 is pulled. They're sufficiently desynced in the opinion of Method EU now as they combine the two constructs together and keep them between the two tombs, because it will always target the closest one just in case they end up synchronizing. Fourty K doing a more aggressive pull. They pull the construct the moment they enter the room, grab all of the embalming fluids, and head over to the construct on the far left side. So a bit of an advantage if Fourty K manages to pull this off, because they're killing everything together rather than killing the goose first and then the constructs.
Yeah, so Fourty K is switching up their strategy here. The last time we saw them, they played this dungeon a little bit safer, killed the construct on the bridge, and did this pull in kind of two instead of pulling everything at once. Now Fourty K is skipping the construct and pulling those two on top of all the blobs in this room. So definitely very aggressive here by Fourty K. I very like to see it that they're switching up their strategy and changing it around, making sure they're a little bit faster here and riskier too. So this is their point to really catch up to Method U, because they were behind. But if they pull this off properly, which it seems like they're doing, then they definitely have a chance to catch up here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, at this point in the dungeon, really the entirety of this dungeon lacks space for creativity with pulls. So the only really way to force yourself ahead of your opponent is through pure aggression of pulls. So we're going to have to see Fourty K really step it up. They know they're behind at this point. They know they're not that far behind, though, but it's just so hard to be aggressive with some of these pulls, especially the ones coming up on the bridge. I mean, you can't just pull 4 Berserkers at once. They're just going to kill you because of the bleed. So we'll have to see what Fourty K does, if anything, if they can kind of pull anything out of their hat and hope to achieve victory over Method EU here. But Method EU, both teams actually now have pulled Machimba indeed. Machimba 78% on the board for Method EU, 87 for 40 K, as both teams are handling the 60% reaping wave on top of the boss.
Yeah, so both of the teams do have Bloodlust available to them, but what we have seen from teams in the past is they're not using the Bloodlust on this boss. They rather save it for bigger trash pulls afterwards, where you just have 2 casters and 2 Berserkers on top of each other, just causing so much trouble. Even if it's not a 45 setting, they just seem to save their Bloodlust, as we see 40K actually using it.
They heard you. Well, I mean, I would say, at least from the cups we've seen, it's kind of 50-50 on where teams use this. You know, we've seen it obviously on Machimba, as you mentioned, and on the double Berserker pull coming up, they turn it into a double Berserker pull with the 2 Hex Priests and the 1 Witch Doctor as well. But we've also seen teams do that really aggressive trash pull Nagura, but be able to kill it without the Bloodlust. So it certainly makes it harder, but the trash kind of affixes are not too dangerous in this dungeon. We are in a tyrannical setting, so 40K trying to get a bit of extra damage out on Machimba, because this is really what's separating the two teams right now, is about that 10% between the two bosses.
Yeah, and 40K did use the Bloodlust, so they still didn't manage to catch up to Method EU, even though they did use it, while Method EU still has the Bloodlust available to them. So it's definitely Method EU that is ahead at this point, even though they struggled a lot on the first boss, had Talia die, almost had a full wipe coming in as they managed to recover at the very end. So Method EU in the driver's seat here, even though it's very close still, it's 4% boss HP approximately, so 40K still has a lot of chances to catch up here, especially in the third boss, as we've seen a lot of teams just straight up wipe on that boss.
And 40K has caught up a bit. They closed the gap to about 4-ish%. Method EU pulling just a bit ahead again, as their second round of cooldowns is likely to come up, or at least some minor cooldowns that they've clearly popped. 40K looking to follow suit as they reclose the gap down to 4 to 5%. Now getting crushed here by Machimba, who is actually just melees tanks very, very hard. Part of the reason why he has so many casts and different abilities that prevent him from meleeing the tank, so you get a bit of a breather and let your active mitigation catch up to you. Method EU downing Machimba not far from the entrance. As they head upstairs, will likely prepare their Bloodlust for the 2 Berserker pull, so it's going to be a total of 5 mob pull. Perhaps they go even more aggressive here. We'll see exactly what they have up their sleeve, but will be at least a 5 mob pull as the 2 Hex Priests line up here. Now we'll go in, Spell Reflect both of the first Spectral Bolt casts, grab the Berserker and the pack in the back as well. So the Beastmaster is coming along with the 2 Raptors, and here comes the Bloodlust. We do see Paralysis coming down from Mir, so they don't want to deal with that Beastmaster on top of all of this.
Okay, so there's 2 Berserkers, there's 2 casters, and there's 2 Raptors jumping around, casting their Hunting Leap. So on top of that, we have these Frost Shocks that not only do initial damage, but they also slow you down if they're not being dispelled. So this is a very dangerous pull, on top of having Raptors just jumping around, cleaving everywhere. You have Grievous everywhere, and you have this bleed from the Berserker that we see on 2-on-1 frag, almost downing him as he drops very low. Now they do have 2 dwarfs who can get rid of the Berserker debuff, and this is probably what they're gonna do. They want the rogues close to the Berserker to get the bleed and get rid of it, but one of them actually going on Celia here.
Yeah, so they will target the closest proximity target if the tank is out of range with that bleed. They managed to pull it off just as the Bloodlust goes away. The Raptors jumping around, jumping up, and getting down. Fourty K now moving over to the same Brute. With the Beastmaster, you know, they're actually kind of still neck and neck here. I mean, the Raptors are really inconsequential mobs. They're just kind of jump around. They don't do much, like you said. They don't have as much health as the Brute and the Beastmaster. Method EU has popped their Bloodlust, is dealing with the Brute and the Beastmaster. 40K is dealing with the same Brute and Beastmaster, but just with 2 Raptors. So, 40K managed to do a pretty dangerous pull as well with the triple caster and the double Berserker. So they're still pretty neck and neck, and I fear that this one might come down really to just the one extra death on the board for 40K in the end.
Yeah, probably. Both of those teams do the exact same amount of mobs in 2 pulls. They did it differently, but they did only need 2 pulls. Now 40K, this is kind of dangerous because we have the Brute casting this big AoE of denial basically, while the Beastmaster has a lot of casts that needs to be interrupted by stuns or knockbacks. But if the Brute casts this big area, then no one can interrupt it because they need to be close to cast their stuns. So if the Beastmaster is casting a poison, AoE Nova, or a deadly shot, then it might just be in a bad moment and it can't be interrupted, but 40K dealing with it very well as they finish off the Brute.
And finally, Fred gets out of that 4-stack of Grievous. Zayli having just a bit of issue getting him out of that while still tending to now needing to dispel a lot of the Reaping Soul cast coming in from their 4th Reaping Wave, something that 40K has now procced. But it looks like 40K actually just ran stealth and ran all the way to the boss, skipping the rest of the bridge at 83%. Here comes the Reaping on top of it. It looks like the Brute Reaping unfortunately did leak, but they're right on the boss while Method EU still chiseling away through the trash. So interesting strategy coming out of 40K here. Going to be curious to see what they decide to backtrack and kill, because obviously they're going to be missing 17% worth of trash. They'll need to get to around the 96 area before getting to Shadow of Azul. But nonetheless, Kula the Butcher, the most dangerous of the 3 of the Council boss, has been pulled, and you know, hopes to them, bless RNG for good RNG on that Sever Axe cast.
Yeah, so 40K has done this strategy before where they just kind of go to the boss first, but it's the same as Method EU, except they just do it afterwards. So it might just have something to do with their cooldowns lining up differently, because this pull that Method EU just did, 40K is going to do it afterwards. And you don't, there's no advantage to either of them, because you have to do the backtracking anyway, because you just go to the boss and you have to go back. So there's no advantage or disadvantage for either of them. It just depends on your cooldowns, basically, when you have them ready and when you don't. Now 40K is on the boss here on Kula, which is the most dangerous out of all of those council bosses, basically, because of this Severing Axe. But we saw it going on Wolf Disco, the very first one, and there was no problem to heal it away. Now there's only going to be one more for 40K's side, and as long as they have cooldowns available, it isn't Lacelle here, it shouldn't be a problem for Igloo here.
Yeah, so a fair bit of damage coming in, but we can see a mass absorb going on Lacelle right now on that player frame. 15% on Kula for 40K. They're about to down it and get ready to get on the second boss, Zenazal, if I'm not mistaken, whilst Kula at 43% for Method EU. They started at about 60% down from 40K and have caught up a fair bit. They've closed the gap by about 15-20%. Likely the other cooldowns ready at the start of the pull here. 40K getting right on Zenazal as he spawns here, frequently casting those lightning bolts on the tank, so you want to have some kind of a rotation of interrupts, but also take advantage of the spell reflect from the warrior. Rentari down to 50%, having a bit of struggle getting out of that 4-stack of Grievous, but shouldn't be too much struggle for Igloo.
Now, unfortunately, 40K did get a 3rd Severing Axe and the 2nd one on Lacelle, so 2 in a row on Lacelle. This is the most dangerous part, because you can, if you get 2 Severing Axes in a row, at some point you just run out of defensive cooldowns, right? And without any defensive, it's going to be so much harder for the healer to heal the damage away. Now, a very interesting thing to note about this council fight is that if you have Shadow Melt available to you or Vanish, you can actually get out of boss combat in between two bosses. So if you kill one boss before the second one spawns, you can use your Vanish or Shadow Melt, and you get out of boss combat, meaning all of your debuffs will be dropped. So if you have a Severing Axe on you right before Kula dies, you can wait until Kula is dead, use your Shadow Melt or Vanish, and get rid of the debuff completely. Yeah,
certainly a nice trick and advantage for Night Elves there. Zenazal now down to 45% for 40K, 68% for Method EU, as they 69%, excuse me, as they run around grabbing the rest of the totems. Now, the most dangerous totem, of course, is that explosive one. You want to make sure you kill it before the cast goes off and kills your entire team. After which, kill the Earth Wall one as quickly as possible, just so you don't have spam shields on the boss, which just really takes away a lot of your damage. The remaining ones, especially in an all melee group, are pretty inconsequential, which is why you see them refocus the boss and just kind of cleave it down a bit on the boss. Now, a lot of the cleave doesn't work, so there is a bit of switch of single target for the members of the team as they get near it, but no concern for them as Zen is all down to 10% for 40K, getting ready to get on that last boss as they slowly kite back to the Torrent totem, excuse me.
Yeah, so they want to finish off those totems before they're on the last boss because they don't disappear on their own. Usually we see the healers just kind of finishing them off in cat form, as you see Igloo just working on this Thunder Totem. Now the Thunder Totem in a full melee group is not a big deal, right? Because it just interrupts your cast. And if you have a full melee group, you don't have a lot of cast. So definitely not a huge problem for them. And Akali, the last boss here that is active, really not a huge deal either, especially if you don't have something like Quaking. Now the only thing you have to deal with is this charge that we've seen coming in here, the spell through from Akali, which will target a random player and then it will go through and it will split damage depending on how many people it hit. Now what they usually do if it goes in a rogue, he will just vanish at the very end, because then he will just target another player and cast the same ability again and just kind of do nothing while casting.
Yeah, certainly you want to keep the boss as stationary as possible, so a bit of bad luck coming out of Akali here for 40K, as there's a taunt on them just to kind of keep it centered in the room as much as possible. If that debilitating backhand does connect with the tank, it is a substantial armor loss for them and they take immense amounts of damage, which is why you see them kiting around. So not very lucky for Rentari, unfortunately. There they have about a 25-ish% chance to dodge or parry combined that attack, and it just hasn't worked out 3 times in a row now. So Akali starts running away, and it's obviously a damage loss. The melee gets to stick on it, but the prot warrior, which we know can deal an enormous amount of damage, has to run around in circles. Method EU, not sure if they've had a bit more luck with that, but they certainly closed the gap between the bosses. There was about a 60% difference between the first boss, and now we're down to only about 22-23%. So Method EU closing the gap nicely. 40K now has to rush away quickly, heal up the rest of this Grievous that's plaguing their team, and still do a bunch of trash, while Method EU gets to just stealth and go straight to Shadow of Azul in 9%.
Yeah, Method EU not that far behind on the boss at all. So I do think it's definitely Method EU who are ahead here, because this trash that 40K has to kill definitely takes a lot longer than these couple of seconds that divided those 2 teams between the boss kill. So 40K, you can see doing the same trash pull that we've seen come out of from Method EU earlier. Well, Method EU can just go through, they will pull the mini boss, and the mini boss, we've talked about before that how dangerous it is really, but it's not a fortified setting, so the mini boss is not doing more damage, and these affixes don't really make it more difficult as long as you make sure that the Grievous doesn't stack up too far.
Yeah, no, it's just a bit too slow here from 40K. I think they still have to kill the 3-pack as well, yes indeed, as Rentari charges off to the left and grabs the remaining Berserker / Witch Doctor / Hexpriest cast. Method EU already working on Shadow of Azul, about 60% left on him. Pure magic damage coming out of him in the form of Shadow onto the tank, so a lot of damage intake. There needs to be a lot of spam of Ignore Pain from that prot warrior, wanting to make sure to rotate defensives as much as possible and help Zelia out to let him get some DPS in, but certainly one of the most dangerous mini bosses. No worry if enraged like we saw last week here though, which to be honest wouldn't be that much a concern anyway, because we do have Resto Dudes present in both groups. 40K now looking to finish up the rest of their trash and move over to Shadow of Azul. At this point, it's going to take, frankly, a wipe from Method EU for them to lose. They're just starting to widen that gap too much, and they're at the last boss now.
I think the one thing that is actually kind of difficult with Grievous and his mini boss is that you have this AoE ability that drops everyone a little bit low. Now, usually this AoE ability is not going to kill anyone, so the healer doesn't have to heal anyone but the tank. He can just spam your regrowth into the tank, make sure he survives. But as soon as you have Grievous, you need to deal with the Grievous stacks. So you have to heal the group on top of healing the tank. So that's the only thing that makes it a little bit more difficult. But Method EU, no problem at all, as they're engaging King Dazar here. On top of a little bit of the reaping, they probably shadow melted the rest of them away. So they only have to deal with some of them that were too close and they couldn't shadow melt away. But other than that, King Dazar, not usually a boss where we see a lot of webs.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they on purpose didn't shadow meld or they tried to and failed, because those mobs are very far. I mean, they're on the bridge, so somebody must have really screwed up or canceled it too early, or they just did it on purpose just so they can cleave it on top of the boss, or whatever reason they might have. Nonetheless, 80% phase has been reached on King Dazar now as Raban joins the fight. The Raptor that, similar to the ones we saw in Trash, just kind of grabs a certain direction, jumps to a player, and hunting leaps in one direction. Really not dangerous at all. You just sidestep it and help cleave on top of the boss, which is why you see them not focusing it at all. The most dangerous one that you're going to see is at 60% when the second mounted raptor comes out. All damage is redirected to that raptor from King Dazar, and it will occasionally fear everyone for 2 seconds. So that's usually when teams save their cooldowns and Bloodlust for. We'll see that momentarily for Method EU here, as King Dazar is now at 61%. Fourty K has dealt with, finally, the Shadow of Zul, dealt with their 100% reaping. I'm not sure if they Shadow Metaled it off. We'll see in a moment, but they're getting ready to pull Dazar just right now.
Yeah, so Method EU popping their Bloodlust, as you said, once Zella spawned, once the boss mounted on the raptor, and there's just so many things going on at the very same time. They want to make sure that they don't have any problems here. They want to make sure that Zella dies as fast as possible to reduce the amount of AoE fears coming in. But yeah, one thing to note about Method EU here is that they really didn't change up their strategy at all for King's Rest, except this one pull that we've seen after the second boss, where they just pulled the 2 raptors on top of the double Berserker pull. But again, we mentioned earlier that this dungeon doesn't really have a lot of room to change up your strategies that much. So definitely not too surprising to not see something completely crazy coming out of Method EU here, as there's just not much room to even do that kind of stuff in this dungeon.
Entering 40% now, Method EU on the last phase of King Dazar here, as the traps are going to start falling down around the room in one of the 2 patterns, either the checkers or the clockwise pattern. We're starting with the clockwise one, as we can see here. Players safely already at the Golden River in the middle. Really no danger, especially on that trap affix. So they just continue to do the same thing they did in phase 1 on this boss, chisel him down. 30% on King Dazar right now, as Mears jumps out of the group with that quaking leap, making sure that the group does not take too much damage, nor does he, as he transcends right back in. King Dazar 25% on the board.
Yeah, so Zella is pretty barely any mana left at this point, but this boss, we talked about it, as long as you don't get hit by those tornadoes, the slicing maelstorms that we can see going around here, then there's really not that much damage on the group at all. And I think Method EU is just one of those teams that really make sure to dodge those tornadoes as much as possible. We've seen a lot of other groups struggle with the tornadoes, get hit by it, and the dot that it leaves behind actually requires a lot of healing. And just as I said that, now gets hit. They hurt me again. Now
gets hit, and unfortunately the final nail in the coffin for 40K. Lozelle does go down. They use the battle res on him, but that's an extra 5 seconds on the board, plus whatever damage, maybe even cooldowns that he had active. King Dazar now at 6% for Method EU, as they look to take the first game here from 40K in what was definitely a pretty close fight between the 2 teams. I mean, it was looking really solid for 40K, but, you know, I'm sure Saras will talk about this, Nagura, but everything was just
KF on MOTHERLOAD.
You guys heard it here. Just levitate over Sanguine forehead. Both teams right away, Shadow Meld, mass stealthing over to what is usually the center part of the large pool that comes in from most teams, as they go into this kind of little hut here, making sure to line of sight a lot of the mobs that would otherwise have some range cast. Rentari dipping quite low off the bat, and Igloo getting charged by one of the thugs that has already inhaled vapor. So a lot of damage that comes in on the group. We talk about this every week. A lot of the most dangerous part of the trash here isn't necessarily just on the tank and the Sanguine that we mentioned, but just the residual damage on the rest of the group that's inevitable.
Yeah, there's just so many casts that need so much control that you need on those thugs, for example, who charge around that you can't avoid. Now you need to dispel the enrage on the thugs, and you have interrupts that you need on the vendors, on the assassins, and on top of that, just the peacekeepers and all the other mobs just doing so much damage to the tank and quaking on top of it too. So we see the peacekeepers just kind of being a full HP still, as some of them obviously come later as the mech jockeys need to walk to them, they need to activate them, and then they slowly walk over, as the peacekeepers just walk very slowly, which is not very nice, especially when you have Sanguine.
No, not at all. Both teams popping Bloodlust within 1 second of each other, doing similar pulls, as more and more Peacekeepers join the parade on either side of the screen right now. We're going to just be in a match here of RNG of how many Peacekeepers decide to sit in Sanguine from these 2 teams. Now, you know, we joke a lot about Sanguine, but Sanguine is controllable within reason, Nigger. I mean, Sanguine drops when a mob dies, it will drop a pool under it. So you can control where these mobs die, you can control where you pre-position these Peacekeepers. So there is certainly a lot of choice involved in how often these Peacekeepers get the Sanguine under them.
Yeah, the problem is the different kinds of HP, really. The thugs have more HP than the vendors and the assassins. So you want to, of course, control the non-Peacekeeper mobs, because the Peacekeeper mobs, they're not typhoonable, they're not knockable, they're not stunnable. You can't do anything to them CC-wise. And they also just cast a lot on standstill. So you want to make sure you deal with the other mobs when they die. So when the thug dies and the assassins die, you want to make sure they don't die close to Peacekeepers. Now the problem is that they have different kinds of HP. So, and you only have that many Ring of Pieces and that many Typhoons to knock them away. So once the Assassins are low, you want to knock those, but then the Thugs are not going to die because they have more HP. And then you need another knock for when the Thugs die. So that's pretty much the biggest problem with this Sanguine coming in, just the control really. But you do have 2 taunts available as well. You have the Windwalker taunt and you do have the Druid taunt to make sure in case something, a mob is about to die and you don't have any displacement ready, then you can still just taunt them away.
Oh, so much damage coming in on Rentaro right now. 36 stacks of those Reaping Souls goes right down. No Dispel coming in from Igloo because there was some residual stacks on other members of the team. Lofus procs that cheat death as well. Battle Res comes up immediately, gets Rentari up, not going to be available again. Lofus dipping quite low. Here comes the Quaking, manages to sneak away from that death even though cheat death was not available, and a charge coming in here on Igloo as he's struggling to heal the rest of the team up that they've combined with a lot of the trash and the first Reaping Wave here. Huge amounts of damage coming in. His Disco dips quite low as well, Azel dipping low, and just so much healing required for Igloo as his Tranquility is cut short. He needed to move out of the green swirlies coming out of the Lost Soul, so still a fair bit behind on damage, while Method EU now 29%. Gingy unfortunately got hit by several of the green swirlies as well, has a 4 stack of the debuff from the Lost Souls. That's 40% decreased damage and healing done, procced his cheat death, and does not have his cloak available.
Yeah, so Fourty K making a huge mistake here. Not only the tank going down, but also an assassin casting his poison that didn't get interrupted. Once the assassin casts a poison and is not interrupted, he will gain a buff on himself, and all the melee attacks plus the Fan of Knives that he's doing will apply poison stacks to everyone. Now the whole group pretty much had 3 of the poison stacks, and Eagle just had to stand there, heal the poison away because of course he can't dispel everybody, and then he just did 50k HPS trying to keep the group alive. Thankfully they didn't have any other deaths except Rentari going down on a pool, and they did manage to recover. But this is one thing where you can see how difficult it is to do those kind of pulls as a tank, especially in MOTHERLOAD at the start here, because you have those laborers who just kind of throw wrenches at you that do a lot of damage, and then on top of that you just have to gather all the mobs around, and you have a limited amount of defensives when you're gathering the mobs before you even have any raids or anything. So you definitely want to make sure you have, I don't know, Iron Bark or anything else ready on the pull to make sure you just survive those kind of pulls.
Thug Charge going out and doing a fair bit of damage to Igloo there as he gets the charge out on him while he's just trying to heal. Now, these Adult Thugs do cast Inhale Vapor, which increases the damage by 50% if I'm not mistaken for physical, so that combined with the charge on a healer could actually be quite lethal if it's timed improperly, or unluckily rather, with the Quaking. Don't forget, we are still on that Quaking affix. Every 20 seconds or so, you'll pulse for 20% of your max HP around you, interrupting spellcasting and clipping any nearby party members, so that can certainly line up quite badly sometimes. Method EU about to proc their second Reaping Wave here as they hit 43%. Fourty K following suit as well. 39% on the board, about to hit their second Reaping Wave. Teams once again quite neck and neck, just like we saw in King's Rest, but Fourty K has that death on the board.
Yeah, so both teams, of course, did use the Bloodlust on the first pull, which we see from most of the teams except Abrakeydabra, who's kind of playing the strategy of just wasting one whole Bloodlust, which we don't see from those 2 teams going out. Now, Method EU, 5 minutes on their Bloodlust. I assume they're just going to wait for the cooldown to go off and then use the Bloodlust on the boss, as we've seen from them before. Now, one thing to note as well, that none of those teams, again, are playing DK. We see Lofus actually going down as he didn't have cheat death available on 40K's side, and we see a lot of casts going through as you have 1 death, no battle res available to you, and as soon as you have a death, you just fall apart because you're missing interrupts, you're missing control, and then more people are gonna die. So let's see if they can recover here.
Yeah, no, a lot of Ice Spritzers going out. One of the channeled casts, of course, from the refreshment vendors. If those reach completion, they will actually freeze the player they're on, along with, if they don't kill them first. Rentari goes down here. No battle res available for about 4 minutes, so the group is gonna have to try and kill everything else. Vendor gets interrupted there via paralysis from Lizelle, but it's not enough. There was damage taking on it, so it breaks it right out. There was damage, cleave damage going on it, so it breaks it right out, starts casting on the mobs again, and they're just doing whatever they can to salvage the rest of this pull, while Rentari has already released, but this trash they skipped at the beginning of the dungeon, so likely need to use that Shadow Meld to even get back to them safely. Frag just having a bit of damage, dip him low there, but nothing Zele can handle as another Quaking Pulse hits for them. 54% on the board, but Rentari goes down again. On his way back is just not enough, and 40K finds themselves in a rather dismal situation right now.
They might be able, no, okay, so he did release deaths here. We also see deaths coming in from Method U on the other side, as we see both Maris and Gingy go down. Now, the Gingy released and they got a battle rest onto Maris here, as Gingy can stealth back. Frag does not have cheap death available to him, as he drops very low too. And as I said, as soon as you have deaths here, then you lose the control, basically. You lose interrupts. You can't deal with the vendors anymore. You can't deal with the assassins anymore. So definitely very difficult for them to finish off this pull, but there's only 3 mobs left, so they should be able to recover here.
In typical Method EU fashion, we were just talking about this during the break. They seem to have this luck aura that if things start to spiral out of control, it always happens just barely at the end of the situation, so they can still recover with the 3 or 4 members they have left, and that's exactly what happens here, unlike on the side of Fourty K, where things started going out of control a bit too early, and it cost them a fair few lives and time lost. Method EU now about to proc their 6th Reaping Wave, full strength again with the team as we get another Quaking Pulse. Neither rogue, of course, has that cheat death available to them, so fairly vulnerable for a while. I believe the tanks do have their Blunt Somebody's Bargain trinkets available, so something, perhaps some silver lining to this situation. They got a bit out of hand. 40K now, 53%, doing a fairly large pull here, getting ready to proc their 3rd Reaping Wave, but they're just slowly falling further and farther behind.
Yeah, Resto Igloo getting hit by those Vax here. Oh, we see Sally actually dying. So, of course, they don't have a battle rest to get Sally back up. He does have stealth available. So he's releasing. He can stealth back to them. But I'm not sure if they're going to survive until Sally is back. As Frag goes down without cheap death available, Mirror's being very low too. All they have to do now is kite. They can't get hit by any of those mobs as you see them just running. And Gingy dying too. This could be a disaster for Method EU.
This is a huge disaster. It's just Mirrors and now alive, and now is starting to accrue those Reaping Soul takes on him. Nobody's there to dispel him. Finally, Zelia gets back in range and starts healing them up as the rest of them starts rushing in, trying to heal them up. Zelia gets charged immediately. The moment he gets back, Frag goes down to 12% right away, doesn't have cheat death available, and finally gets killed yet again as Zelia is struggling to heal now and dispel him with this Reaping Pack that just won't die because the DPS are all still barely running back. Finally, Gingy and Mirrors back in action as 40K looking to capitalize on this situation. 55% on the board, about to proc their 3rd Reaping Wave right now. Method EU seems to have finally stabilized, or have they, as Mirrors goes down to 17%. Gingy dips low again, another Quaking Pulse finishes Mirrors off right now. Gingy goes down as well, now running for his life, sub 10%. This is a disaster, Nagura.
I'm not sure if they should just reset the pull at this point. Zelia died again because not all of the DPS were there. So the Spritzer was casted on Zelia. No one interrupted it because they didn't have it available to them. And Zelia going down again, meaning that it's just like going out of control again as soon as you have a healer dead. And Zelia just coming back and dropping so low again. They're just losing so many deaths as Maris dies. It's just the same as we saw the last time in the R&D wing, where they just had a wipe and they just kept releasing, going back in, kept dying, releasing, dying, releasing. It just cost them so much time. Maybe they should have just made the call of resetting, just shadow melting it off instead of losing 10 deaths here.
It's such a hard call to make because the group is so low, but the Peacekeeper now gets a bit of healing on it. He rises back up to 40%. And the perfection of the group unraveling at the seams now early on in this dungeon. You could see why there are so many unfriendly, to put it lightly, tweets from the group about this sanguine Motherload situation. Certainly a very tough dungeon. You got to micromanage a lot, and it's not going in the favor of Method EU here. Mirrors decides to just kind of eat some dirt for a while, doesn't want to release, probably has no way to get packed past the mobs that they skipped right now, so has to stay dead as Gingy goes down as well. It looks like they're just going to call for the full team wipe likely. Now is dead. Zelia should be following suit shortly, unless he managed to go and, oh no, now's in the corner there. Zelia might have gotten away with perhaps a Shadow Meld, and he's planning to res the rest of the team. We'll see what they do, but huge amounts of time lost here as they're 72%. 40K slowly and surely has clawed their way back up, surpassed them in trash at 73%, and now have 8 deaths in favor of them.
Yeah, 40K definitely it's their way to go back into this game, because let's be honest here, 4 deaths versus 13 deaths, that's a huge amount of difference. And now 40K managed to catch up on percentage too. At this point, 40K just have to play clean and finish off the dungeon, and they most likely won because I mean, the 13 deaths is just a huge time difference. As you see, 40K just finishing off this trash packs here, as you see the Ring of Peace coming in for control, and they will proc the 80% Reaping Wave once they finish off this.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking better and better for 40K. You know, it's ironic, we were just commenting on how slowly Method EU's pulling ahead, but one pull is all it took, and their luck, or I suppose, didn't work this time because things started going sour quite early into the pull, and at that point they just couldn't recover it with the few members they had left. Another quick Quaking coming in for Method EU right now. Both rogues still not having that cheat death available, of course, just because of the flurry of issues that they had, as 40K looking to further capitalize on the issue. 77% on the board. They will be proccing their 4th Reaping Wave here momentarily. Both teams now have their Bloodlust available. This is usually a cue for the teams, Nagura, to start getting over to the first boss, which is what we see Fourty K doing, and making use of the second Bloodlust.
Yeah, so they actually didn't proc their Reaping Wave. I'm not sure. This was probably a mistake, I assume, because there's just no reason not to pull the Reaping Wave on top of the boss, especially if you have Bloodlust available to you. So I feel like they just had one of the mobs not being pulled properly, or didn't get a count for one of the jockeys that jumps into the Peacekeepers, because the jockeys actually give percentage when you kill a Peacekeeper, but only if you tag them beforehand. If you only Ring of Peace them, and then they go into the Peacekeeper without getting tagged in any way, then you actually don't get the percentage for it, and that might just be the one thing they're missing here, as we see a Quaking Plus, and we come out, and the whole group just drops so low.
Oh, really, really scary. You know, this reminds me of some of the issues that we've seen on with situations like Crag Mod Tantrum, for instance, combined with Quaking. We've seen a lot of teams have issues with that. The static pulse that comes out of this boss hits so hard already because we're in a tyrannical setting on 19. A poorly timed Quaking can spell disaster for the group, especially if the tank's movement is bad and you accidentally get some of the coins absorbed with the coin magnet here that the boss is casting. We'd see for 40 K right now. So you want to make sure that there's no extra sources of damage. You don't miss a single foot bomb going into the boss.
Yeah, we see MOTHERLOAD, of course, also are on the boss now. They're not using their Bloodlust here, which could only mean that they're going to do a huge pull after this boss. The only other team we've seen them that do was Team D, as far as I'm aware, that did do a huge pull right after this boss, just pulling a lot of this trash together, using Bloodlust and making sure they nuke everything down at the same time. We've seen teams wipe to that pull too, though, so we'll see how it goes for MOTHERLOAD after this boss. Well, 40K did use the Bloodlust for the boss, of course, and that's why they're also ahead in boss percentage here.
Gingy's Shadow Smash debuff finally fading off. That 1 minute debuff for getting hit by a Lost Soul unfortunately did manage to get clipped by their fourth Reaping Wave, but fortunately no death for them, no further death for them for MOTHERLOAD as they kite out of the last pile of coins coming down. 35% now on coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, the first boss of the dungeon for MOTHERLOAD. 20% for 40K, of course. They are a bit ahead as they pulled the boss ahead of time, but 40K now hasn't dealt with their fourth Reaping Wave, something that Nagura mentioned earlier, possibly a mistake on their part. MOTHERLOAD has, so a bit of advantage in that sense, but there's also a 9 death difference for MOTHERLOAD to overcome by the end of the dungeon.
Yeah, let's see what 40K is doing now as they killed off the first boss here. I don't know if they have to backtrack to get the X percentage, but doesn't seem like they're doing it. They're going for, and they're actually seeing some of the mobs, I believe, and pull the rest of them. They don't want to pull all the mobs together. So we see one Sepper and one Mine Red actually being succeeded.
They just pulled one mob to proc their Reaping, and perhaps they're waiting for their cooldowns to come up so that they grab their fourth Reaping Wave that we usually typically see teams do with that first boss that we just mentioned, and then maybe they're going to combine this with a massive trash pull. So this could be really scary, for lack of a better term. We'll see in just a moment what they opt to do. They could have also just shadow melded the entire pull off because it was so far away from them. So it might have been purposeful that they actually skipped the fourth Reaping Wave.
Yeah, we see MOTHERLOAD actually doing a huge pull here. As I mentioned before, they are using their Bloodlust, but they actually didn't pull all of them. I kind of assumed that if they use their Bloodlust, they also want to pull all the trash here that they needed, because there's a patrol that is not being pulled and also the trash on top. Now, it's still a huge pull, and they're all dropping very low, as you can see, but they do have to succeed to come in from the Ring of Peace, and of course, they also need to deal with the Sanguine properly to make sure they have the Typhoon and the Ring of Peace to not have the mobs heal.
I'm just squirming around here watching 40K right now. They did not shadow meld the fourth Reaping Wave. They've waited for him to come in, and then they pulled it along with an equally large pull to MOTHERLOAD, perhaps slightly smaller, and everybody was just dipping so low. You want to get, of course, those Rock Lances interrupted. So many Rock Lances going out, Earth Shields going out as well. Huge amount of stacks coming on Rentari from those Risen Souls, but they do manage to pull it off. No casualties on their part. Still only 85% on the board, so certainly did not pull as much trash as MOTHERLOAD either. So they're a bit behind in the trash department, but MOTHERLOAD 93% now, backtracking out of those Sapper explosions, and then looking to mass stealth and head up straight to Azeroth, the second boss.
Yeah, so MOTHERLOAD actually ahead now when it comes to time in the dungeon, if you don't think about the difference in death seconds that they lost, right? So this can be a very, very close match between those two, because MOTHERLOAD is ahead, but the 45 seconds difference means so much. 45 seconds is such a long time that 40K has to catch up on them, as MOTHERLOAD used their Shroud to skip to the next boss, Azeroth here, and we can see the double fixed coming onto Celia and Gingy here, which you know, it's good to have it on a healer, because the healer can actually kite without losing damage, but on a rogue, it's not what you'd like to see.
And it's a funny method to you now at 97% trash, so they're very close to completing their trash. They only have to do a very small pull down in the R&D wing. I guess they decided not to go with the pull that they did last time in here in the MOTHERLOAD, which was disastrous and kind of led to that 19 chain wiping situation that they had. So they deemed it was not worthy of their strategy as Fourty K follows suit with 97%. Mass stealths up the hill and will be momentarily getting started on Azrock as well. Pretty big difference between Bloodlust usage on the two teams, but at this point, I think they're both going to end up using it on that final boss.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure if Method U will even have it ready for the final boss, because 7 minute 40 is a long time. I don't think they even need this amount of time to finish up the whole dungeon. So that might be also not only 45 seconds difference when it comes to deaths, but also Bloodlust versus no Bloodlust on the last boss. That can definitely make it or break it, as Method U is on 50% on Azrock and 40K just 80%. Now, 30% difference is quite a lot on a tyrannical setting, because these bosses just have so much HP, but still, I think this game is really close.
It is definitely quite close, as the Earth Ragers are chasing the rest of the melee on 40K. They haven't dealt with the initial 4 Earth Ragers, putting that significant bleed on you, and you need to kite them away, otherwise you'll just get too much damage for the healer to deal with. So you use a fair bit of damage if you don't kite it properly around Azrock, as you can see on the side of 40K here. Method EU still maintaining about that 30-ish% gap between the two teams on the boss, as 2 more Stone Furies are on the side right now. That they've pulled down. Those are the ones they pulled down from the Gauntlet, if I'm not mistaken. So those are the ones that they're using to their advantage in order to proc their 5th Reaping. Now, they have to be careful not to proc it right under the boss. There's Sanguine, of course. Last thing you need is to heal up a tyrannical boss.
Yeah, so that's definitely very smart and efficient by Method U to pull those 2 Stone Furies on top of the boss. We've seen them do this before, where they don't pull the mini-boss like Method NA does, but they just kind of go around the mini-boss and pull those 2 Stone Furies on top. Now, as you said, they want to kill them after the boss died to make sure they don't heal. And 40K, I'm not sure what they're gonna do, because they're also missing 3%. So it would also be beneficial for them if they would do the same thing. As we can see, some of the mobs come in, but they didn't pull the Stone Furies. They actually got the smaller ones, which don't give a lot of...
Oh my god, that Sanguine might heal the boss. It's actually so close. Okay. Oh my god, I saw that little Shalebiter come in, and that was really, really dangerous. But 40K managed just to slip away and not get a single tick of the Sanguine on Azrock. Now they're still grabbing as much as they can. Here come the 2 Stone Furies. That indeed will be the last 100% that they need, same as Method EU did. Method EU opting not to use the side card here, but a lot of damage coming on Rentari as well, as the mini-boss comes in. Absolute disaster situation here. Battle res goes up, but everything is everywhere in terms of aggro. There's no way they're recovering from this. Wolf Disco goes down, Igloo goes down, Lizelle follows suit. Lophus about to go down unless he manages to stealth out of this situation. They're looking to salvage what they can, but it's just not enough with the amount of extra trash that they accidentally pulled on top of it. Full team wipe for 40K. This match has now been handed to Method EU on a platter. Let's see if they can take advantage of it and make up for their just horrible start to the dungeon earlier.
There was a huge mistake coming in by 40K. They wanted to do the same thing as Method U did, but without pulling those smaller mobs that are around those bigger mobs, as we can see, the bigger elementals, as Method U pulled them. Now, there's a certain way to do this pull without pulling the rest of the trash, but definitely Igloo from 40K messed it up, and he did something wrong, because not only did he pull the smaller mobs with the bigger elementals, but he also was in such a position that the mobs walked through the mini-boss trash and pulled the mini-boss trash on top too. Now, this, even if the Rentari wouldn't have died, they still would have had a full team wipe coming in, because they just mispulled this mini-boss trash back, which is something they definitely don't want to pull on top. So, again, Method EU, just 13 deaths, they're probably going to win this dungeon. Yeah,
I mean, they're probably going to win this dungeon. Rick's at 60%. It's just back-to-back boss now. These bosses certainly can pack a punch in this tyrannical setting, but let's be honest, I mean, the chances of you fully wiping, especially to the 3rd boss, is quite low when you're playing with some of these high-caliber teams. Rick's at 50% on the board now. Method EU doing well to rotate for those chemical burns between, of course, immunities, Spell Reflex, and the Dispel from Zayli as well. It's been no problem for them as they well clear the platform with that Propellant Blast. 40K has to restart on the entire Azrock encounter after wiping at, I think it was 15, 16% on a very, very tanky, high health tyrannical boss. So they are just out of it for the running, quite frankly, at this point, unless Method EU just has a full team wipe.
I mean, let's be honest, they had a couple of full team wipes before in MOTHERLOAD, sorry. So things can definitely happen, but yeah, it's just such a huge difference now. They're about to kill a boss, so they're going to be one full boss ahead compared to 40K. So even though it's only 15 seconds difference at this point. It was 45 seconds before, but now we have 13 deaths versus 10 deaths. So at this point, not even the deaths are going to make such a huge difference anymore between those two teams. And the Bloodlust might even be ready for Method U at the very end of the last boss fight too. So it's definitely Method U who are ahead at this point, even with those huge amount of deaths coming in. As Rixa is about to go down, and all they have to do is to stealth to the last boss, Shadow Melt all the aggro away from the trash that they're getting all the way there, and then all they have to do is kill a boss and they're done.
Yeah, I mean, Rick's at 0% right now. Just kill the boss for it, right, Nigra?
Yeah.
The mass stealth comes in from them. Let's see if they can kind of clean sweep through. We saw a couple of the East teams actually manage to somehow snake through this entire area of trash without getting spotted by any of the true sights from the large mechs. We'll see if Method could follow suit. If they don't, frankly, it's really not a big deal because they have Shadow Melt anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's more of just a fun thing to see if they can pull off. And they don't, as the entire trash follows them and chases them. They run upstairs, get ready with that Shadow Melt, and will be pulling Mogul Razdunk here in just a moment, the fourth and final boss of the dungeon. 40K still chiseling away at Azarok right now, 10% on the board for them. And then they need to go down. They need to still deal with their fifth Reaping Wave. They need to get to Rixa, kill Rixa, and finally get to Mogul to even catch up to Method U. And 15 seconds in death difference, certainly not enough time for that.
Yeah, I think the only way Method U can still lose this dungeon is if Xaylia somehow dies on this boss, because as we all know, Xaylia, the only one with the battle rest here available to him. Even though they do have two available, if Xaylia dies, it's going to be over and they will have to reset the boss fight. And if it happens at somewhat at the end of the boss and they're not going to be able to finish it off without Xaylia, then that's going to be big trouble. But they do have probably Bloodlust available in the second phase. Yes, now actually drops very low. They all got hit by the Gatling gun here and almost dying. They definitely have to play cleaner than that if they want to finish this boss.
Yeah, I mean, Frag procs his cheat death as well, so he's not going to have that available now. 69% on Mogul Razdunk as the boom bots kind of reposition around the room in this 2x3 grid room, covering one column and one row of the area as well. Now moving up, we see Mogul Razdunk at 65%. They move around these boom bots, making sure that they don't get clipped, which is the world markers are, of course, their indicator that they're commuting likely in their team comms as to where the safe spot is for now to move. Now, this boss is a very, very big pain in the butt to move. Constantly cast, huge melee hitbox. Sometimes you need to very well pre-move ahead of time and predict where those boom bots are going in order to stay in those safe lanes. 40K has now moved down to Rixa Flux Flames platform, if I'm not mistaken, and are getting ready to pull that boss dealt, or rather skipped their fifth Reaping Wave already.
Yeah, so the one annoying thing here is quaking, of course, because when the Gatling gun comes out, you want to make sure that you kind of stack up and go around the boss. But if you get quaking, you want to spread out at the very same time. So that's definitely an annoyance that you don't want to deal with. And then the intermission phase here, there's a lot of AoE damage whenever the boss goes down. Now, if you get the quaking in an unlucky moment and you get the AoE plus quaking at the same time, that could also cause trouble.
It could cause a lot of trouble, but they're well dealing with the Sky Scorchers coming down right now, making sure to intercept any of those Heart Seekers. A bit of dip low damage here from the crash coming down from Mogul, but nothing that they can't handle. Azalea runs over to the second pillar that they need to crash down upon in order to release the boss from this immunity shell, essentially, and return back to the first phase.
Very unfortunate that it wasn't a healer here. Had to interrupt the tranquility here. You hate to see that as a Rasta Druid if you just want to cast your heal and you just gotta move. Now, Method U, of course, has their Bloodlust available here in their second phase and their Puppet. They want to melt the boss as fast as possible here to make sure that they're winning the series, basically. As 40K is still on Rixa, they're just so far behind at this point. Not even a death difference is gonna make or break it at this point. Method U, all they have to do is finish off this dungeon, finish off this boss really without having any deaths. But all of them actually dropping kind of low. I do believe it was a missile that hit the melee here. So Sally definitely wants to make sure that he goes out to not get hit, to not hit anyone else. And they also want to make sure to dodge this Gatling gun that they got hit by before. Yeah,
I mean, it should be no problem for them to clean up the dungeon. I mean, even if they wipe here, well, okay, maybe if they wipe here, that'll actually be quite close between the two teams. But a lot of sloppiness coming out of both of these teams. I guess we can see why they were so adamant at expressing their feelings of negativity towards this dungeon on Twitter. Nonetheless, Method U manages to dodge another bullet, still undefeated across all three cups. I don't know how they keep doing it because that one was looking like it was going to be 40K's map, but that aura of luck and skill that they have has still succeeded for them one more time as they take the series 2-0 in probably not the cleanest map we've seen them to, Mr. Jack. in past weeks if either of these two teams ended up doing the full room pull or just kind of doing a 3-pack followed by the 1-pack getting ready for the Golden Serpent. But we're about to find out here as both teams head down the stairs, pop that first mass stealth, and head on through to the Golden Serpent's room right past these two Guardians. Keep them in mind, of course, we will likely see them during that Gauntlet.
Yeah, it's also something to note that Divinefield is actually playing Night Elf from the looks of it on our screen here. So basically with Grievous, if you actually were playing a different race, you would be able to get that Grievous off you, notably Dwarf. So you actually do see Divinefield positioning himself, looking to be able to get all of those mobs, those Shadows of Zul killed very quickly, as you do see Bloodlust coming out for the side of Abrakeydabra and Method in A. And
it's the full room pull on both sides, if I'm not mistaken. It's a lot of damage coming in. Bloodlust has been popped, as quoted here by Tettles. There's going to be a lot of kiting needed from the tank soon enough, and you have to be careful with these tornadoes that are coming out from both sides of the team. Nerf Clap already opting to go pretty defensive here, has Heroic left out of the group as the rest of them help with Typhoon and Ursul's Vortex, keeping those mobs away from him as long as possible just to make sure that they get in. Abrakeydabra on the side, Divinefield hasn't really left himself that much space. He's already rushed out as soon as the champion's enraged and has already rushed back in. Most of the mobs finally are dying now. Method and A 17% on the board, about to proc their first reaping. Abrakeydabra just a bit slower as they continue to kite away. Divinefield does not want that early death.
Yeah, so even though Divinefield is actually doing a little bit more damage than Nerf on the side of Method in A, the mobs just get kind of separated out very quickly for the side of Abrakeydabra as opposed to Method in A, making the pull take a little bit longer for them. So basically we did see that Ring of Peace coming in super early, and that allowed the mobs to get just kind of grouped up on that corner for Method in A, and then now they are pulling their first reaping into the Golden Serpent here.
So here comes the Golden Serpent for Abrakeydabra as well. Method in A already at 90% on it, does not have that Bloodlust available right now as they look to dodge to and fro from all the green swirlies hitting from those Lost Souls. Certainly don't want to get hit by those. We know they give you that 10% damage debuff for 30 seconds. Huge chunk of damage coming in on Yoda, of course, on the side from that Spit Gold. A lot of damage that comes off. It's really what kind of taxes the healers a lot of the time. That's the struggle and the issue that we saw plague Method EU with Zalia dying, almost wiping in their King's Restaurant in the previous series. We'll see if Method and A's, the Method counterpart in NA here, can overtake that difficulty, as Abrakeydabra has now started on the Golden Serpent as well, and is really not very far behind, only about 4 or 5% compared to Method NA, even though they started quite late.
Yeah, so we actually do see Abrakeydabra kind of catching up single target damage wise, just a little bit more efficient with how they end up using their defensives with the having to move out with that liquid gold dot. It's also important to note how the healers end up pacing their Swiftmen casts and how they end up pre-hotting people, because with this Grievous, the dot ends up hitting you for about 50% of your health-ish unmitigated, so taking 2 of those dots without getting any healing in between actually just puts you in a very scary spot. We actually do see JB on the side of Method in A doing 30k HPS, while we do see Elsarat just on the side of Abrakeydabra getting a little bit more favorable RNG on the group members, only doing 20k right here.
Master Root finally fading from JB on the side of Method in A, and the animated golds start charging towards, at a very slow pace of course, but charging towards that Golden Serpent, trying to get absorbed. If they do that, of course, the boss will gain a substantial shield and a damage boost to boot, so really just leading to a wipe at that point. Method in A now 43% on the board versus Abrakeydabra 52%, so the gap is starting to widen between the two teams right now as Abrakeydabra dumps their next Spit Gold on the side. Want to make sure to keep all these animated golds together. Mana looking a bit better in favor of Abrakeydabra here, but Method in A is a bit further into the fight as well, so usually the mana pool starts to deplete right around the death of the boss, usually perfectly lining up for teams that have done this.
Yeah, so basically JB electing to run Mass Entangle over Typhoon is pretty interesting in this case. So basically Typhoon will help you later on in the instance with like the Lightning Rod or something else inside of the Gauntlet room. It also helps you reposition mobs a little bit better. We do see Elsarat on the side of Abrakeydabra electing to not end up running Mass Entangle, and he ends up just sitting here. They end up kind of DPSing down the blobs, and they end up spending a lot of their globals or other time that they would elsewise be electing to just hit the Golden Serpent, trying to make sure that they have those animated golds positioned a little bit better. Moving the boss around the room actually just kind of reduces your uptime as well, whereas on the side of Method in A, they have a little bit easier of a time just kind of mass rooting them, keeping those animated golds grouped up, not moving the boss as much, and then you actually do see Method in A getting the boss down to 10%, keeping about the same gap that we did actually see going into the fight though.
Yeah, this is Abrakeydabra is kind of cornering themselves here, and it could be a bit of a scary situation with these 3 animated golds coming in. They do have access to that Typhoon right now, and the Ring of Peace does go down defensively for the team, wanting to make sure that the boss this is safe from them. Method NA is just now cleaning up the Golden Serpent, finishing it off. Unfortunately, they did have Yoda's cheat death proc just moments prior, so that won't be available for about 6 minutes now. But fortunately, there's not too much residual damage that goes on in this room unless you're unlucky or unfortunate enough to stand in front of the Colossi and get hit by it. But that's just, of course, pure luck and no player movement involved at all. That's a joke, by the way. The Golden Serpent now at 1% health for Abrakeydabra. They did manage to squeeze by. Zelsarat actually got the very last debuff there, and he was pretty taxed on mana, so they dodged a bit of a bullet as they head over to the Gauntlet area, something that Method NA has already started, and they're going to be opting to pull those two constructs in here momentarily.
Yeah, like you said, JB was off screen for a little while. He ended up getting a drink, and while the door was opening, as soon as the door ended up opening, he ended up pulling those Colossus, and they'll be coming in here in a second, making sure that you don't stand in that suppression slam, unlike we did see in the Chinese weekend from, who was it, like Nerf War Buff Rogue, or a company. It was a company that ended up standing in the suppression slam multiple times and ended up having wipes over that. So making sure that Method NA does in fact dodge that, very good on their side. On the side of Abrakeydabra, you do see those animated Guardians coming down the hallway, while Abrakeydabra is just a couple seconds away.
That is so menacing looking down that hall, seeing these two hulking Guardians charge at you, but they don't cast their frontal. You know, part of the issues with why Company got clipped is because they casted that very first frontal out of the room into the room, and the players were not glued up against the wall. But no problem here for the two teams as Method NA hits 32% on the board, looking to proc their second Reaping Wave. Abrakeydabra following suit, just a bit behind, 0 deaths on the team, but this gap is just starting to widen more and more. And you know, we talked about this earlier while Negro was casting on the desk with me, and we had the King's Rest for the previous series titles. It's so hard to make up time in this map. There's not a lot of creativity you can put in it. The pulls are either gated by something like a Gauntlet, or there's just not that much trash you can do because it's too dangerous. There's not a lot of packs you can skip, so ultimately it will start to come down to aggression.
And it also comes down to like maybe comfort of the picks as well. Maybe Dr. J, obviously very well known being a mage player. Maybe he might not be as comfortable like doing the most amount of damage possible on this Outlaw Rogue. Well, I don't necessarily believe that's the case because he's been playing Outlaw Rogue for weeks at this point. It could be definitely one of the just things that ends up factoring into why Method NA is just slightly ahead. Overall, I think it ended up coming more so down to how they ended up doing with the Serpent Room, how that Ring of Peace ended up coming out a little bit earlier, keeping the mobs grouped up for nerf into the side of Method NA, while even though Divine Field was doing a little bit more damage, just the fact that the mobs were able to just be clumped up, more efficient cleave is very important. On the side of Method NA, they do end up procking their Reaping there, and they end up downing the next Gauntlet mob.
The next Gauntlet mob as they get ready for the final Queen and her Raptor. She deals quite the punch, but fortunately we do know Prot Warriors can now block physical projectiles, something that Prot Warriors are actually notoriously the weakest for on this particular mob, are now one of the strongest for with that shoot from Queen Parla. But Abrakeydabra, 43%, has now finished off mostly their next Reaping Wave and are looking to move on to the same Gauntlet mob as Method NA, who is looking to break out of this Gauntlet as quickly as possible. Queen now down to about 25% health as the Raptor is just frontaling off screen here. None of the players, of course, in front of it does snapshot its direction. Very easy to just sidestep. Abrakeydabra waiting for the final spawn, but Method NA moving on out of here in just a moment.
Yeah, and Method NA ends up doing this room very clean, even though they do not have access to Typhoon. The Typhoon would end up allowing you to do that Lightning Rod on one of those Gauntlet mobs just a little bit more clean, but we ended up seeing just really good use out of Method NA here, even though they do have Mass Entangle on the side of Abrakeydabra, still dealing with the Queen and her Raptor, while Method NA does shroud past that construct on the bridge.
And into the room here we go. Now, there's a certain level of aggression you can have in the room here. Some teams opted to just do what we actually saw in the previous series. You can either pull all of these ooey gooeys together, then deal with the constructs separately. Some teams just pull everything together, deal with it at once. Of course, much harder, but definitely more time efficient in terms of cleaving everything down. Method NA goes with the former strat, looking to just kill all of the embalming fluids off first, then pull and desynchronize the cast of the constructs together. After which they will likely proc their third Reaping Wave straight into Machimba. Here comes the first construct just now as the embalming fluids are dying, pulling it over to the other construct and getting ready to cleave these down together whilst getting players out of the entomb.
Yeah, basically it's very important to note that the entomb puts the player in the nearest sarcophagus, so making sure that the players are positioned well enough in order to be able to allow JB to instantly get them out of that sarcophagus is very important. As on the side of Abrakeydabra, they're doing both constructs with all of the embalming fluid.
This is actually really fun to see. In the previous series, we saw Method EU do the exact same pull as Method NA. They dealt with the embalming fluids first, got the constructs afterwards, Beastmaster, whilst Fourty K is doing exactly what Abrakeydabra is doing. A very aggressive pull of the entirety of the room right now. Certainly more DPS efficient, but much more dangerous, and you have to be on top of those Entomb casts. So you want to make sure you're kiting all of these goos that die with poison on the floor near those tombs, but it's working out quite brilliantly right now for Abrakeydabra, 59%, and the constructs are not too far off of Method and A, so Abrakeydabra has definitely gained a fair bit of ground here on Method and A, and they've put the two teams back neck and neck. 50 seconds, excuse me, on Bloodlust for both teams. So the next thing we're going to have to ask Tettles is which team is going to use their Bloodlust on the trash coming up after Machimba, and which team's going to use it on Machimba, if any.
I don't think either team will end up using it on Machimba just because of when it ends up coming up. We see it coming up in about 35-ish seconds for both teams. Obviously, Method and A here already having pulled Machimba, they would end up having to use Bloodlust at about like 75% of the way through Machimba, which seems like almost a waste, especially whenever you're doing that very deadly double Berserker, double Priest pull after this. Abrakeydabra has additionally pulled Machimba, and they're neck and neck here.
But that's exactly when we see teams use it on Machimba, because that's when it comes up. It might line up with cooldowns, might not. Nonetheless, 10 seconds on the clock here for those Bloodlusts. We'll see what they want to do with them. The double Berserker pull is quite common ground for teams to pull after this boss, with or without Bloodlust. It's really about, do they want to add anything on top of it, like the two Raptors and even the Beastmasters, which, as we saw, differing the two teams before. Bloodlusts are available, have not been popped for either team. They're either waiting for some cooldowns to come up or are indeed saving it for the trash after Machimba. Machimba down to 67% for Abrakeydabra and 68 for Method and A. So Abrakeydabra actually pulling ahead now.
Kind of circling back to that Embalmer double construct pull. So it is Skittish and Grievous, which both don't really affect how many embalming fluids that you can end up pulling together with the constructs. Most of the time you end up seeing that pull be kind of scary just because you do have some adverse affixes, like we've seen Explosive in here, or just some other affixes like that. Additionally, as long as you get those two constructs across the room quick enough for the Entomb, you can actually get your players out of the Entomb quick enough, and you're able to have super efficient cleave on that embalming fluid, and that's what's putting Abrakeydabra even back in the race. They just ended up pulling bigger, and now they are just neck and neck with Method and A here.
Yeah, neck and neck, just trying to maintain that little bit of percentage lead over Method and A. Neither team popping that Bloodlust at this point. They definitely would have committed it with some cooldown, so I think okay, just as I say that Abrakeydabra pops their Bloodlust, cooldowns must be coming up for them, and they're looking to perfectly finish off Machimba by the time that Bloodlust wears off. Method and A, just like their EU counterpart, holding on to it. We'll see exactly what they decide to pull with it for the trash following Machimba, but Machimba really not starting to melt that much faster than Method and A side with that Bloodlust.
Maybe they're trying to like skip the next Entomb or something like that, because that's the only thing that I can kind of think of as the reason that they're trying to save themselves a little bit of time. Obviously, that would be like a time disparity just between the two teams. Just missing that Entomb would allow you to not have to get off the boss for a second and get the person out of the sarcophagus, but it does seem a little bit trigger happy from the side of Abrakeydabra. I feel like they would have been a little bit better off just kind of holding it, using it for the next pull, but maybe they just don't believe that they need it for the next pull.
I mean, they don't. Divinefield getting crushed there by the tank. I always mention this. Machimba just hits the tank so hard. But anyways, they managed to squeeze out maybe a percent and a half ahead of Method and A with that Bloodlust, but you know, the double Berserker pull, just like you're saying, Tettles, a lot of teams don't use it for, use the Bloodlust for the double Berserker. What they end up using it for is pulling the double Berserker plus the two Raptors and the Beastmaster. So something Method and A has the option to do. We'll see what they do in just a moment here, as Abrakeydabra is now rearing up, has pulled the Berserker, spell reflected the two first Hex Priest cast, pulled the second Berserker, no Bloodlust available, and they're looking to cleave just these 5 mobs together, whilst Method and A is actually doing the same pull, so a bit modest from them. They're doing the same pull just with Bloodlust.
Yeah, so we're definitely, it's going to be important to note how quickly Method and A is able to actually down this pack. In addition to that, since they are doing the identical pull, maybe they end up actually wasting some Bloodlust seconds on the side of Method and A just because they believe that they ended up needing it just due to healing, because of those physical damage dots on the side of Method and A, whereas Abrakeydabra is like, no, we don't need that. These Frost Shocks and these bleeds don't hit hard enough, and they end up actually doing the pull even without Bloodlust. They do it well, and both teams are still neck and neck here.
Yeah, I mean, they just didn't care. They just swept through the same group, no problem. No one even dipped low. I was, I was excited to see somebody hopefully die or Prodigy death or something, but no bloodbath here in King's Rest so far between either of these teams, as 0 deaths plagues the board of both teams right now. The Brood has finally joined the Beastmaster pack along with the two Raptors. We do know the Brood patrols the entirety of the bridge ahead of the players right now. Both of the teams will have their 80% reaping proc here on this pack.
Yeah, it's also important to note that the Ground Crush ability, that big circle by the Brute, is kind of annoying, especially in like a triple melee composition. The reason for that being seeing is like you end up not being able to hit like the Beastmaster or any of the other mobs that are inside of the brute circle because you do end up having to move out. So you actually can knock that ground crush. Obviously, it will recast it instantly, but it does give you a little bit more time. And you actually see Abrakeydabra killing their pack and just pulling ahead a little bit here.
Yeah, starting to pull ahead. Here comes the 4th Reaping Wave right now. They wait for it to join them as they pull the Berserker, Hex Priest, and Witch Doctor combination just ahead of them, cleaving everything down effectively and efficiently together. Now, not a lot of real estate here for the team, so there's a lot of area denial coming out of the Berserker. Of course, we have the Shadow Smashers coming out of the Lost Souls, and there will be the Totem going down. We can see it go down right now from that Witch Doctor that will heal all mobs around it. So you want to make sure to either kill that quickly or move out of it. But with the amount of slows and area denial going out, the better option, of course, is just to kill it as quickly as possible. Abrakeydabra, well dealing with this pack, 88% on the board, dodging the rest of the souls, and it looks like they will stealth ahead and either prepare the pull here with a CC on the mobs or just go straight to the 3rd boss and start up on that.
Oh, okay. So they're actually pulling this pull right before that that area, and it looks like they're doing double berserkers in this pack. So they end up blinding one of the berserkers that's right before the council fight, and they ended up doing this pack. I thought they were going to do something similar to what we see on the side of 40K, but they end up just shrouding through, doing this one pull before this entryway, and then on the side of Method NA they actually do the pull right before the Shadow of Zul opening. So it's just a little bit different in strategy. I don't think it's going to end up being different for count wise because you're going to have to end up killing that Shadow of Zul, and you just need 96%. So both teams I think are going to be okay in that regard. They're just going to shadow meld off this Berserker here, and then they're going to make their way to the council fight right here.
Still clever from Abrakeydabra. Usually we see a different pattern of crown control coming out of the two teams, so it works quite well for them there. Also interesting to see the shield wall was popped to survive the double bleed from the 2 Berserkers from the side of Divine Field, so a bit of defense lost there, but nothing he will really need as none of these bosses hit too excessively hard. Eyes on the prize here really for the teams is who is going to get the Severing Axe from Kula the Butcher, the very first boss in this council fight. That's really the danger. That's where a lot of the chunking damage comes in the same nature as that Spit Gold debuff from the first boss. So here comes the first Severing Axe. It is on Elsarat, unfortunately. What Elsarat is new with that one right now, but a lot of damage that's going to come in. Remember, these teams don't have battle reses available for anybody else but their healer. So if the healer dies on this, they're either going to wipe or try to reset between the bosses, which you've seen some teams do. But at that point, with how close they are, it's pretty much done for them.
Yep, and on the side of Method NA, we actually did see that Severing Axe going on to Shakib. He ended up using Dwarf Racial to get it off instantly, so that's actually super good for them. You actually see JB able to do a pretty sizable amount of damage by comparison to Elsarat just because he does end up getting that debuff off on him, and Elsarat gets it again.
It's just bad luck. Divine Field cannot get healed out of this 4-stack of Grievous because Elsarat is just taking so much damage and is starting to snowball into a 3 and then 4-stack of Grievous. Cannot get himself above 90. Finally does it. Gets the 3rd Severing Axe in a row. Just super unlucky on their part, while one of the axes is on Shakib on the side of Method NA, who has the cushion of cheat death if really needed. So Method NA having a much easier time dealing with this and now surpassing the percentage of Kula over Abrakeydabra. Divine Field dipping so low though, just cannot get out of these 4 stacks of Grievous, and they need to finish this boss off as Elsarat gets the 4th Severing Axe in a row now.
Something I didn't notice until now, it looks like one of the Berserkers is paralysis inside of the arena, which is actually really bad on the side of Abrakeydabra. It looks like it's going to be okay just because they will end up keeping it CC the whole entire time, but it looked like they failed their Shadow Meld skip there.
Yeah, if that thing breaks out during one of the totem phases on Xenazal, the second boss, the one that they've just spawned right now, it is going to be an absolute disaster. That thing is a nightmare to deal with. Bleeds in all directions, jumping around in area denial, so hopefully they can hold on to that. But Method NA using this opportunity to just keep sneaking further and further away. They've now opened up the gap to almost 10% over Abrakeydabra, and Abrakeydabra first got to the boss.
Yeah, it's also important to note, okay, it looks like the Berserker did end up resetting once the paralysis did end up coming off of it, so that ended up being okay. But like, if they did end up actually activating it, they actually do not need it for count, so that would actually just be so bad on the side of Abrakeydabra, but it ends up being okay. But like you said, Method NA just keeps kind of just pulling away, just slow and steady, methodically turtling and pulling away as they do end up dealing with those totems on the side of Xanzal very quickly.
Yeah, you know, we know only 2 of the totems are really dangerous. The exploding needs to be killed immediately. The earth wall just absorbs so much healing because it constantly pulses and absorbs shield on the boss. Outside of that, especially in all melee group titles, it really doesn't matter. They just need to run around and cleave the remaining ones down. Speaking of which, Method NA now at 13% on the board, about to reach Aka'ali, the 3rd and final boss of this council boss fight. 6% on the board for them. Abrakeydabra at 10%, doing well to dodge the whirling axes. We do know, of course, once you kill one of the council members, they will occasionally reappear on the battlefield with their signature move. Cast it once, and then disappear. So Zanazal well pulled over to the side of Akali right now as Whirling Axes plague the battlefield. Method and A finishing off the totems, using that small bit of downtime before Akali spawns.
Yeah, it's also important to note that both teams did end up getting those totems again. If one was able to actually skip it, it would have actually been a pretty big break point in terms of like how much time you're going to end up saving, because you don't end up having to deal with that Earth Wall totem giving the boss a shield. But Akali coming out for both sides here, obviously doing the debilitating backhand on the tank, which he prays that he ends up parrying. He ends up getting hit by it, and now he has to end up running away as he has his armor broken.
Yeah, just a bit of RNG. I mean, it's just like the axes that Elserot was so unlucky to get 4 in a row of, but if you do manage to dodge or parry, you don't have to do this kiting nature that we see Divine Field doing. Nerf Clap just finished doing the same thing. You just take such immense damage as the tank. Finally, it wears off after 10 seconds, and Barrel Through is immediately cast again. And once again, they hold their breath to see if they will get the next round of debilitating. Nerf Clap indeed does get it, is forced to move away. No damage for him for 10 seconds as he moves over, interrupts Zenazal on his way, and continues to run away from Akali. You know, they actually haven't killed 2 of their totems on the side,
saw that, yeah.
but it really, I guess, is no concern for them. It's nothing but melee and healing over time for the most part from JB as he gets in kitty form and tries to get a bit of extra damage. And they've pulled a fair bit ahead at this point, 20%.
Yeah, saving some damage on the Thundering Totems is actually super nice because it only ends up locking you out, which JB is just sitting in cat form DPSing Akali the whole entire time, so it's not ending up being that big of a deal. We do actually see the difference in damage between JB and Elserot being pretty minor, but Elserot is sitting with everybody inside of Grievous right now, trying to make sure that they get top back up as they did just take that Barrel Through.
Yeah, Barrel Through goes out, and he did manage, and Divine Field fortunately managed to actually avoid that last debilitating backhand, so a bit of breath of fresh air from Abrakeydabra, but the two teams are just constantly trading the lead throughout this entire map of perfect runs. 0 deaths on the board for either one of them. Abrakeydabra finally downing the third boss and rushing out the door to head over to the Shadow of Azul, something that Method and A is already just about to pull right now. So Method and A a few seconds ahead, 2 minutes left on their Bloodlust. Both teams will definitely have Bloodlust available to them as needed for 60% on the final boss, King Dazar.
Yeah, and we do actually end up seeing the 2 different strategies of how you ended up pulling the bridge, with Trashwise not ending up mattering. They're both sitting at 96%. They're both going to end up proccing their last Reaping of the Instance on Shadow of Azul, and they're both going to end up pulling it into Dazar. Shadow of Azul is actually pretty scary for your tank by and large, but I don't think on a 19 Tyrannical it should be that bad.
I mean, you just need to babysit the tank. It's not too scary. I mean, it could be a bit scary. Divine Field does not have his One Somebody's Bargain trinket available. We see the debuff present on his player frame right now, so he will die if he gets killed, Tettles. But he will not have that cheat death trinket as a cushion available. Nerf Clap getting just a bit low here as Lighty eats up a bit of damage too. So JB starting to need to split a bunch of healing between the players and make sure Grievous doesn't get too out of hand for them as Shadow of Azul is about to fall at 10%. JB unable to get any damage in as a result, unfortunately, while Elserot definitely playing a bit more defensive as well, wanting to make sure Divine Field is nice and healthy and he doesn't get into some of the same trouble that JB does. But no problem for JB as he manages to squeeze out of the rest of that. Nerf Clap getting quite low right now with the 4-stack. JB just barely healing him through it as they look to drop off their 100% Reaping Wave and get started on King Dazar. Abrakeydabra finishing off Shadow of Azul, rushing down the stairs in just a moment. They will want to Shadow Meld if they can and vanish their 5th Reaping Wave, and it's all going to come down to Dazar.
Yeah, it looked like the Method in A ended up having to take a couple seconds in order to be able to kill that last Shadow of Azul, and Divine Field actually ends up going down. What happened?
What happened is that the dot component of the shadow damage from Shadow of Azul was not healed by Elserot on their way down because they were trying to skip the Reaping Wave. So Divine Field slowly ticked down. Nobody was healing him. Grievous started ramping up on top of it. We just mentioned he didn't have his trinket available. I guess Elserot didn't get the memo. They run in. They have their only and first death of both teams on the map right before the final boss. Something that you just can't have when the runs are so clean and so aggressive from both teams. King Dazar 8% behind for Abrakeydabra at 85% on the board. Method and A looking to further pounce on this opportunity. Clean run from them. They're saving their Bloodlust, getting ready for that 60% break point.
Yeah, it looked like Abrakeydabra was going to be able to make up a couple seconds just because of how Method and A had to end up dealing with the Shadow of Azul, just like keeping everybody in combat, waiting a second to be able to drop it off and get JB a drink. But Abrakeydabra just counter throws with Divine Field dying. They end up using a battle res, which ends up not costing them a ton of time, but it's just time wasted that they could have ended up pulling Dazar there.
Time wasted, and the Rogues are just having a frenzy getting hit by these whirlwinds. We can see the debuff on Yoda, just can't get out of that 4-stack. Jay had it earlier, can't get out of that 4-stack. They're making their healers' lives a living hell right now. So tough for them to heal through as Yoda just does not get out of this funk, but finally Bloodlust up on the side of Method and A as King Dazar mounts Salah, the second Raptor coming out. It will give a bit of fresh air, breath of fresh air to the healers, able to get rid of those final Grievous stacks on the players, but Jay getting clipped here. Procs his cheat death. A bit of extra work for Elserat right now, who's already so low on mana. He's actually almost already.
Yeah, Elserat ended up not stopping to drink, as JB actually ended up stopping to drink right before the boss ended up being pulled, because Abrakeydabra did know that they were a little bit behind, and they had to be able to capitalize on Method in A, taking a second to kill that mob and get the drink. But it looks like Abrakeydabra, Elserat might end up running out of mana here, which is, if he does end up running out of steam, that would actually just be so bad. But you actually do see the damage differential between the two healers coming into play too. JB is sitting at 8k DPS, while Elserat's only sitting here at like 5-ish k, which ends up costing them a couple seconds too.
Yeah, I mean, Elserat's certainly going to come out of mana if Dr. J keeps eating those whirlwinds like a hungry hippo and draining all of his mana in the get-go. He's going to have so much trouble getting out of the Grievous that constantly ramps up on players along with this Quaking Leap as well. So Elserat has his work cut out for him right now and just doesn't have the mana to deal with it. 36% for Dazar, as Method in A starting to creep ahead a percent or two as much as they can over their opponent's Abrakeydabra right now. 0 deaths on the board still for them, but 30% to go.
Yeah, but Abrakeydabra does have 1 death, which that 5 seconds might end up actually coming back into play, because Abrakeydabra here has just like slowly, they're so even with Method in A right here that 1 death that might actually end up coming back to bite them.
That would be
so
be a
bad.
Nightmare.
Oh my lord.
Shield wall being popped here out of Divine Field. King Dazar at 19% on both teams. Abrakeydabra needs to beat King Dazar by 5 seconds over Method in A to try and take this first match. It could be an absolutely grievous error, no pun intended, out of the tactics right now. But Whirlwind hitting 2 of their DPS. Elserat does not have the mana to deal with it. Swagfist is barely staying alive. Dr. J starting to ramp up on the Grievous right now as well. Ashine barely staying alive too. I don't know if they can hold out till the end of the match. Dr. J goes down now. Battle Res comes up. Swagfist 1% about to get rezzed as well. Actually, he won't have the rest. They don't have it available. Manages to hang on, and Ashine procs his cheat death as well. Method in A, it takes the first game.
Hold on,
usually likes to roll bursting stacks.
You got him.
Certainly quite. I knew it, Jack. I got you, buddy. So, you know, certainly a lot of the danger from bursting in this dungeon lies in the big pulls in the second room with Kragmaw, and just the DPS having the kind of, you know, just making sure that they don't roll these stacks. It could get out of hand. Neither team popping their Bloodlust nonetheless. At the beginning of the dungeon here, we saw a bit of damage coming in on Yoda as the cleave comes in on him as well. Lighty gets cleave from the Savage Cleave from the Matron, something that Saris had just mentioned prior. 1 death on the board already for Method in A right now, this first brutal pull.
Yeah, prior to this too, we were all a little bit talking a little bit off broadcast about pulling Ticks into this first pack, and we all agreed that was a pretty bad idea. We actually do see Method in A end up pulling Ticks, getting all their bursting stacks onto the whole entire group. The Ticks actually double burst is what we called it. They end up exploding whenever they do get killed, so it actually put everybody incredibly low, but Lighty ended up getting cleaved and going down there.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to see that. And I'm pretty sure Yoda got cleaved as well. He might still be playing Dwarf because I don't think the entirety of the bleed actually followed through. So he had a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card with that. But 1 death on the board, and with how close the last map was between these two teams, it could be absolutely detrimental to the group. Really big pull coming in here for Abrakeydabra as they managed to stabilize and interrupt the Blood Priest. Don't want the Dark Reconstitution being cast. It will max heal somebody, one of the mobs, to the max HP.
We actually saw that on the Befouled Spirit. The Befouled Spirit was like so low, and then it got instantly topped. I think it might have been through the Reconstitution, as Lighty actually does end up going down. Nerf ends up going down, and it looks like it might be a full wipe on the side of Method in A.
Full wipe coming in early in the dungeon for Method in A. Nerf Clap, of course, did have the trinket available, but it just wasn't enough to get through the amount of damage, plus the bursting as the mobs were dying. Full 5-man wipe here on top of the first death from Lighty. 30 seconds worth of death on the board for Method in A. Already find themselves on the back foot here compared to Abrakeydabra, who has pulled their first Reaping on top of Elderly Axa, doing well to interrupt those Blood Bolts. Bloodlust has been pulled on top of it too.
Yeah, making sure that you actually do Spell Reflect or interrupt those Blood Bolts is very, very important, as the Blood Bolts, whenever they do get Spell Reflected, they do a pretty sizable amount of damage, not only to Elderly Axa, but to the Blood Effigy as well. We actually do see Dr. J go down the side of Abrakeydabra, but a Battle Res is coming through.
I would have thought this was Raid, but apparently it's not. Abrakeydabra now working for their last, working with no Battle Reses as they get the last of their Bloodlust off the chart right now. Method in A moving down, doing the same pull as their first round of Reaping comes in. They're very vulnerable right now. They don't have the tank trinket available for Nerf Clap. Both of the rogues have procced their cheat death, so any cast or any accidental getting hit by the green swirlies from the Lost Souls, or getting hit by one of the Shadow Smashes, that area denial, we can see one right now on the screen, could be absolutely detrimental to the group. They do have their Battle Res available, which is, I guess, the one saving grace of that wipe. It was a full team wipe. They didn't try to salvage it with a Battle Res, so they do have it available if things start to go south for them. But Abrakeydabra 20% on the board here as they work to kill their second Blood Effigy. Elderly Axe max at 18%.
Yeah, that mask just ended up lasting so long on the side of Method and A, and then we saw people start ending up bleeding out. Abrakeydabra here ends up killing that soul effigy. It looked like it was with a spell reflect, and now Elderly Axe is sitting at 11 or 10% for them, while on Method and A side 34%, as they did end up having to take a lot of time in order to be able to recoup here.
Yeah, recoup, but Abrakeydabra managed to squeeze by. Jay did die. They used the battle res, but fortunately they were able to finish off the Reaping and Elderly Axe. So we see the mass stealth, come up as they head straight for Kragma's room, commonly skipping those ticks as we discussed. Titles, nobody wants to deal with those during bursting weeks, as well as the extra damage that they splash onto the group. Tyrannical or not, does not matter. Pretty substantial pull coming in here as they deal with how many Feral Bloods? So there's actually two Bloodswarmers in here, so quite dangerous. Need to make sure you interrupt those Sonic Screeches, heal up the targeted victims of their focus, Swagfist being one of them, Segfist being both of them actually right now. So a lot of damage coming in on him as he starts to kite away a bit. They help with peel and crowd control on the rest of the group, making sure to interrupt, of course, the Lashers. Any maggots that find their way into the group also need to be hard CC'd when they cast their frontal.
Yep, and in comes Ring of Peace for Swagfist there in order to be able to get those Bloodswarmers off him, not mailing him for a sizable amount of shadow damage, as we do see the mass stealth coming in for the side of Method and A as well, as they do a pretty big pull, similar to Abrakeydabra size inside of this Kragmaw room here. Just making sure that they do get kicks, like you said, on those Bloodswarmers for the Sonic Screech, and then just making sure that those Disease Lashers do also get kicked on their cast is very important, as we do actually see the Sonic Screech go out for Method and A.
Yeah, it does go out, and they do have to babysit a lot of these explosives coming in. Definitely one of the detrimental affixes that kind of turns you off of pulling too much in this room. Abrakeydabra doesn't care, though, as they pull most of the remainder of the room. They'll have one pull combined after this that they need to deal with. One of the maggots is in there, does manage to get interrupted, stunned before it gets his cast off. Therefore, it will have a bit of safe time and downtime before dealing with it. Feral Bloodswarmer, always marked for the teams. #1 target for everybody, wanting to make sure you kill it. Not only does it fixate another target, and the tank can't really do much about it, but it does pure shadow damage. So a lot of damage that comes in. Bursting stacks plaguing Method and A as they run over to the next pack right now, and hopefully they can get the rest of this pool cleanly done, because we do know, as Sours mentioned, this is a room that's given Method and A definitely some trouble in the past few weeks.
Yeah, that maggot or that that maggot does have a biocast, or slug as it's known by Sours. Ends up having a biocast, which ends up needing to be CC'd. Most of the time you end up using like gouge, paralysis, or a stun on it, because that bile ends up having like a frontal cone, and it will end up picking off people if you're not actually paying attention. Whenever you do have this many mobs, it can actually get kind of easy for you to just kind of look at something else, or look at Bloodswarm or kiting or something like that, and not getting a stun out on that maggot. So making sure that you do actually get it CC'd whenever that cast is coming through is very important. As actually Dr. J doing infinite DPS here. Just kidding, it's only 90k.
Both teams looking to proc, of course, their third Reaping before engaging with Kragmaw, but more trouble plagues Method and A in this room as Nerf Clap does go down. Battle Res is still available from the beginning of the dungeon when they had the first disaster, but even with that Battle Res on the tank, he does not have threat on all these mobs, and unfortunately Lighty finally goes down and succumbs to the damage. Shakib is next in line, just getting so many of those Reaping stacks, explosives going off in the back, finishing Shakib off, and Nerf Clap goes down again. Yoda follows suit, and JB is last to go down as another full team wipe, +1 death because they battle res the tank, plagues Method and A, and the nightmares return from the Kragmaw room, and they will have to run all the way back now and just get themselves in form. Abrakeydabra looking nice and sharp, looking to proc their third Reaping here and drag it into Kragmaw probably.
Yep, Kragmaw looking very menacing out in the middle of the instance there for Method and A. Getting a lot of NA lulls in the chat as Method and A does have another full wipe. So Abrakeydabra here just pulling these reanimated Guardians and positioning here in order to be able to pull Reaping into Kragmaw right here.
Yeah, Kragmaw is pulled with all the Reaping. Now, you know, we mentioned it a few times. Of course, one of the benefits of this all melee group is they don't really have to be exactly up against the wall with the charge. The melee can stomp these ticks out as they move over to Kragmaw quite safely, so no problem for them. And they're using a lot of these Reaping Souls to just cleave effectively off of the boss. No danger there as long as Divine Field gets that dispel. But most important really is going to be the Tantrum, which not only spawns the ticks that all of his other abilities do as well, but just huge amounts of pulsing physical damage on the group, whilst the group has to be spread out in order to stomp the ticks.
Yeah, so there isn't like a quaking or something like that that could end up allowing somebody to end up going down during the Tantrum, as we've seen in weeks previous, but there is explosive, and the DPS aren't really chasing around Kragmaw, but if an explosive actually does spawn off of Kragmaw very far on the far side of the room, we could actually see some issues with being able to kill it very quickly, as rogues are most of the time time the people who end up killing the explosives the best, just because of like how pistol shot ends up working. But we actually do not see an explosive spawn, and they are back DPS and Kragmaw. Tantrum being not exactly the most melee-friendly ability in this melee-heavy composition, though. So making sure that you get as few tantrums as possible is very important as well.
Yeah, but Tantrum, really, to be fair, is not friendly for anybody, even the range, because the range need to run around and stop takes and maybe even off-heal a bit. It's a lot of dangerous damage. They're likely going to have to deal with at least 2 more Tantrums based on Kragmaw's health. We are in a tyrannical setting. The bosses do have more health. Method and A looking to recoup and get back right now as Nerf Clap's taking an immense amount of damage with the Guardians that have been pulled in from the side. Method and A looking to proc their 3rd Reaping as well and drag it into this menacing Kragmaw boss encounter that they started with. A lot of damage coming in on the group in the form of the bursting for Method and A, finishing off the last couple of Guardians and proccing their Reaping in a moment as Abrakeydabra now starts on their 2nd Tantrum.
Yep, and Elserat actually positions in the middle of the room, casting his Tranquility in order to be able to allow it to hit all the members of the group. So that's actually really good positioning by him. And we actually have seeing him also do about 9-ish K DPS, which on a Kragmaw is actually pretty good. I mean, he's healing a little bit more than he maybe needs to, but during the tantrums and just keeping up his dots and stuff like that, he's actually been doing a good job, especially week to week, as we have been critical of how much DPS Elserat has been doing in weeks past.
And, you know, he has really cranked it up on the offensive scale right now. It's working quite well here for him. 25% on Kragmaw. They probably will get 1 more Tantrum at the end. Depending on how low they get the boss, they can just kind of commit, as we call it on live servers, just commit to killing the boss, really. But it seems it's too high for their comfort as we see the players running around, stomping these ticks. We do know how out of hand the ticks can get. Not only the tick damage in terms of stacking damage over time on the tank and explosions on the group if you do choose to kill them, but also with the explosive affix. If you have a huge amount of mobs on top of the boss, you're going to spend so much time just needing to cleave or kill off the explosives that are spawning. Method and A down but not out, as they are now at 68% on Kragmaw, 60% trash, similar to Abrakeydabra 61, but they have a large amount of deaths to overcome by the end of the dungeon.
Yeah, so having about 55 seconds in depth differential between the 2 teams is actually so bad. In addition to that, 60% of Kragmaw's health, that's probably like another minute, maybe 2-ish minutes differentiating the team. So you would actually need to see a major mistake here from Abrakeydabra, which actually could end up happening just because of where the checkpoints in this instance end up being. If they did end up, if Abrakeydabra did end up wiping at this point in the instance, they would have to run back very, very far just because of the checkpoint does put you at the very beginning of the instance in Underrot here.
Abrakeydabra dealing with the first hazard spaghetti of the dungeon right now as they pull the Guardians on top of it, making sure to effectively spawn the explosives nearby. Now, we do know, of course, that these no-probes are immobile. They are rooted in place. Important to pull the mobs on top of them rather than keeping everything separated and having to deal with explosives far away from this all-melee comp. But a rather aggressive pull coming in here once they delete that horror. The Guardians on top of the Spirit Caller and, of course, on top of the Defiler now. So I believe they actually have 2 Death Speakers in there because there's one patrolling with the Defiler plus the original one in the Guardian group. Divinefield taking an immense amount of damage, gets dispelled by Elserat, but they reapply the dot right away as there are 2 of these Death Speakers. He doesn't care, though. Pops Shield Wall and just heads over to the 2nd Nope Rope as they cleave everything down, trying to manage the bursting as well as they can, but there's 5 stacks on the board, and they finally manage to stabilize with only this grotesque horror on the map that really does nothing if you keep interrupting its Death Bolt.
Man, we thought JB had hair in his chest. Divinefield proving that he has the hairier chest here, manning up with that pull, pulling that straight into the Nope Rope, popping his shield wall, and they're looking to pull these 2 Defilers into Spore Collar Zancha, proccing their 4th Reaping of the instance, which will eventually trickle in on top of this boss as well.
Yeah, so they effective cleave here. As long as they keep those Defilers locked down, you need 2 interrupts per to make sure you interrupt that Shadow Bolt volley and, of course, that Wither and Curse. Don't care about the Spirit Totem. Just move away from it. Just a bit of area denial will kill you, of course, if you stand near it, but you have plenty of time to get away from it. Method and A finally about to down Kragmaw here. 3% on the board for them, and they'll be moving on to do similar pulls that we just saw.
Yeah, something to note about these Defilers and their totem, though, is that it doesn't allow your tank to actually get Shockwave where he wants it positioned a lot of the time, and that ends up having to force your rogues in order to be able to like cloak and end up soaking a bunch of these mushrooms, because you do get upheavals and some of the frontal abilities, which ends up clearing the mushrooms, but a lot of them are not getting cleared, and you actually do see Dr. J and Ashan end up popping their cloak there, ending up getting all of those, as we do see the Reaping coming in onto Spore Collar Zancha as well.
Yeah, I mean, those rogues just eating so many mushrooms in game. Of course, you don't want to be doing that kind of stuff. Dr. J now getting one of the Shadow Smashes is on top of him and proccing the cheat death, something that they're going to need later. Well, actually, it might be up by the time they get to Unbound A-Bomb, but there's a lot of healing that goes on that Tyrannical boss. Very, very dangerous right now. So Dr. J will have 20% reduced max health for that 1 minute as Method and A looks to finally cleave the rest of the Guardians chasing the group right now, move over to their own grotesque horror, cleave that down. It looks like Method and A is pretty much doing the exact same pull pattern as we just saw from Abrakeydabra, but of course they're a fair bit behind.
Yeah, it's just all those deaths, honestly. Them wiping and then just having this 55 seconds of death differential in addition to that is just putting them so far behind, even though they may be a little bit close in the instance. Obviously, they're about 50% on Sporecaller Xantia behind. It's going to put them even further behind than they may seem just because of how big the death differential is here.
Yeah, I mean, it'll put them a bit behind. Divine Field doing well to move away from Sporecaller Xantia, of course, during that Festering Harvest cast. He does still melee the tank during that, so the explosion plus the melee can deal with a fair bit of damage that you don't want to do. Divine Field well positioning himself between all of the mushrooms here to make sure that he cleaves as many as he can with that frontal shockwave from Sporecaller Xantia, one of the two mechanics that eliminate mushrooms outside of players kind of face eating them and face tanking them like the rogues did there to pre-clear before the Festering Harvest. The other one, of course, is this upheaval with these glowing orange-red arrows on the players.
Yeah, I actually think that the Defilers on the side of Method and A end up getting their Withering Curse off for one tick, reducing the player's damage, so that's not really what you want to see. You want to make sure that you do get that, and the Shadow Bolt volley kicked instantly every single time by rotating 2 melee kicks in between both of those mobs. Obviously, they are running a 3 melee DPS and 1 tank comp, so they do have enough kicks available, but they ended up having one of those ticks of that Withering, of that curse end up going off as they do proc Reaping into Sporecaller Xantia here.
Definitely good that they're deciding to use a tank in their comp on these dungeons right now. Method and A.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we did see the 4 DPS in previous MDIs. You never know if something like that'll make a return in the future, but that's not the reality we live in here, as Abrakeydabra is at 4% on Sporecaller Xantia, about to finish off this boss, after which they will either stealth or pull the Faceless Corruptor as well along with them towards the last and final group of the Guardian, not the Guardians, excuse me, the Death Speaker group that they will pull together, yes, along with the Guardians and, of course, the Defiler. The Defiler is the one I was forgetting the name of, but they also pull the Grotesque Horror, something that we didn't see the other teams do, which will kind of allow them to skip the final nope rope at the end with the 2 Faceless Corruptors rather than dragging it over, Tettles.
I don't know how I actually feel about that. So I understand why they end up doing it, because you don't get super efficient cleave whenever you are doing 2 Faceless Corruptors on top of that nope rope, hazard spaghetti, whatever, that danger noodle that you end up calling it. But at the same time, it's so scary for that pack just because of how many kicks you do end up having, and making sure that you do micromanage those kicks on all of those casts is very important. Whereas in the Faceless Corruptor pack, you only have the nope rope cast to kick there.
It looks like they actually needed it anyways. They needed 2 more nope ropes, so instead of dragging both Faceless Corruptors to the first one and then the other one closer up the hill to where the final Faceless Corruptor patrols, and they didn't want to have the risk of, accidentally pulling it or proxy aggroing it, so they're just dealing with it here as we see a punt come back for the team right now, making sure that you move away from these maddening gazes. It will do a ton of damage to you if you're in a random direction, working, of course, first to kill that Hazard Spaghetti and make sure that they don't have to not only stay rooted in this place because it won't move, but also babysit its Death Bolt cast. Don't want any of those leaking through, especially with all the frontals and tentacles wildly slapping around in the distance.
Yeah, that's the reason that this pull is actually most of the time is super scary, because you have to have people in melee range of that Hazard Spaghetti in order to be able to kick it, while the Faceless Corruptors end up spawning those tentacles, and of course you have to end up moving away from the tentacles because they'll end up one-hitting you if you stand too close to them for too long, because they'll end up lashing out towards you. And you do see Abrakeydabra getting 100%, proccing their last Reaping of the instance, and they are on their way to Unbound Abomination with their Bloodlust available.
Method and A moving down here after killing Sporecaller Xantia. Had not pulled that Faceless Corruptor as the 5th Reaping Wave comes in for Abrakeydabra. They port right downstairs and get ready to pull the Unbound Abomination for the last boss of the dungeon. Typically, just as we see with all the other teams, Bloodlust is ready. Everything is combined together and cleaved down as Method and A has done the similarly large pull upstairs with the Guardians, Death Speaker, Defiler, and there's a Faceless Corruptor in there, so they're going to have to be very careful to dodge a lot of those tentacles.
And we actually do see Unbound Abomination's health not moving. The reason for this being is that he does, his energy ends up moving, and whenever his energy does hit 100, he does end up spawning 2 adds, and whenever you do kill those adds, then it will do 33% of his health per 2 adds that you do end up killing. So making sure that you're actually DPSing down Unbound Abomination, even though his health doesn't look like it's moving on the screen, is very important here. On the side of Method and A, it looks like they're all getting so low, and JB does end up actually able to heal them through that Grievous, or the bursting that they ended up getting there.
At some point, I unfortunately didn't catch it, but they did manage to squeeze in 1 one more death. They are now at 13 instead of 12, so they do have a full minute behind in terms of deaths on here. So the only way Abrakeydabra is losing this is, of course, just a full team wipe at this point. Even if they had to 4-man the rest of this boss, I'm pretty sure they could still win the rest of this map. But they still have to do well on this boss. I mean, it is a Tyrannical setting. There's a lot of residual damage going out in the form of the damage over time component that accrues slowly over the course of the fight. You can see the players right now at 3 stacks apiece. That, of course, is cleaned with this aura from the players that we see here. But you know, I mean, just a lot of battle between the two teams back and forth here, Tettles.
Was this actually a lot of battle, though? Because to me, it seemed like Method in A was...
I mean, you didn't let me finish my sentence.
Oh, sorry.
Can I finish?
Yes.
Okay, I'm done. No, but what I was going to say is really just between this and King's Rest as well, right? I mean, it was just back and forth. You know, the Abrakeydabra really kind of threw it to Method in A. Just wasn't enough for them. More deaths coming out on Method in A's side. You know, at this point, it's the Method in A that we've seen it happen before. They're able to recompose themselves, and we'll have the game 3 come out of this. It's going to be really close between the two teams, but I mean, Abrakeydabra had the choke at the end of King's Rest. Method in A certainly had a lot more issue in this dungeon compared to the King's Rest performance from Abrakeydabra.
Yep, and we did see those Visages end up getting killed on the side of Abrakeydabra there. They only need 2 more, and then they will end up being able to finish off this Unbound Abomination. And in the instance, we actually did see Shakib going down on the side of Method in A. He gets rezzed up. They do proc their last Reaping of the Instance, and they are on to Unbound Abomination, but too little, too late here. Yeah,
it's just not going to work out for them as Abrakeydabra, of course, just moves around in the circular pattern around the room, wanting to make sure that you kite away from those spores and always have somewhere to go whilst pointing the frontal from the boss, of course, not in the direction that they're going. A lot of damage coming in here from the spores should they hit the players, but there's a lot of T-clap action, thunderclap action from the warrior. He's proccing a lot of those free victory rushes, getting free healing, 20% of max health every time he does that, so just able to sustain himself for a fair amount of time while Ulcerat focuses on the group and perhaps even a bit of damage.
Yep, and the last 2 Blood Vistas just spawn on the side of Abrakeydabra. You do see Titan Keeper Herzl shooting his death laser at them and killing them right there.
Is that what that is? They truly did end up holding back on some of the pulls that we saw Method do. If they did, this is the match that they need to start busting that out for, because Abrakeydabra will be relentless about this. They will want this match so hard to stay in that upper bracket and not get pushed to lower again.
Yeah, but it was super high risk, high reward on the side of Method in A. The stuff that we predicted that they were like skipping out on is pulling Lord and Lady Waycrest with all the trash, which is a very dangerous tank pull. As we do see mirrored pulls here on the side of Method in A and Abrakeydabra, as they do pull the Acolyte and all the Toads into Heartsbane Triad here.
And both of them on either side. Shakib is the one that gets mind controlled by the first phase of Sister Selena. Group DPSs him down below 60%, starting on Malady here and moving on to Briar in just a moment, as both teams looking to complete their first phase and then recycle the Witches sub 50% and finish them off before they get the Dire Ritual cast at 100 energy. Really shouldn't be much of a concern for these teams, especially in a fortified environment. Most of the danger that's going to come in this dungeon is the trash.
Yeah, we actually do see Shakib on the side of Method in A spiking up to 65k DPS, while we do see a Shine on the side of Abrakeydabra sitting a little bit lower at about 47k. He ended up probably not using all of his cooldowns like on pull there, and he ended up kind of trying to pace them, allow those Acolytes to kind of sit higher health for a little bit longer periods of time and get a little bit more efficient cleave, but it's just ending up being a little bit slower on the bosses as we do see Selena go down on the side of Method in A, but Abrakeydabra is still working on that boss.
Yeah, Abrakeydabra is still working on it, and Ulcerat's having a bit of struggle getting out of these Grievous stacks. Just finally manages to do it now that they get to the second wave of Sister Malady here, but just between the Jagged Nettles and a lot of the damage coming in from Briar, there's just a lot of healing needed, and it started to snowball into the Grievous effect that where, of course, in the dungeon, once you hit that 90% threshold, you'll start accruing that increasing damage over time unless you're healed back above that 90%. But nonetheless, we do have the first kill on the Triad here as Method in A rushes out the door and starts to pull these captains back into the hall, which we know along with those first horrors. A lot of damage from this trash. Very dangerous for the tank here, not to mention the raging effect that's going to hit them at 30%.
Yeah, so they are pulling all of those pulls in, packs into the Soul Essences. It's also important to note that that door actually does end up opening after you do end up downing Heartsbane Triad, and Nerf hit 1% health there. That was actually so close for him to going down, but he does end up recovering, and it looks like they're actually going to be able to maybe pull this pull off here.
And we just said how dangerous it is for the tanks right now, and he just can't get out of that four stack of Grievous as JB's just pumping so much healing to him. Finally, some defense comes up for Method in the form of some peeling from the rest of the team. We have Ursul's Vortex go up. We should see a bump from the Typhoon. There it is. And I'm not sure if they used the Ring of Peace yet, but if they didn't, it will be available to them. It's something that we see on the side of Abrakeydabra as Divine Field just kind of gets away from all those raging mobs. So much damage comes in from them. And I did want to comment on this, but not before I saw for myself for sure. But technically, Nerf Clap did actually die there. His Trinket did proc. He does have that one Somebody's Bargain proc on there. Won't be available again for 6 minutes. And if Method in A does some of those risky pulls that we saw, especially combining Matron Brindle along with the second boss and the Reaping Wave at 40%, that not having that trinket could be a big problem for Nerf Clap.
Yeah, we actually saw Nerf kind of scrambling and trying to play more defense, while we did see Divine there going pretty much full offense. He ended up doing like way more damage than Nerf. I think he ended up spiking all the way at 150k DPS, so really sitting in there, using his avatar and his Thunderclap in order to be able to DPS down the mobs quickly, as Abrakeydabra does a huge pull in the courtyard here, while it's being mirrored with very similar pull on the side of Method in A.
Yeah, interesting to see that both of these teams and Method you all have the exact same strategy so far. Backtracking with the captains into the first room with the horrors, doing a very aggressive pull here in the courtyard as well. We'll have to see if they're all on the checkpoint or check mark. We know Method in A is. We'll have to see what Abrakeydabra does to pull the second Reaping Wave on top of the Soulbound Goliath along with Matron Brindle. So we will see soon exactly what comes to fruition for these two teams. Method in A dealing with their first Reaping Wave that Abrakeydabra is dealing with, but Divine Field taking a fair bit of damage as he leaps back across all the mobs, getting the Dispel from Elstrat with all these Reaping Souls coming in, but he just can't get out of his Grievous stack right now. Ramps up to 4, residual damage hitting the rest of the group, something that we saw be quite detrimental to some of the teams earlier as well, but a lot of healing needed from Elstrat, manages to get safely through it, and it looks like they've mostly settled down with this first Reaping pack. Method in A, though, still dealing with a Rune Weaver and a bunch of the Reaping.
Yeah, Abrakeydabra actually, it looks like they kind of deviated from the pull strategy that Method in A did. Abrakeydabra actually ended up grabbing some of those guards on the right-hand side through that doorway, while Method in A ends up just kind of dealing with the Reaping. It looks like one of the mobs, it looks like the Rune Weaver ended up having that Soul Effigy on it. It might have actually been an Acolyte that ended up transforming, and if that was the case, then that would actually be pretty bad, because that would actually mean that Method in A ended up losing count for that mob.
Yeah, that's super scary with the Soul Fetish, that 50% extra damage and haste on that mob. That's why it was glowing blue there, and Nerf Clap was just desperately trying to get away from it. Fortunately, no extra deaths on the side of Method in A. No more extra deaths on the side of Method in A. They've already had to use their battle res and have 2 deaths on the board right now, so it's already getting a bit sloppy for them, and their backs are up against the wall as Nerf Clap does not have the trinket available. Yoda does not have the cheat death available. The team is very vulnerable right now. No battle res is available on the board, so things are looking much better right now for Abrakeydabra versus the Method NA side.
Yep, and Abrakeydabra, you do see Divine Field popping his Lightfoot Potion, doing a little bit smaller of a pull than we did see out of the both of the Method teams this week. And he doesn't end up pulling all the way down the hallway and pulling the archers into it, but he does end up pulling a pretty sizable amount of those maggots as well. We actually did see Divine Field end up proccing his cheat death trinket in the Bon Somebody's Bargain there a little bit earlier, so he does not have that available at his disposal. So maybe he might elect to pull a little bit more conservatively. Somehow I doubt it. I think he's just full steam ahead there.
Yeah, full steam ahead, and if both teams are kind of teetering on the edge of this very aggressive pull with the second Reaping, Soulbound Goliath, Matron Brindle, and the trash surrounding her, then both tanks are going to be in that really vulnerable state without the trinket. So we might have a couple tank deaths on either side here. We'll have to see advantage in some sense to Abrakeydabra that they do have the battle res, but hopefully they're not planning for the tank death, because that's a pretty bad strategy to kind of form around you right now. And here it goes right now. Brindle getting pulled along with the Soulbound Goliath on Method and A side. They haven't procced their Reaping just yet. They will be doing so once those Jagged Hounds on the side die. That will be easy kills for them as the Reaping now starts spawning for Method and A side and starts invading the side of their screen with Soulbound Goliath on top of Nerf Clap. There is Matron Brindle in there and a Thorn Shaper. You need to make sure Soul Fetish does not go off on Matron Brindle. That'd be absolutely disastrous with the kind of pull they've just done here. Abrakeydabra moving pretty slow here. I'm not really sure what's going on with them. They still haven't procced their second Reaping or pulled the boss yet, and they were a bit ahead of Method and A.
Yeah, they're just doing some of the hallway pulls with their trash, just a little bit slower than we have seen out of both of the Method teams ending up being today. Method and A obviously pulling Matron Brindle into Soulbound Goliath, a very tank-heavy pull. We do see Nerf. He looks like he does have access to that Bon Somebody's Bargain trinket again, so that will give him a little bit more survivability if they do when they do end up proccing their Reaping. reaping, or whenever they did end up proccing their reaping, and it allows him to be able to tank Matron Brindle and Soulbound Goliath just with a little bit more peace of mind, as he does get incredibly low there, resetting the Soulbound Goliath with the fire, but JB does have to pop that Tranquility in order to be able to top everybody up through that Grievous and through that fire. Scary
moment there for Method and A, but they managed to recover. Abrakeydabra doing the same aggressive pull with the second reaping on top of the pack. Matron Brindle to boot with the Soulbound Goliath too. Now, Divine Field does not have that trinket available. I believe the aura just phased during this boss encounter. We clearly saw it proc during the trash, so we know it's on cooldown right now. So it begs the question, maybe Nerf Clap doesn't have his available either right now. Nonetheless, the tanks are very vulnerable on this fight. Method and A has managed to stabilize. Matron Brindle is dead, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we can see her reaping Ghost on the side there, and Soulbound Goliath has hit 42% for them. Abrakeydabra, I'm not really sure what held them up with some of that hallway trash. They did deal with some of those Gorgers, and they're just so slow to kill because they have a high amount of health. They jump around in all directions, so it took them a bit too long to get this pull started, and unfortunately they find themselves a fair bit behind Method NA, even beyond the 2 deaths, 10 seconds on the board.
Yeah, Method NA just ends up dealing with this courtyard just a little bit quicker, consolidating it, taking it in one less pull overall, and that you do see that reflected in the difference in Soulbound Goliath's health here. Obviously, Method NA sitting about 20% and Abrakeydabra sitting at about 50-ish, so you do see that just in the differential between the two. But it won't end up mattering in the end. It does end up coming down to who ends up making more mistakes, and we have some really big pulls coming in Raw's room to really define these two teams here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's going to be big. Well, hang on. We didn't see Method and they actually do that pull. We saw them split up the 60% reaping wave and then do the full roll pull. So not combining them together as we've seen Team D and Method EU do. So we'll have to see if that was up their sleeve the entire time. But they knew that they were comfortably ahead last time, so maybe they opted not to do it. This time, Abrakeydabra certainly is on their heels much closer than their previous Manor series. So Method and A now moving back into the hallway for Rawl, and will get a pull going that will put them, probably the entire hallway here, that will put them just sub 60%. After which they will grab the rest of it, and JB, should they pull the Raw room with the reaping, will need to have a little drink with his Shadow Meld.
Yep, and you do see Nerf end up running up those stairs just a little bit in order to be able to line of sight those mobs, in order to be able to just get a little bit of separation from them. You actually do see Lighty drop that Ring of Peace just a little bit early in order to allow the mobs just to get grouped up super easily for Shakib to be able to dunk those mobs into the ground here with this Unholy Death Knight. We're on the side of Abrakeydabra. They are just finally downing Soulbound Goliath with Divine Field dropping so low there.
Oh, they're just gambling at this point. This is usually when I know how this works out. The tank goes, I got this, don't worry. We don't need a reset anymore. It's low percent, but I also don't want to use any of my heavy resources like shield while knowing some of the pulls coming up right there. So you kind of took a bit of a risk there. It worked out for them. They didn't get toppled off. We do see that he still doesn't have that trinket available now that we're out of the boss fight. Similar pull coming in here from Abrakeydabra as they start to prepare their third reaping wave, which likely they hope, and we hope, that they will drag into the boss room. Same with Method and A here as they slowly build up the stairs. 54% trash for them. Abrakeydabra 48% trash.
Yeah, we actually do see Abrakeydabra just taking it a little bit quicker, not using that Ring of Peace, not being patient with all those maggots, and we actually do see them taking the pull, just like a very similar pull between the two teams, but he just ends up taking it a little bit slower on the side of Method and A here. Abrakeydabra here ending up dealing with the last couple maggots and making sure that they don't get freezing trap there, as you do see it on your screen here, while Method and A is dealing with some of these survivalists in this room as well.
Yeah, Abrakeydabra 55%. Now, these maggots will not proc their reaping wave, so they're going to pull just 3 mobs here. They're going to kite it back towards Rawl's room and kind of dance them around in front of Rawl's room entrance, just to make sure that they kill them at the same time and proc that reaping. But actually, a rather aggressive pull coming in here. Usually, you only see a 3 pull just to get to 60%, but they end up pulling the rest of the room together and cleaving it down. Watch that frost trap. Move, boys, move. Making sure that they don't get frozen on top of it, while still trying to maintain effective cleave on top of them. But they're running out of space in terms of melee distance from the mobs. So Divine Field, they're either going to need a bump with a Ring of Peace or the Typhoon, or they're going to need to line of sight around the corner to get some of those ranged mobs away from there. 58% for Abrakeydabra as Method and A has procced their reaping and is doing the full room pull right now that we saw Method EU do. And here we go. Keep an eye on the Unholy DK's damage as Bloodlust has popped. A lot of damage coming in on Nerf Clap right now as the third reaping wave invades along with all the trash in Rawl's room.
Yeah, and we do see Shakib spike up all the way up to 600k DPS. We actually did see the Ring of Peace coming out a little bit preemptively, and JP does end up going down. This is so bad. They do end up having a battle res because of the Death Knight, but then Nerf ends up going down, and then Method A is going to wipe here.
Method and A is going to wipe. The pull was just too mighty for them right now as a full team wipe comes in, but Abrakeydabra answers suit on the left side. They get the Rawl rolling right now as they pull everything in the room together, getting as much damage out as they can. They know they have a finite amount of time before Divine Field just runs runs out of cooldowns. Trinket procs again. Underrot doing as much healing as he can to make sure that he's keeping the tank healthy through all of this raging going on right now. Divine Field dipping so low, hops back across, needs to stay in melee range of the boss because the boss is static in place there and will melee one of them, but he goes down and we get the battle res coming out. It's too late though as Ashine goes down. Swagfist now, Dr. J goes down, all full wipe coming out of Abrakeydabra on the left side here as well. It is just too much for these teams to dance with as Method NA has released and come back into the room. Fortunate for both of these teams is that they've killed most of the trash and reaping associated with this massive pull, but it was just not enough. And the peak damage that we saw, for instance, from the Unholy DKs did not reach some of the 1 mil DPS that we saw in previous series. Yes, yes. That's funny, Tettles. He did the Dr. Evil thing. But also the tanks just couldn't hang with the damage. They ultimately just got down. Some of it was because the DPS was a fair bit lower and the mobs just lived too long. The tanks don't have unlimited shield wall resources where they could just face tank these enraged mobs.
Yeah, it looks like Method NA actually has a really big pull in a raw still, even though they did pop the Bloodlust and Nerf ends up going down again. They don't have a battle res available and they're going to end up wiping one more time. Even though Abrakeydabra did the hold my beer, I'm about to throw as well, it looks like this is actually going to be okay for Abrakeydabra because they only have like 1 or 2 mobs that they end up having to pull in a raw, while Method NA had like half the rune still left available to them.
Abrakeydabra is definitely very stable here. The only kind of next choke point in the fight here will be the Steward that comes in and ultimately some of this trash that's going to proc their 4th Reaping Wave, including the maggots from the kitchen, but they have control over when they will proc that 4th Reaping Wave, so they want to make sure they're nice and ready for that. A lot of enraged damage coming in on Divine Field as finally they down those 2 Banquet Stewards, which deal a fair bit of damage to the tank innately, but when they're enraged, especially if we don't get the Soothe cast off from Underrot, who's busy making sure Divine Field's nice and healthy, it can be detrimental. 14th time's the char here for Method NA as they pull once again into Rawl with a lot of the trash coming up, but every time they've kind of done this, more and more trash has been kind of killed on the side, so it's not as bad each time. It does get easier, but it's just costing them an immense amount of time, not only just because they have to run back every time, but they have deaths accruing on the board.
Yeah, I think the pull went wrong for Method NA the first time around with how early that Ring of Peace ended up coming out. It ended up separating the pack into like 2 or 3 different segments, and it allowed Shakib to not like get all the damage that he should have been able to get off on Raw and all the rest of the trash. So it ended up just costing them, but then they ended up having a couple deaths as JB does end up getting 2 stacks of that debuff there from those Pallid Gorgers, but he ends up being okay. That was actually very scary for JB.
Yeah, Gorgers do a lot of damage, and of course their Wretch Frontal is also hits quite heavily, but it is dodgeable. It does snapshot its direction, so you have to make sure to sidestep it, even in this limited melee space that the players have on the side of Method NA. Abrakeydabra has proc their 4th Reaping Wave and is dealing with it and some of the pull from the kitchen as we see the Ring of Peace defensively come down for Divine Field. They've dealt with it on top of Rawl. Now, Rawl, is, even in this fortified setting, is a fair bit of health, so 20%, if the tank goes down here, they're not going to be able to just kind of scrap DPS him for the remainder of the fight. Runeweaver in there as well, casting the full etch on purpose, players not interrupting it. Not really too dangerous of a cast, so they're trying to give their tank Divine Field a bit of breathing space by purposefully not interrupting that. Nerf Clap dipping a bit low here again, as Yoda does as well. A lot of attention and healing needed from JB just to make sure nobody else in the group dies.
Yeah, and we do see Rawl on the side of Abrakeydabra getting so close to death here, and they're going to be able to finish up their Rawl pull with only 1 full wipe, where on the side of Method NA we do have 14 deaths coming through for them. So it's going to be a pretty sizable death differential with 40 seconds in the favor of Abrakeydabra here.
Method NA now 25% on Rawl as Abrakeydabra is indeed heading downstairs, dealing with the rest of that Runeweaver. It will be the remaining percentage that we've seen from the other teams needed. After this, they will just stealth through the entire basement area and pop up in Lord and Lady Waycrest boss room. There will be a substantial trash pull in there, but the reality will be whether or not they decide to do the boss on top of it. That's where the real danger will come in. So we'll have to see what Abrakeydabra does here in just a moment. Rawl finally stabilized on the side of Method NA as they reach 3% on the boss and will be heading downstairs soon as well. But their Runeweaver is a fair bit higher percentage health than his Abrakeydabras, and they need to finish that off before they're able to mass stealth down to the basement.
Yeah, but we do actually see similar percent coming in for both teams here. They are like running identical percentage going into the bottom part of this instance, and Abrakeydabra actually does end up pulling Lord and Lady Waycrest into this very massive trash pull as all the cooldowns come out, Bloodlust comes out, and they're starting to DPS down Lord and Lady Waycrest right here.
Yes, a lot of damage needed here, and a lot of damage incoming on the tank. Now, they have a couple of tricks up their sleeve, of course, in the form of things like Spell Reflect. Really well done to put that Ring of Peace down there as the warding candles go down from one of the Diviner, if I'm not mistaken. So now there's those candles, as long as you stand in them, including the boss, will decrease damage taken by 50%. So you got to get out of those as quickly as possible if you opt to do a pull like this with the boss in the trash. Trash has finally been deleted. Large amount of damage coming out of Ashine DK right now. Just to make sure you delete complete all of the trash before you start to run out of space with the warding candles going down, and of course dancing around the arcane hits from Lady Waycrest as we see her playing her instrument there.
What is that instrument, like an organ maybe?
It looks like a guitar to me.
Okay, anyways, we do see Method in A doing a very similar pull with all the trash into Lord and Lady Waycrest as well. Whenever Lord Waycrest does go through 3 full cycles of getting down to 10% and then healing all the way back up to full, Lady Waycrest will spawn. You do see her hitting 10% health here. She will play her guitar one more time and then spawn out into the room at 10% health. Obviously, the health is very similar between the two mobs, even though it does show 10% for Lady Waycrest and 72% for Lord Waycrest here.
So Method and A, of course, wasting no time and doing the same thing here, pulling the trash with the boss, but they're just mimicking Abrakeydabра's pulls at this point. Abrakeydabra, after this, of course, will get to the Gloom Horrors, the 7 of them, try to kind of delete those off the map. I'm not sure if they're going to be aggressive and pull it with Gorak Tool as well, which is what a method you do earlier, but Abrakeydabra, I mean, they're on the same boss. The trash is dead for both sides. Everything's safe, but the sheer death difference of 40 seconds for the 8 deaths between the two teams, I'm sure Abrakeydabra knows just how ahead they are at this point, so if I were them, I probably wouldn't risk the Gorak Tool pull and let Method have to make that kind of play to even try and catch up, because that is a very dangerous pull.
Yeah, we did actually see even Method EU struggling with that Gorak Tool pull just because of how much HP healing is actually required. Even if you are in such a good spot like Xaylia was, it is still a scary pull, as Abrakeydabra does end up pulling these Gloom Horrors, and it looks very similar to like what you said. They're end up going to take it slow and steady. They might end up using the Ring of Peace here in a second, as Elsarat is not on the screen right here, so the Gloom Horrors end up charging the furthest target. He actually does end up dropping his Ursul's Vortex, making sure to stand out of range so those get gripped back before they do end up hitting him. And Method in A here, DPSing down Lord and Lady Waycrest here, but they, like you said, they were just so far behind just because of the death differential between the two teams.
Yep, doing really well to coordinate. After the Ursul's Vortex, they of course coordinated the leg sweep from the Monk, followed by the Shockwave from the Warrior, stunning the mobs in place, and just as that ended, they put the Ring of Peace down, and at that point you gotta kill the mobs because you're out of crowd control, and your healer will die if too many of them jump on him. So well done by Abrakeydabra to do that as they move down to Gorak Tool, the final boss of the dungeon. Method and A still working on that 4th boss, and then still needs to deal with the Gloom Horrors as Nerf Clap procs his cheat death trinket here at the last moment on Lord Waycrest. Not going to have that available now for this dangerous pull. I'm not sure how Method and A handles their pull. It seems like they want to actually pull it upstairs to the rest of the room. Oh no, they're actually doing a skip with it downstairs. So Nerf Clap doesn't have the trinket available, but he is going to die on purpose unless he Shadow Melts here.
Yeah, this is actually looking
no, they're actually going for the big pull.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is actually looking still very good on the side of Abrakeydabra. They are obviously like 35% ahead of Method in A here, even though Method in A is doing a very large pull into Gorak Tool here. Neither teams obviously have lost because they ended up, actually Method in A ended up not using their Bloodlust on that Lord and Lady Waycrest pull, which even makes that pull even more impressive from their side. But you do see Abrakeydabra here DPSing down Gorak Tool, sitting at 50%. It looks like they just might end up taking it here.
Yeah, they're likely going to take it. I mean, this is a super dangerous pull. Nerf Clap finally pops his shield wall. Everything's enraging right now. He doesn't have the trinket available. The cheat death trinket had just procced on the boss prior right now. They need to kill these Gloom Horrors before that shield wall runs out, or Nerf Clap's just going to run out of resources. And finally, they manage to start killing most of them off. So Nerf Clap is safe, and they do manage to get that rest of the pull. No death from the tank. They do have the battle rest available. It just came up. Fortunately, they don't need to use it. So now they're stuck doing the boss the traditional way, one-on-one, like the rest of the group is doing here on Abrakeydabra. But unfortunately, 45 seconds left on Bloodlust for Method and A will not be their saving grace. And even with that, they're just way too behind on deaths.
Yep, and with the Gorak Tool hitting 15%, they're no longer killing any of these slavers anymore. They're just kind of committing to the Gorak Tool kill. And they're going to end up pushing themselves in the upper bracket finals versus Method EU here with I wouldn't say it was the cleanest Waycrest Manor, but it was definitely Method in A's final resting place.
The clean is a horrible overstatement. That was an absolute bloodbath between the two teams. That Raw, the Butcher Room, I mean, he's the Butcher for a reason. He just chops chopping everyone up right there. But
set and ready to go for Learn to Fly and Limit Game 1 on Tol Dagor.
Yeah, so this time we're actually going to get the start off as we see both teams here using their Shroud to get to the first boss. Now, we've seen a number of different kind of pulls here to start, where sometimes they just go straight to the boss and do the boss only, and some teams actually pull trash on top of the first boss, as we see Learn to Fly do here. Yeah,
it's definitely a difference in strategy. A lot of the reason that teams end up actually not pulling trash on the Sand Queen is because you only do need about 20% of your count coming in this first part part of the instance, like all of it together, but then you're able to get actually 80% of your count just from the cannons themselves. We actually did see Learn to Fly pop Bloodlust immediately on the Sand Queen, even though she does end up burrowing underground and end up doing an upheaval. As we have seen on the side of Limit, they're being a little bit patient, not pulling any trash into it, and then they pop the Bloodlust after the Sand Queen does end up coming up, and then they actually start pulling some of the crabs into the Sand Queen here.
Yeah, the only team that saved Bloodlust and didn't use it at all on the Sand Queen is actually MOTHERLOAD, that had a little bit of a different strategy where they would use the Bloodlust later on for this difficult trash that we've talked about in the Howlers room, right? So I feel like that's a good strategy by MOTHERLOAD, but no one else really adapted to this strategy yet, so we'll see what the other teams do later on, as this is the first time we see Tol Dagor this weekend in this cup. We see Learn to Fly did manage to finish off the trash here, he got 8%, while Limit pulled a little bit of the trash on top of it too at this point as they pop their Bloodlust. I kind of like this strategy by Limit because they wait for the upheaval, then they wait for the boss to come back up, and then they pull the trash on top to get more value, more Bloodlust value on the boss while also getting the trash too.
Yeah, but it ended up looking like it did end up mattering in terms of like the boss health percentage. The boss is dying relatively evenly for both teams here, even though there was just a little bit distinguishment between the two teams as to when they did pop their Bloodlust. But like you said, I actually did prefer that Bloodlust on the side of Limit. They got a little bit better uptime on the boss itself, but they ended up not being able to capitalize on it. We actually do see a 5% trash differential between Learn to Fly and Limit, though, as Learn to Fly has pulled a little bit more trash on top of the Sand Queen here.
Ooh, Jeb actually got hit by one of those sand traps. As he goes down, they don't have a battle rest to get him up. I do think this is going to be a full team up. I don't think there's a way that Limit can finish up this boss. As the upheaval comes up, still 30% on a tyrannical setting. I don't think they can finish it off with the Sandstorm AoE coming in and just general add damage coming in from Limit's side. It's just, he got hit by one of those traps. He literally just walked on top, got stunned, dropped really low, didn't manage to recover after the stun and just went down. So a huge mistake by the rest of it from Limit coming in here. As Learn to Fly having a lot cleaner run here as they're 70% on the Sand Queen and 10% trash. Yeah,
maybe Max will actually be able to live through these buzzing drones just by getting Victory Rush procs here. But we actually do see the rest of his team getting incredibly low, as we actually do see the debuff coming out on Lip. He has already procced his Cheat Death, of course. He looks like he's going to be getting topped here, but this upheaval is actually going to put one of the three team members' actual danger here if they don't have major defenses. We actually saw Trill pop his Karma a little bit earlier. He actually does end up shadow melting that off right there, or vanishing it off right there. So that was actually very good on the side of Limit. While Learn to Fly here, finally killing the Sand Queen, 10% ahead of Limit just because of Limit's major mistakes with deaths here.
Yes, okay, so maybe if they finish off the boss here, it's still just going to cost them so much time, but it's going to be a hard task for them to finish it off just because of the Sandstorm AoE damage. Now, you do have a little bit of off-healing coming in from the Windwalker, of course, and Rogues, you know, they're just very tanky by themselves and have self-healing as well. It's just going to be a max to survive this, as the boss is on 1%, and I think they're just barely going to make it as the boss goes down, so thankfully for them, they didn't have a full team wipe coming in, so it's, you know, it's going to cost them a lot of time, but without having a full team wipe, it's not as bad as it could have been. So Learn to Fly already on their way to the next boss here. They shrouded the trash here, and they're going to do some big pulls in the Jess Hallis room.
Yep, and you did actually see them end up shadow melting off a lot of the trash that they ended up blinding or walking past, and we actually do see them use their other shroud in order to be able to walk past some of these mobs. It looks like Revo Fevi might have ended up body pulling them, or okay, maybe that Arsonist was actually intended, but you actually do see that C-Speaker end up actually getting body pulled by Revo Fevi, either intended or not, as we do see Limit making their way through this jail as well.
Yeah, we see Limit on the side. They're opening some of the cages here. I think Limit might have gotten incumbent too early, had to shadow melt or vanish rather to get rid of aggro. Now there's a bunch of cages in this area that they just skipped on Limit side. If you open them, you can get 4 different kinds of buffs. Usually what teams do is only open the right side because it doesn't take too much time. If you want to open all the cages, it just takes so long. So the buffs are RNG, which one you get depending on the cage that you open. So sometimes you can get this attack power that you want, and sometimes you can have bad luck and don't get it. It's pretty much like a 50-50. So if you lose the 50-50, then you're in trouble because attack power is very important. Now Learn to Fly are working on those C-Speakers.
Yeah, you actually did see that Block Warden enrage as well. Something noted about the Block Warden's enrage is you actually have to soothe him twice in order to be able to get that enrage effect off. So Revo Fevi popping major defensives there in order to be able to tank that Raging Block Warden, as they do proc their Reaping, and we do have some of the mobs jumping up to them as well. On the side of Limit, though, they're on the same level as Learn to Fly here, and they are dealing with some of the trash inside of Jess Howells' room here.
Yeah, Limit actually pulled Jess Howells through the cage here on the left side, so they didn't go all the way around like Learn to Fly does. They're doing this sneaky pull where you basically pull the boss through the cage with a chi wave or something like that from the Windwalker coming in. Now we've seen multiple teams try this exact pull but fail to it, because there's multiple things that you gotta watch out for. There's trash that gets pulled when the boss runs around, and there's other things that can go wrong. As you see Max actually go down, they do have a battle rest to get him back up, so they might be able to recover here, but this is the last mistake they can make. This is the last thing they can do. Now at this point, they don't have any battle rests left.
Yeah, it looks like whenever Jess ended up phasing there, he ended up stunning the whole entire group as he normally does, but then it looked like Max was just continuously getting hit by some of the trash that they had pulled on top of Jess there, and it ended up killing him. We actually did see one of the C speakers blinded off to the side there. That looked like that ended up getting dealt with whenever Jess ended up phasing there, as Bobby has walked into melee here. Bobby and Jess have very similar abilities. Bobby actually ends up vicious mauling somebody and requires a kick, but then they both have Howling Fears that do require kicks as well. You do see that vicious mauling coming out on the screen, getting kicked very quickly, as you do see Learn to Fly here phasing Jess as well, doing this fight in the traditional way, running with Jess Howells, DPSing him down as he does open up the cages here.
Yeah, you see Max dropping very low as the boss pretty much pulled an arsonist on the way, because as soon as the boss faces on 17%, he goes all the way back on where he spawned from, opens the cages from that side, and then goes all the way back around to them. Now, on the way back, he will pull an arsonist, pull some other trash as well on the way, so they have to deal with the boss and the arsonist at the same time. That's why Max is struggling so much to survive here, as it's just so much damage on top of the boss as well. Now, we see Learn to Fly just playing more of a traditional strategy, where they walked all the way around, and they're just playing the boss normally, basically.
Yeah, you actually do see a C speaker on the side of Learn to Fly as well, which is very imperative that they do get that watery dome kicked, as you did actually see them end up interrupting. We actually see Max go down on the side of Team Limit again, and this might end up being a full wipe here, as they do not have their tank, and Jess is at 20% health still. As you do see the whole entire group get feared, they end up proccing their reaping, and it looks like it's just going to be a full team wipe on the side of Limit, whereas Learn to Fly here, dodging these flashing daggers here while Bobby's running across the other side of the room here, making sure that they do line of sight Bobby's fear is very important for them.
Yeah, this Limit, I think the name of the game is here that they're just trying. Their pulls are just too big. They just think they can do them, but if it works 1 out of 10 times, that's not enough in a tournament setting where you only have 1 try. Maybe it works for the time trials where you have 5 tries, but in a tournament setting, you can't try multiple times. You only have 1. So if you do those huge pulls and you have a success chance of less than 50%, as we've seen them wiping Waycrest multiple times, wiping other dungeons multiple times, it's just too much on them. Maybe not enough practice for Limit here, as those pulls are just not working out. Maybe they just, if they don't have enough practice time, maybe they just have to try to play a little bit safer, as this is clearly just not working out for them. And as I mentioned earlier, this kind of sneaky pull where you pull the boss through the cage, we've seen multiple times that other teams failed to this too. So most teams just went away from the strategy because there's just too much room of failure going in. And Limit is trying it anyway and failing. As we can see, just over and over, the strategy is just not working out. Now Learn to Fly already in the cannon area, and they're gonna get a lot of trash percentage within a couple of seconds.
Yeah, and Jeet does end up going down on the side of Limit. It looks like Trill ends up being able to res him up. Learn to Fly ends up doing a massive pull here, as we did see Rebuff Heavy popping his Lightfoot potion and running through the officers' quarters, getting all of these officers here. And you do see these spotters here getting enraged. He does end up taken out by the cannon very quickly there, as you do see one of the rogues, Undad, sitting in that cannon, deep, hitting those mobs and doing 700k DPS. He's a very powerful rogue.
Yeah, you see, one of the rogues didn't go over to the other cannon yet. We usually see the rogues kind of split up. You see one rogue being in this cannon and the other rogue just kind of stealthing over to the other side and using the other cannon to deal with that trash in the meantime. But we see both rogues still kind of being on this side, playing it a little bit safer, making sure they deal with this huge trash pull here to start, as they proc their 60% reaping wave. So they're proccing 2 reaping waves at the same time here.
Yeah, you actually did see the Ring of Peace coming out on the side of Learn to Fly, and it was actually, it kind of separated out some of the mobs there, not allowing for the cannon to be able to accurately shoot down all these mobs here. But you do see this reaping getting taken care of here by the cannon. I think Dilemma is kind of waiting for some of these mobs to order to be able to go over to that other side and wait for the cannon, because proccing your reaping at a bad time, even if you are in the cannon, is not optimal. So they probably do have a strategy involved where they do end up proccing the reaping at specific points, and I would assume Dilemma does end up walking over there eventually, but not yet. As you do see Limit getting Jess down to 70%, proccing his intermission again, and they are just back on him, and they're pulling him into the exact same spot and just doing it over again. So they have made their way back up to his room. Their Bloodlust is coming up in a couple seconds for both sides here, and it is a learn to fly's game here, honestly. They would have to have a catastrophic wipe at this point for them to be able to be in a bad position.
Oh, most definitely. It's Learn to Fly that had a very clean run here, 0 deaths so far. They're on their way to get their 80% Reaping Wave, and once they have cleared this whole area here, they're on their way to the next boss. Now, the only thing that is going to be very difficult for them is the last boss, of course, and this is why they're saving their Bloodlust all the way to the last boss. And we see, of course, also Dilemma walking over to this other cannon here, and now they're dealing with those mobs at the very same time. You see Dilemma shooting from the right side as Undead is shooting from the left side, just dealing with the trash simultaneously at the same time, and now they're proccing their Reaping Wave and dealing with that.
Yeah, you actually did see Dilemma end up blinding one of the mobs as well in order to be able to keep him in position. Once he gets hit by the cannon, he will end up proccing. He will end up coming out of that combat. As he does get DPS down by the cannon, he'll end up coming out of that blind there. But we do see the Reaping get a Ring of Peace out as Revofevi ends up running down, and they look like they're going to be getting in this cannon at the corner point and firing down at that Reaping that's coming at them. Actually, Dilemma ends up shooting these Marines in this officer pack in order to be able to get this pack DPS down quickly while the Reaping does end up coming to them slowly.
Yeah, I think what happened there, Dilemma had to leave the cannon and use tricks again on Revo, because, of course, if you are in a cannon and you're shooting the Marines and those casters, you will have aggro, even though you are in the cannon. So those casters and the shooters will shoot you in the cannon, and you might as well just die if you're the one having aggro. So this is why the rogues are always doing the cannons, because they can put tricks on the tank, redirecting the aggro they're creating on those mobs onto the tank. And the tank then can just line of sight, go far away from the mobs so he doesn't have to deal with them, while the cannons can shoot them freely without dying. Yeah,
and you actually did see Revofevi heroic leap away in order to be able to not get shot by Dilemma there, as you do actually see that officer running towards Dilemma as his tricks of the trade did end up fading. Dilemma ended up getting one more shot off, and they have pulled Knight Captain Valeri here, while Limit is just finishing off Jess Howlis.
Yeah, so Learn to Fly actually got 98%. We've seen most teams go a little bit less percentage here, because there's still a couple of mobs right after this boss, in between this boss and the last boss. So most teams have a little bit less percentage here, but Learn to Fly, because they pulled trash on top of the first boss, ended up having a little bit more here, and they only have to deal with one more mob at the very end. So what they might end up doing is actually pull one mob on top of the last boss and just keep it CC'd in a corner, and then just kill it at the very end. But the last boss definitely causes a lot of trouble for a lot of teams, so it might not be the safest strategy, especially when they're so far ahead at this point. So maybe they just end up proccing the Reaping safely after this boss, deal with it, and just go to the last boss, because all they have to do at this point is play safe and make sure they finish the dungeon.
Yeah, so the main mechanic on Knight Captain Valeri, as you do see on the side of Learn to Fly, are these barrels and how they end up being positioned across the whole entire room whenever they do get lit, either through the Cinder Flame.
Oh, no, Edelweiss.
Oh, Edelweiss ended up going down. They have no real way to reset this boss or battle res Edel, as they don't end up having an engineering res or a Death Knight or anything. So this is actually very scary. I think Revofevi might be able to tank this, but this is from a lot of health on Knight Captain Valeri being at 45% here.
Yeah, so this boss usually doesn't do any sort of AoE damage except this one magic debuff that we see getting applied to random members, but even that debuff doesn't really do a lot of damage. Now, the tank is the only one that has to worry here. The only off-heal they have is the Monk, as we can see him cast Vivify here, as he has the magic debuff on him again. But in theory, they should be able to survive, but you never know. Like, Proud Warriors usually don't have that much self-healing to deal with the damage here, but thankfully, Valeri just kind of does Cinder Flame a lot, where she doesn't hit the boss, hit the tank, I mean, does other casts where she doesn't hit the tank. So there's a lot of downtime where Revo can kind of relax and just make sure they heal back out. But then they also have to deal with those barrels by themselves. We see one of them almost covering the whole entire area.
Yeah, you actually, I think one of the rogues ended up cloaking that ignition on him, which is actually very good, because it ended up allowing him to take a lot less damage. Or the Fuse Lighter. The Dilemma does end up going down. Drastic is at 1% with a Fuse Lighter dot on him. He's spamming Vivify on himself in order to be able to try to keep himself up, as Knight Captain Valeri is sitting at 17%. They might be able to still deal with this. You do see Dad here grabbing that barrel, moving it as quickly as possible in order to not have it ignited on top of the whole entire group. You do actually see Limit dealing with their last reaping of the instance that they're probably going to end up dealing with here, and they're going to be making their way to Knight Captain Valeri here in a second. So this is actually very scary for Learn to Fly.
Just huge mistakes coming in from Learn to Fly here. First, Edelweiss gets hit by a Cinder Flame, just gets one shot. Then Dilemma gets hit by a Cinder Flame, procs his cheat death, and then he gets hit by one of those explosions to die. So just 3 huge mistakes coming in by the players from Learn to Fly here, as they will be able to finish off the boss. But Limit, that's their chance to get back in. But let's be honest here, Limit 9 deaths, even if they somehow manage to catch up, which is going to be impossible unless Learn to Fly wipes, they still have those just 9 deaths, which is just going to be 35 seconds difference between those two. So they still just Learn to Fly in the driver's seat, but those were some huge mistakes. And if they're going to continue doing those mistakes against teams that don't play like Limit, then they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, no, that was actually a very bad mistake on the side of Knight Captain Valeri. Of course, you do actually proc your checkpoint there after Knight Captain Valeri does end up going down, so they don't end up having to res anybody, waste any time doing that, as Learn to Fly does make their way here onto Overseer Korgus. Overseer Korgus is actually kind of scary on a tyrannical setting just because of the explosive blasts and the potential for doubles here. But a Limit here at 70% on Knight Captain Valeri would need a lot of doubles on the side of Learn to Fly in order to be able to catch up. They would need pretty much a full wipe here.
Yeah, so on this boss, there's not really any affix that makes this boss harder. Now, we've seen a lot of other affixes like Quaking before that just makes this boss super difficult, especially if you have bad RNG. But with Raging and Volcanic not really doing anything on this boss fight, they should be able to finish this off if they don't get insanely unlucky with the doubles. Now, the doubles, what we call them, is those explosive rounds that go out on 3 players, and if the boss casts 2 of them in a row, basically, it's just going to be so hard for the healer to get everyone back up to full HP before they get hit by the second explosive burst. And the way you want to watch out for that is the Deadeye cast. The Deadeye cast is the first cast of his rotation, basically. And if you get an explosive burst after the Deadeye, that means you're going to get a double.
Yeah, it's also important to notice of the Azurite rounds as well, in addition to the Deadeye, because he'll end up casting Explosive Burst, and then Azurite rounds, and then Explosive Burst again. If he does end up skipping that Explosive Burst, it's very, very scary for the whole entire group. As you do see Overseer Korgus on the side of Learn to Fly getting down to 60%, we're on Limit, still dealing with Knight Captain Valeri at 30%, so Learn to Fly would actually have to wipe at this point for Limit to be even able to kind of even catch back up. Even then, they still do also have a 7 death differential, so it would actually be a monumentous mistake on Learn to Fly for Limit to be able to catch back up here.
Yeah, it is very good for Learn to Fly to be able to recover on this boss fight before. We're just playing the whole boss fight without a healer, basically. The boss, I believe, was on 50 or 60% when Edelweiss died. So definitely good on Learn to Fly to be able to recover and just kind of finish off the boss without healer. Like, who needs healers anyway, right, Jack? And then Learn to Fly are on the last boss here as Korgus is on 40%. Now, this is a tyrannical setting, and it's still going to take quite a while. And usually when a boss fight takes so long and you get unlucky with burstings, then maybe the healer actually has trouble with mana, but we didn't really see a lot of doubles at this point, so Edelweiss should be fine.
Yeah, we actually can't see the healer's mana on the side of Edel, but with her only doing 24k HPS, we can't assume that she's burning too terribly much mana here. A lot of HP for this fight over prolonged periods of time would probably be like 45k or 50k HPS. That would require you to get a significant amount of doubles. Actually, we do actually see one coming out here on the side of Learn to Fly here. Limit ends up pulling here Overseer Korgus here in just a couple seconds as they have down Knight Captain Valeri. They're going to be looking to pop their Bloodlust here in just a second as well.
The one thing that actually can cause trouble here is Volcanic. Now, Volcanic is usually not a problem, but this explosive burst actually knocks you back. And Volcanic sometimes doesn't actually spawn directly underneath your character. It might spawn a little bit behind you, a little bit to the right of you. So if you run out of the Volcanic and then you get an explosive burst, it might just knock you directly into it. So that is definitely something you gotta watch out for, but it's not gonna straight up one-shot you, so you still should be able to deal with it if you have a defensive cooldown.
Yeah, it's also important to note that Learn to Fly is still at 98%, so they do end up having one mob left to deal with to proc their final reaping of the instance and to solidify that instance. They're going to be, as soon as Overseer Korgus does end up going down here, they're going to be running, pulling some of those mobs at the top of the stairs. One of the rogues is probably going to be hopping in the cannon, and they're going to be DPSing down that last mob there very quickly.
Yeah, so this is something that I talked about before. I feel like this last percentage, if they were very close compared to Limit, they probably would have pulled that mob on top of the last boss and deal with it at the end. But as they were probably watching the stream, seeing that Limit is so far behind, they just figured, you know what, we're going to play it safe as for Team Limit and, of course, some other players who were in other teams like Method and A.
Now we're really seeing how it's going to be paying off for them as we enter Game 2 between Learn to Fly and Limit. They need this one to stay in it.
Yeah, it's going to be super scary for both of these teams as we are all the way into it already, as we do see Bloodlust coming out on both sides, as we do see very similar pulls coming out on both teams. We actually do see Limit ending up paralysing the Augur off on the side, whereas Learn to Fly has already pulled that Augur inside the middle of the pack. So bolstering on Atal'Dazar is actually incredibly scary because generally it has a lot of high priority mobs inside of this Augur and this Confessor and stuff like that. So you do actually actually see Limit electing to just kind of CC out that Augur, not letting it get in the middle of the pack war. Learn to Fly is saying, all right, we're just going to deal with it, make sure that you do get all the interrupts on the wildfires and everything else, and they're just going for it.
Yeah, we've seen Abrakeydabra do the same thing as Limit did here, where just to see one of the casters and just Shadow Melt the aggro off later. They do end up doing the pull properly because, as you said, there's just some of these casters that are so scary if they get bolstered. So this is why they try to kill everything evenly, but they still want to try to kill the casters before they kill the Juggernauts and stuff like that, because a little bit more damage in a tank can be dealt with, but as soon as you have those magic debuffs and those casters on everybody, and then the mobs are bolstered, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, and you actually do see both teams here utilizing snap spots with the Sards and the tricks of the trade. So basically, the rogues will end up popping tricks on the tank. The tank will go in and stand on one of these like snap spots, and then whenever the rogues do end up going and hitting those Sards, the Sards will end up snapping. And you actually do see Max go down the side of Limit. The Sards come off of that ledge, and it ends up wiping the whole entire group there. That was actually so bad on the side of Team Limit. Whereas Learn to Fly's proc their first reaping of the instances, pulled it into Razan here.
Yeah, this is the problem with this snapping, right? So if you snap the swords onto a spot, then they will end up not jumping around, which is the main mechanic of the swords. They jump on players, do a bunch of damage while they're jumping. If they are prevented from jumping because they're on this ledge here, that means the tank is just going to take so much single target damage from those swords as they're melee the tank, and then they're bolstering too, right? So as soon as they start bolstering, as we see actually Undead dying on Learn to Fly side, they do have a battle rest to get him back up, so they should be able to recover, but just mistakes coming in from both of those teams as Revo drops really low.
Oh man, this is actually super low on the side of RevoFed. We actually did see Dad end up proccing his cheat death and then eventually going down. Maybe they're waiting to battle rest him for a couple seconds, or maybe he's out of line of sight or something, and Edelweiss isn't able to actually get a res on him, as the fear does end up going out for Razan. Everybody dips out of line of sight here, and they are moving away from Razan in order to be able to dodge out of the way of the pursuit, whereas Limit has pulled Razan currently right now.
Yeah, so they did get the battle rest on Undead up, so they should be able to recover and finish off this boss here. Razan as they dealt with the Reaping Wave properly, so not really a lot of danger anymore from Razan. The only thing you have to do is make sure you dodge the fear and make sure you run away if you get pursued from the boss. Now Limit on the other side already procs their Reaping as well, and they're on Razan too. Now of course Limit a little bit behind because they had a full team wipe coming in, so 5 deaths on their board compared to only 1 on Learn to Fly side, and they're also 30% approximately behind on boss HP. It is a 45 setting, so boss HP is not as high as in a Tyrannical, but it still matters quite a bit.
Yeah, you actually did see Revo Fevi on the side of Learn to Fly getting that pursuit on him. He instantly Shadow Melds it off and then instantly charges back into melee here, and they do end up pulling the Sky Screamers into the bottom little bit of Razan, making sure to kind of cleave them down evenly, as bolstering Razan would actually not end up well for anybody. Obviously that tank bleed does a pretty sizable amount of damage to Revo Fevi, so if they ended up for some reason crushing the Sky Screamer and ending up bolstering Razan, that would actually be pretty dangerous, but I do expect to see them evenly DPSing down these festering Sky Screamers. On the side of Limit, you actually do see Jeeth getting knocked back a little bit by the Tail Lash, as he does end up healing Max through that very dangerous dot from Razan here.
Yeah, so one thing you want to watch out for here when you're pulling those Sky Streamers, you definitely don't want to pull them while a pursuit is coming out from the boss, because as soon as this boss takes one step on top of those stairs, he's going to reset immediately. So you don't want to be away or up and pulling those Sky Screamers when a pursuit is coming up, because if you're the one who gets targeted and the boss runs up the stairs, he's going to be reset and it's going to be gone, and you're going to lose so much time. So this is why we see the teams wait for the pursuit to come out, and then once it's over, they're sure that they're going to be safe while they pull. And Max goes down for Limit.
Yeah, it looked like one of the Sky Screamers got the full cast off, fearing the whole entire group. Max obviously got overlapped with that Razan dot and ends up falling. They do end up using their battle res, and it looks like they're going to be able to recover, but that was actually very scary on the side of Limit. They do have this very similar pull to what Learn to Fly was with the double Sky Screamer. They actually do have one of the Raptors, and Max does end up getting feared again. He looks like he ends up popping Berserker Rage or ends up getting dispelled out of that fear, so he ends up being able to face tank all those mobs, whereas on the side of Learn to Fly, they have pulled another Sard pack into the Sky Screamer, making sure that they try to DPS it down as evenly as possible. As we do know, the Saras do have significantly less health than the Sky Screamer, but just trying as best you can in order to be able to DPS it down evenly on a bolstering setting is important for them.
Yeah, definitely. You can see the Sky Screamer just took so long to die, even though it was it looked like it was very low HP. But because of all the bolstering stacks from those swords, it just took them so long to kill him off. As now they're moving on to the side where there's all the honor guards. Now we're going to see a double CC coming out here, to seeing both of the honor guards and to seeing one of the augurs, possibly two, just dealing with the rest of the mobs here who have similar amounts of HP. So they do have the stalkers here and the shield bearers, and they're just going to make sure that they're not going to deal with any of the other trash here, because honor guards of course have a lot more HP than the stalkers and the shield bearers. Sorry.
Yeah, the honor guards are also super nasty, not only because of how much HP they have, but how deadly they are to tanks. So they put a pretty nasty physical dot on them, and then in addition to that, they do end up, after you kill that reanimation totem, they end up like spurting this goop everywhere on the ground. Area denial effect, of course, of sorts. So making sure that you actually end up CCing that honor guard, not ending up dealing with it, is very nice. As you do see Learn to Fly ending up getting 39% here, not proccing their second reaping of the instance. As they do pop their shroud here, everybody mounts up as they make their way to Volcall on the side of Limit. A similar pull. It looks like they pulled. They look like they've ended up CCing the shield bearer and that honor guard off to the side, ending up pulling one of the mobs into it, and they might end up having a little bit difference in trash count. Maybe proccing their reaping, here, and then electing to run into Volcall's room and pop their Shadow Meld. But they actually do end up at 37%, so they're not even going to get their reaping there.
So they need to get their Shadow Meld off here. As Drill actually goes down, I believe he didn't have his Shadow Meld ready, or he used it on the wrong side, and they're still in combat now. This is a disaster for Limit. They messed up their skip here, because what happened on their side is that they were seeing some of the mobs, the honor guards and shield bearers. So once they killed the mobs that they want to kill, they need to all Shadow Meld or vanish to de-aggro the mobs that are CC'd. Because once you pull the pack, even if they're CC'd, they're gonna aggro you. So you need to make sure you have the Shadow Meld ready to drop combat. But it seems like some of them had it ready, some of them didn't, or they just used it in the wrong time and didn't drop combat as Chill went down, and the whole Shroud skip just went wrong for them, as they have 5 deaths again, or an additional 5 deaths coming in, 10 in total now. So Learn to Fly already on phase 2 on Volcall, just so far ahead at this point.
Yeah, and you actually did see Limit ending up popping their shroud in order to not be able to deal with that honor guard. As you do see somebody pulls that pack in front of Volcall to the left there, they're going to pop their Shadow Meld or their Vanish in order to be able to reset that pack in order to not be able to deal with it, because it's like really obnoxious, has a lot of health, has a bunch of scary mobs in there. As you do see on the side of Learn to Fly though, they are at 57% on Volcall, while Limit is just finally pulling it. So making sure that Limit does DPS down these reanimation totems very evenly is important. So just calling out, hey, I have 75% on this reanimation totem, you kind of need to slow down or speed up your damage a little bit, is very important. But they are, of course, probably in communication with one another, I would assume. And just making sure that you kill them evenly is important. Volcall dipping all the way to 25% on the side of Learn to Fly, though.
Yeah, maybe Limit are not enforced with them. Maybe that's
Hold on, wait a second.
Maybe that's the problem. No, Learn to Fly are on their way to kill Volcall here, as Limit just now are about to kill a reanimated totem, so they're definitely far behind, on top of just, of course, having those 10 deaths versus just 1 death on Learn to Fly. Now, Learn to Fly did kill the boss. They are shrouding here. They had a little bit of a close timing with the quaking coming in, but it did manage out. It did work out for them, and as they jump down, pulling those stalkers, and they're probably going to pull it on top of this trash, as we can see the charge coming in. Now, this is a very dangerous pull because of those witch doctors.
Yeah, we actually did lose our official timer there, so they'll be trying to get that back as quickly as possible, or we'll end up finding another solution in order to be able to keep track of time. Obviously, the admins in the back do have access and are able to actually see the times between both of the teams on their client, so it's going to be fine here. As we do actually see Drastic getting hexed on the side of Learn to Fly, making sure that you do kick these witch doctors is incredibly scary. And in this bolstering environment, these witch doctors just getting bolstered is super scary, but you end up having them be high priority a lot of the time. So you do end up bolstering up those shield bearers and those stalkers, which are actually incredibly scary for your tank.
Yeah, so in theory, on a bolstering setting, you obviously want to kill all the mobs as evenly as possible to not lose a lot of time from the other mobs gaining more HP. But if you have those high priority targets like witch doctors or casters in general that need so many interrupts to be able to deal with them, then we just sometimes see them just focusing them down, even if it means the other mobs are going to get bolstered, just because at some point you're just running out of interrupts, running out of CC to deal with them, and it's just safer to deal with them first. But Learn to Fly actually having a lot of AoE damage and not killing them very fast at all. So very efficient, but risky play from Learn to Fly.
Yep, and you actually do see we do have the official time underneath the Learn to Fly and Limit logo, respectively. So those are the official time, just to note. You actually did see Learn to Fly there, proccing their Reaping, pulling it into that Sard Skyscreamer pack. You actually do see them sapping the Skyscreamer here on the side of Learn to Fly as they're doing this Sard solo in order to not bolster up that Skyscreamer, while Limit does a very similar pull to what we did see on Learn to Fly's side here in just a second.
Yeah, so Learn to Fly is going to finish up the swords, and then once they kill the Sky Screamers here, which they're probably going to pull on top of some other mobs, they're going to proc their Reaping, and then they want to pull it into something. We'll see what they end up doing with the Reaping wave, as they actually just try to recover here a little bit, and they're going to continue on pulling some of those swords on top of each other.
Yeah, they might have ended up sapping that Skyscreamer for a multitude of reasons. One of the reasons maybe being that they're going to end up pulling it into Yasma's room at the very end, CCing it inside that room in order for easy access of DPSing down. As you do actually see a lot of the members of Team Limit getting incredibly low. We see some cheat deaths coming out for Lip, but it looks like they're going to actually be able to recover here as everybody's getting incredibly low from the quaking. Jeeth ended up healing that, trying to heal that back up as quickly as possible. As on the side of Learn to Fly, you do see Rev ending up getting a lot of those Risen Souls here and those Sarids on that snap spot because of the tricks of the trade from the rogues here.
Okay, so Learn to Fly actually a little bit in trouble here as Revo was on the snapping spot, getting most of the Reaping Souls on top of him, but Elbaz had some of the aggro, so she didn't really, Revo wasn't able to get the aggro off of her because he was in the snapping spot. Now, one of the rogues actually pulled the swords with tricks of the trade on top of the tank, so it all worked out for them, but they dropped very low. Now, at this point, they only have to deal with the Sky Screamers, and what we have seen from some of the groups was, they got a fear off. Now, this could be a disaster if one of the rogues runs into another pack, but thankfully the fear didn't make them run into anything else, so they didn't pull, but Revo actually going ahead and pulling the next trash on top of these triple Sky Screamers here.
Yeah, that might have been why one of the Sky Screamers ended up getting their cast off. They were just kind of looking a little bit too far ahead and kind of being just a little bit too far in the future there and letting that Sky Screamer's cast go off. As you actually do see some of the people on the side of Limit end up going down. They do end up having more deaths coming through, and it looks like it might have ended up being a full wipe on their side.
Yeah, because they Learn to Fly. Limit just struggling so much. We've talked about this, like in every single dungeon they've played so far, they had just a lot of mistakes, a lot of full team wipes coming in. It's probably just like lack of practice, or they're just taking too much onto them. Like it's the first time in the cup here, the first time they qualify. So maybe they're just thinking, we can do those huge pulls. But if in practice they don't only have a success rate of 50% or even less by doing those kind of pulls, then that's not something you can pull off in a tournament environment. Because in a tournament you don't have multiple tries. You only have one for each dungeon. You have a best of 3, right? So you can lose one map, but that's it. You can't have those huge mistakes in every dungeon, as Limit is kind of struggling to go through Atal'Dazar. Well, Edelweiss is dropping very low. Edelweiss actually going down on this huge pull for Learn to Fly. This means it's probably going to be a full team wipe coming in, as they don't have a rest for her, and at least they didn't use their Bloodlust yet.
Okay, so basically what ended up happening is Revofevi ended up slow pulling that Priestess into the pack, and then as soon as the rest of the pack got pulled, Edel ended up healing Rev, getting healer aggro on some of the mobs that had not been yet tagged by Revofevi on the side of Learn to Fly, and it looks like some of the mobs instantly teleported to Edelweiss, ending up killing her instantly, and she's going to be running back, looking to master as her group. While on the side of Limit, they are just DPSing down and continuing to chug along here, and looking to not make any more mistakes that would end up putting them even further behind. There is a very large depth differential, so Learn to Fly is still it has a pretty sizable lead even still, but that was actually a very big mistake on the side of Learn to Fly, and if they want to battle back through the lower bracket and potentially make it to land, they cannot have mistakes like that going forward.
Yeah, we've seen this happen multiple times actually. So if you stand in one of these snapping spots as a healer to prevent the Juggernauts from charging, then you definitely don't want to get aggro in any sort of way. So what we usually see by the healers, either they wait a little bit before they go into the snapping spot, or they just stay in stealth to make sure they don't draw any aggro while the tank is pulling. Something definitely went wrong on Learn to Fly's side, as Edel just got aggro, and if you get aggro as a healer in a snapping spot, of course the mob snap to you. So that's a problem, and that's why she died. Now Learn to Fly, thankfully they did save their Bloodlust, so they have the Bloodlust ready now to do this pull and make up for the offensive cooldowns that they lost, so they should be able to pull it off still. Yeah,
and Limit and Learn to Fly doing a very similar pull here. We actually did see that that AoE coming out on the side of Limit from the Augur there, which was actually very scary, but you did see the group, the melee in the group end up moving as one unit. You actually do see 3 people end up going down on the side of Learn to Fly, as Revofevi and Edelweiss ending up being the only 2 players left available alive here, as Revofevi is getting incredibly low. He heroically leaps away, not as heroic as it seems by the name, and you do end up dropping Ursul's Vortex, but it's going to be so close here. They might end up fully wiping here.
Most definitely. We see Edelweiss actually had to go out of the spot to be able to heal Revo as he was running too far away and cutting the mobs here. Now we're going to see the charges coming out of the Juggernauts, and they're so high HP, and we see those Honor Guys. The Honor Guys just do so much damage, but but they're so bolstered, so they're going to do even more damage. And they, Rebel goes down, L goes down. This is going to be a full team wipe coming in, as also the Augurs, the Sea broke, and now they're going to be in trouble as Limit already on Priestess Alunsa, and Learnfly has to go back. They have to deal with the Reaping Waves because they didn't finish off the Reaping Wave, so they have to come back. Deal with those mobs that you can see aggroing now, and this is going to cost them a lot of time as they have one more death compared to Limit now, and Limit is actually ahead at this point with those 13 deaths.
Yeah, this is the repercussions of that first initial wipe, like you were stating. They might have ended up blowing their damage cooldowns just a couple of seconds prior to the Bloodlust coming through on the side of Learn to Fly, and so if they just did not have them available to them, that would have actually been super bad, and that's why it ends up punishing them, and it ends up being super bad there, and Learn to Fly ends up wiping. Right before Priestess Alunsa gets pulled, you actually do see them having to end up dealing with their Reaping as well, solo without Priestess Alunsa, while Limit here pulling into the driver's seat here, even though they do have 13 deaths to Learn to Fly's 14th, they finally have less deaths between the two teams, and Limit's just far ahead now, just waiting for this transfusion cast to come through, and Priestess Alunsa should be going down here shortly.
I feel like they pulled this Augur a little bit early. Maybe they just forgot to reCC it, because of course they don't want to kill this Augur too early, because then you're going to bolster the boss. So I feel like it was a little bit too early, as the boss is about to go down now though, so they can finish off the Augur without bolstering the boss as soon as Priestess Alunsa is dead. We're going to see one of the members of Limit run forward, as we can see the healer actually just in stack for him running ahead to be able to kind of trigger the RP event from the last boss, so the stairs are available as Max almost dies to the Fire Gauntlet.
I hope that Max didn't pop his shield wall because he was standing in fire, instead just already had it rolling from the bottom end of Priestess there. That was actually kind of scary there, as he did run through that Fire Gauntlet. It looks like both of his rogues ended up proccing their cheat death additionally too, running through that Fire Gauntlet as they do make their way onto Yasma. Obviously Yasma is actually a pretty scary fight just because of that Soul Rend cast and how it ends up having to be dealt with, but I do not expect a wipe here from Limit, but they do also only have 97%, so they do end up having to deal with a couple more mobs, as you actually do see Sang walking back, eating the fish feast, as he is pretty low still, because Jeeth has already walked all the way up to the top and starting the RP on Yasma.
I do believe there's things that can happen to Limit here, as we've seen them do a lot of risky pulls in general in the past and failing to them. So what we're probably going to see from Limit here is the Sky Screamer being, someone already pulled it, is probably going to be CC'd in a corner somewhere, and the difficulty of killing the Sky Screamer on top of Yasma when she's low percent is those interrupts that we talked about earlier. We saw Abrakeydabra actually having one ad go through to the boss at the very end of the fight and almost wiping them, just because it's so dangerous. If you need to interrupt the boss, you need to interrupt this Sky Screamer on top of having the Soul Rend coming out. So just a lot of abilities at once happening. Yeah,
it's also important to note that Limit does not have their Bloodlust available for Yasma, as they did end up popping it on that trash pack prior to Priestess Alunsa. Similar for Learn to Fly in the Bloodlust situation here, and they also do have very similar deaths, as Learn to Fly does have 14 and Limit does have 13. So Limit would actually need a monumentous mistake in order to be able to wipe and to lose this map, which Learn to Fly should have been winning. They ended up wiping twice and ended up throwing the match all the way back to Limit, but Limit has been capitalizing on this throw and is going to be they're at 50% on Yasma here, as you do see Sang end up going down here. They do have a battle res that they are able to use there, but he looks like he got hit by one of those empowered spiders and goes down there.
Yeah, so of course the damage dealers is trying to deal with the Soul Rend mobs, just getting hit by those spiders at the same time. Now we see the Sky Screamer come in at this point. Now this is going to be dangerous for Limit. There's definitely something that can go wrong here, as I talked about it. There's Sky Screamer interrupt that needs to be done, there's boss interrupt that needs to be done, and if something overlaps badly with the Soul Rend and spiders being on top of the Sky Screamer, then you can be in trouble. So you definitely gotta watch out that you play everything perfectly here. You make sure you see the Soul Rend it adds, that you see the Ring of Peace coming out here, and you want to make sure you interrupt everything. Yeah, that Terrifying Screech does get kicked on the side of Limit there. That was actually super good. Making sure that you also do get that Racking Pain kick on Yasma is very important. It's scary because you actually have to move out of melee range for that Soul Rending, so you're no longer in range of the Sky Screamer, and so Max is the only person who's going to be in melee range of the boss for the whole entire time, as you do actually see Yasma getting down to 10%. The Sky Screamer is super low. Are they going to bolster the boss? Yes! Oh my goodness. That's not exactly what you're looking to do whenever you are on the side of Team Limit there. They end up bolstering the boss. They end up proccing their last Reaping of the instance, but Yasma going down to 2%, 1%, and it looks like they're going to kill it before that ends up becoming a very big issue. And it would have been fine.
At this point, they need to prove themselves. They want to be able to move on. It's game 3 between Learn to Fly and Limit on Motherload.
Yeah, so we see Motherload, both teams, of course, having this Shroud coming in at the very start. And we see Limit actually doing something a little bit different, as we didn't really see this from any other group. They pulled a bunch of mobs from the start, and they just kind of pull it in this house to line of sight and pull everything on top of each other. So very interesting pull coming out of Limit here, as they all gather their mobs up and use their Bloodlust here.
Yeah, they pulled the mobs into that party mansion, popping their Bloodlust, as we do actually see on Learn to Fly a little bit more traditional pull, pulling those mobs into that pavilion, popping their Bloodlust as well, and they're making sure that they end up kiting the pack relatively well on both teams in order to be able to get those Peacekeepers out of the Sanguine that we've just been harping on so much. The mechanized Peacekeepers end up casting an energy shield for prolonged periods of time, and whenever it ends up standing inside the Sanguine, you're just going to cry like Now does on Twitter all the time whenever he's talking about these mechanized Peacekeepers here.
Okay, we see Limit actually having a lot of trouble with this pull because there's just so many vendors. So this is why most teams skip this first part here, just because there's so many vendors. We see Lip go down, we see Death go down, as those vendors just not getting interrupted. As soon as you lose 1 DPS, you miss those interrupts. You see one of the Peacekeepers healing up in the Sanguine. Just a disaster coming in for Limit here. And this is exactly why we see other teams skip this specific trash, just because there's too many vendors, too many casters to interrupt. And as soon as you have those Spritzers go through on the team, it's just so much damage and you can barely heal it, while you have all these other damage sources come through as well, like the Fact Charge, on top of just having the Spritzer cast. So Limit just having 3 deaths here. They need to recover at this point as the vendor just sits in the Sanguine. We saw the Typhoon come out though, so they should be able to finish up this pull.
Yep, and they do eventually end up finishing off the pull. Of course, they are very close to the instance, so even though the people did end up going down, they were able to release and run back. As we do see on the side of Learn to Fly, they are doing their instance a little bit quicker, not sanguining up all their mobs for prolonged periods of time, moving them out very quickly, getting nice rings of pieces and nice Typhoons out, as we do actually see that Ring of Peace coming out as the Peacekeeper is just standing there casting his Charged Claw, not standing in Sanguine, kind of just moving through it just for a couple seconds, as you do actually see Learn to Fly dealing with that pretty well. Drastic actually gets pretty low there from that Peacekeeper melee, but making sure that he's just behind the Peacekeeper the whole entire time, not getting cleaved by that Charged Claw is very important.
It was Limit did manage to finish up the pull and then move down to the next pull. Now, again, I think there's just a lot of vendor casts going through in general, just not 100% control coming out of Limit here. Even though you do see the markers on top of the mobs, of course, to assign the players to certain interrupts. And then you see the Peacekeeper just standing in Sanguine there, just healing a bunch again on Limit side. Just not enough control coming in from Limit. While Learn to Fly already procced their first Reaping Wave and pulled it on top of a bunch of other mobs.
Yep, so pulling that Reaping Wave into a bunch of mobs is not something we are definitely new to seeing here. You actually do see Edel getting stunned by that Thug there, but the Thug does end up running away from all those mobs, getting inefficient cleave. We're on the side of Limit here. They're dealing with 2 Thugs and the Peacekeeper still, so making sure that they're DPSing them down evenly in order to be able to get the Sanguine in good position is very important for them.
They had the Peacekeeper actually heal again. I feel like this Peacekeeper healed so much. I feel like it healed 200% of his HP already, as he was just chilling in this Sanguine pool, just healing himself up. As Learn to Fly, definitely dealing with the Sanguine a lot better. Now, again, the problem with Sanguine and the Peacekeepers here is that Peacekeepers are not seeable. You cannot knock them, you cannot send them, you can't do anything with them. And they just move very slowly. On top of sometimes they're standing still, casting a shield, just not... They don't like to move very much. So what you have to do is, as we see Jess go down on Limit side here, just so much travel for Limit coming in here. But yeah, what I was saying is that you have to actually deal with the other mobs, the non-Peacekeeper mobs. So once the other mobs are dying, you want to make sure you Typhoon them away from the Peacekeepers, you Ring of Peace them away, and we see just a full team wipe coming in from Limit.
Yeah, that is so bad on the side of Limit. Learn to Fly, doing actually a pretty good pull there. Drastic off on the side of the screen, ended up dropping his Ring of Peace, separating out these 2 mech jockeys in order for them to be in range, in order to be able to walk up and pilot these Peacekeeper robots, giving them a pretty sizable amount of trash count, and they ended up pulling 3 of these Peacekeepers together. This is actually a pretty good pull because the Peacekeepers do have similar health. Most of the time you won't end up sanguining all 3 of them together, hopefully. As one of them does end up standing in Sanguine, casting that Energized Shield. I'm sorry, Caster Curse, as that Peacekeeper does get topped off after his Energized Shield does go through, and Limit does proc their first Reaping at the instance, dealing with that quite well at this point, not wiping to it at this point, so I don't know what to really expect, as Learn to Fly is looking to proc their second Reaping of the instance here.
Well, yeah, Lemon managed to finish off the Reaping Wave after wiping through it before. Now Learn to Fly. Unfortunate for them that this Peacekeeper healed all the way up because the Peacekeeper is the 1% they needed to proc their 40% Reaping Wave. So now their pulls are going to be a little bit different because they decided, you know what, we're not going to single target down this Peacekeeper anymore as he heals 100%. We're just going to pull the Peacekeeper into the next pull. But now their timers are going to be messed up. They're not going to have the Reaping as they want to have the Reaping. And now everything is going to be a little bit different for them. Maybe throwing them off their game a little bit as it changes up rotations and whatnot. Now we see Learn to Fly about to proc the Reaping with another mob here as the probably the jockey is... Okay, there we go. And they're in Sanguine again.
Oh no! Okay, so the Peacekeeper doesn't end up healing too much, but yeah, the Sanguine there is like quite scary, especially whenever he's casting that Energized Shield. They were trying to DPS down both of those Peacekeepers and that Mech Jockey together, trying to avoid the Grease Gun and the Shock Claw cast from both of those in order to allow the DPS to be able to live. And you actually do see everybody getting kind of low on the side of Learn to Fly, but it looks like Edelweiss is going to be able to top back up the group, so that actually looked kind of scary, whereas on the side of Limit, they were sitting at 30% trash count, typhooning the mobs out of the Sanguine there in order to be able to wrap that pull up there.
Yeah, Learn to Fly, 47%, just dealing with Sanguine so much better at this point. Limit's struggling so much in this dungeon. Learn to Fly about to finish off their 40% Reaping Wave. Now they should be back on track. Now everything should be back to normal. They should have the same percentage and they should have the same route coming in from MOTHERLOAD here as they pull the trash in front of the first boss. On top of this vendor pack and the labor pack, as you see Rabbit dropping so low because these laborers, as soon as you pull them, they will just cast Throw Wrench on the tank and it just does so much damage.
I can't tell how many thugs Limit has, but it's either 3 or 4, which is actually incredibly scary because I think it's 4. So if you get comboed with that many thug charges all at once, it'll stun you and instantly end up killing you. As you do actually see Jeeth and Sang go down at the exact same time because those thugs end up charging them all at once. So that was not exactly the most optimal thing coming out of the side of Limit. As for Learn to Fly here, they're just kind of chugging their way along through the instance, looking to not wipe or end up sanguining their Peacekeepers for 10 minutes here as the Hired Assassin does go down underneath that Peacekeeper. I think that Peacekeeper might end up healing a little bit, but he does end up canceling his Energized Shield there and ends up moving out of that Sanguine.
You have a bad feeling about this pull on Limit side. I feel like they should have just reset, just let the tank down, reset the whole pull, because I feel like they're just going to have more deaths at this point, because the Assassins actually casted the poison off, meaning that all the melee attacks are going to apply the poison to the tank, and Defensive Knife is going to apply the poison to everyone. As you can see, the mobs actually finally go low, so maybe they can finish off this pull as they proc their Reaping Wave, and we can see the Sanguine heal the mobs a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 4 thugs, not exactly what you're going to be looking to do here. As we do see another pretty sizable pull here on the side of Learn to Fly. It looked like they pulled 2 Peacekeepers in, and like we've been stating over and over again, Sanguine is the name of the game here, making sure that you do end up getting good CC out here, as you do actually see Limit proccing their second Reaping of the instance, pulling it kind of towards the front of the instance here in order to be able to minimize the amount of movement that they do end up having to use here, as they do cut it past some of the Sanguine pulls from the remnants of the mobs that they have recently killed and are making their way towards the front of the instance near coin-operated Crowd Pummeler.
Yeah, so their 60% Reaping Wave is going to spawn as soon as they finish up these mobs here. Now, we will see what they do with this Reaping Wave. What we usually see teams do, at least what we saw today, is that the 80% Reaping Wave is the one that they're going to pull on top of the boss as soon as their Bloodlust is ready. So I believe the 60% Reaping Wave is definitely just going to be pulled on top of trash, as there's a bunch of trash left they should be doing in this area here.
Yeah, we actually do see 2 minutes left on Learn to Fly's Bloodlust here, but it looks like they're making their way either towards coin-operated Crowd Pummeler himself, and they do end up pulling him with that Reaping there. They do not have Bloodlust available, so they're looking to make sure that they DPS down this Reaping pack as quickly as possible in order to be able to make sure that Revo Fevi doesn't end up going down. Drastic drops incredibly low, as does Edel whenever that Spark Blast cast does end up going out. You actually do see Edel getting some healer threat from some of those mobs. Revo ends up taunting them off, as you do see Dad dropping incredibly low, and the whole entire side of Learn to Fly is just getting so low here. Nobody's Cheat Death is proc, nobody's Spawn Zombie's Bargain is proc, so it's going to be okay. But man, this has been incredibly low.
A bomb went through.
Yeah, a bomb went through on Edel, and she's dropping, and she's died. They're going to have to reset the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler here, as you do see Revo Fevi popping Shield Wall, running and resetting coin-operated Crowd Pummeler. Edel's probably going to end up releasing, looking to stealth back through, and then res Drastic there.
This is a disaster for Learn to Fly, as they pull the boss without their Bloodlust ready. They have to Reaping. Now, a couple of things that happened. First, it was the pulse that knocks everyone back and applies a dot to the whole group on top of Quaking. So very unlucky Quaking timing, just dropping everybody so low with the pulse and then the Quaking on top of it. Then Undead gets hit by the frontal, drops very low and is stunned as well. Now, Edelweiss, or busy healing everybody, of course, because everyone just gets so much damage on top of having to dispel the tank, having all the reaping waves, and then probably no one really helping her with the bombs, or maybe someone missing a bomb, and it goes through just wiping them on top of a quaking as well. So Learn to Fly has to re-engage the boss. At least they didn't use the Bloodlust anything, of course, it's still on cooldown here. Well, Limit, on the other hand, still pretty far behind as they are on 58% trash, but you know, it's their chance to catch up, really.
I mean, we did see Atal'Dazar where Learn to Fly ended up throwing at the very last minute there. And Learn to Fly has pulled coin-operated Crowd Pummeler again, this time without reaping, as they did end up clearing it off. Revolted accidentally ended up, well, not accidentally, but he ended up popping his Bond Zombie's bargain there, unfortunately, at the very end of that reaping pack, right before Edelweiss got back and was able to heal him up. You actually do see Drastic popping his Touch of Karma on coin-operated Crowd Pummeler as those foot bombs do get kicked into him, trying to do as much damage as possible there.
Yeah, so they do pop the Bloodlust here and Learn to Fly side. Just Limit also proccing their 60% reaping wave here as they pull it on top of, and I think the Peacekeeper is standing in Sanguine again on Limit side, just healing all the way to 100%, as you can see him casting there in the back. This is very unfortunate. Now, the healer dropping very low on Limit side too. This might be a difficult pull for them coming in, but Learn to Fly, they really should not have an issue with this boss, especially if there's no reaping wave on top of it. As long as there's no other danger, then they should be fine, especially since they had their Bloodlust too.
Yeah, you do see Trill going down on the side of Limit here. He instantly releases and starts running back in order to be able to get back with his group while they are dealing with reaping here. Jeeth actually drops incredibly low as he does get stunned by the Thug, but ends up being able to be kind of okay, staying at about 30% health. As long as he doesn't get killed by any residual damage from the reaping or the Thug charging again, it'll be okay. Max sitting at 35%, getting incredibly low as well, but it looks like they're going to be able to recover even with Trill's death there. Learn to Fly, though, they're on 40% here on coin-operated Crowd Pummeler and just significant advantages over Limit here.
Oh, most definitely. Learn to Fly, they used their Bloodlust here, so they got it on cooldown at least. Limit still has their Bloodlust available, so they're probably going to save it once they proc their 80% reaping and pull it on top of the boss. We will see what Limit does later on. We saw some teams actually save the Bloodlust, not use it at all on the first boss, and then use it on the trash afterwards. Now we'll see what happens. We'll Learn to Fly still dealing with the first boss here, trying to get it done. Surely but slowly, they're going to kill this boss, and then they're going to have to backtrack though, because I'm pretty sure they're not going to deal with the rest percentage after this boss. They're most likely just going to go back from where they came from and just pull some more of those Peacekeepers and those Thugs to get a little bit more percentage, unless they're choosing to pull trash afterwards, but we've not really seen that except on teaming weeks where they pulled this R&D room.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see them backtrack. Not only is it just difficult to get trash at the very end in that R&D wing, like you stated, but in addition to that, the Peacekeepers are also just super count efficient because you don't only get a count for just the Peacekeeper robot itself, but you do also get the mech jockey that you do end up knocking into the Peacekeeper. So those Peacekeepers, just for how much health they do have, they're super count efficient as long as you aren't, as long as you're not sanguining them and healing them up for prolonged periods of time. As you do see coin-operated Crowd Pummeler go down on the side of Team Learn to Fly. Limit still just chugging away, pulling more trash here.
Yeah, but are they really worth it if you have to kill 300% of your HP?
I'm gonna go with maybe not.
But yeah, we see Learn to Fly actually not backtracking here. They're actually going forward. This is going to be very interesting to see. I kind of want to see what exactly they're going to pull to get the rest of the percentage here. As we see some of CC coming out from the Rogues here, some Saps here and there, as they do a huge pull. This is actually bigger than teams that use Bloodlust for this pull. They don't have Bloodlust available and just doing kind of the same pull or even bigger than teams that did it with Bloodlust.
Yeah, this is actually a very scary Sanguine pull, but the mobs do have very similar health. The Sapper, the Earthshaper, and those Mine Rats all do have the same health, so making sure that you're able to DPS them evenly is very important. As Dilemma actually procs his cheat death here, Revolted is getting incredibly low. He obviously does not have that Bond Zombie's bargain available for him, as you do see that on his debuff screen. You actually do see a really good Typhoon there coming in for Edelweiss, as you do see that Earthshaper, though, off the side of the screen, bathing in the Sanguine, getting Ring of Peace out just at the last second. The Sappers there ending up casting a final blast whenever they do get low enough, ending up killing themselves, but making sure that you're moving that Earthshaper out of the Sanguine there from those Sappers is very important, and Learn to Fly ends up doing that pull, I think, a little bit better than we expected.
Most definitely. That was very clean by them, considering, you know, no Bloodlust ready, no anything like that. So we're probably going to see some more pulls coming out of this area here. No, I lied. So they're actually using their Shroud here to go to the boss. Now, they're still missing a lot of trash. They're missing 25% trash. trash, which is not something we've seen at all from teams as they're on their way to this second boss here. So really interesting to see what they're going to do later. They're probably going to pull something in the R&D wing, and we've seen how badly that can go. And we've also talked about Sanguine with those masterminds. So we'll see how that goes for Learn to Fly here as they're pulling Azerok.
Yeah, we actually did see a kind of a scare on the side of Learn to Fly. The Shroud ended up fading just a couple seconds before Rev was in a good spot in Azerok's room. He ended up having to Shadow Meld off that Taskmaster, so it ended up being okay. Obviously, Azerok has some ads that spawn around him. They're the Earth Ragers. You actually do see all three of the melee independently getting fixated by different Earth Ragers here, which is the worst case scenario for this team. Obviously, they do have access to Ring of Peace and Ursul's Vortex in order to be able to keep those Earth Ragers kind of grouped up, so you can kind of move Azerok around in a circular motion in order to be able to keep good uptime on him. But overall, this is actually one of the more melee unfriendly bosses in any of the instances here.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you somehow kite them at the same time, as the Llama actually just gets 4 stacks from one of those Ragers. Drops really low. Edelweiss should be able to heal this damage away, but the Llama actually has to watch out here, try to not get baited by those Earth Ragers so much, because the stacking debuff that gets applied does so much damage, especially in a tyrannical setting, if you have Quaking on top of that too. And as I say that, the Llama gets 2 more stacks, so definitely gonna try to be careful here. Now, one thing we see from some teams is that the fixated players just kind of stack up on top of each other and then try to kite the Earth Ragers so they're close to each other and they're easier to kill and easier to kite. Now, I think Learn to Fly had a little bit of a chaotic kiting coming in here, as they're all kind of spread out. Everything was kind of chaotic, but they did manage to finish them off here, and at this point, Azerok is not going to be a big deal anymore.
Yeah, I actually loved how Edelweiss was ending up kiting that Earth Rager around. She was sitting in travel form, running around it in a circle in order to be able to keep it in melee range of Azerok, in order to allow her melee to have the best uptime on it possible. Azerok down to 40%, as we do see on the side of Limit. Everybody dropping incredibly low as Jeeth ends up popping his Tranquility here, ends up topping up the group as they are... they're going to be downing coin-operated Crowd Pummeler here soon. They did end up using their Bloodlust on coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, so that's just something to note. They ended up using it about 45-ish%, which was definitely interesting for them, but they end up downing it, not wiping, as Jeeth ended up kind of saving it there in the last moment with the Tranquility. And Learn to Fly here, 23% on Azerok.
Yeah, so Limit making the same mistake as Learn to Fly, having one of those bombs go through and not being thrown into the boss. Now, thankfully, he did have the Tranquility ready to heal away the damage and the debuff, so managing to saving it compared to Learn to Fly, who just had a full team wipe because of that. Now, Limit doing this huge pull as well, as we've seen Learn to Fly do, and we see Edelweiss actually just going down on Learn to Fly's side.
Okay, so Azerok's at 8%, so hopefully they can end up killing Azerok off in just a couple more seconds. Edel ended up getting... it looks like she got hit by 2 Rock Lances and ended up going down there just from those Earthshaper casts. So that's so bad for them. So she might end up being able to release. She ends up releasing at coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, pops her stealth, and ends up running all the way back. But they do end up downing Azerok, so not all is lost. Oh, okay, so she ended up actually respawning at Azerok as he did end up going down. So this is good for them. On the side of Limit, though, they are making their way towards Azerok. They have popped their first Shroud, and they are making their way up the mountain there.
Yeah, so Limit, when it comes to the position in dungeon they are right now, they're not that far behind, because they have a lot more trash. Now, there's still a whole boss fight behind, though, and this is a tyrannical setting, so depending on how much single target damage they have, they still have to catch up. And of course, the deaths as well. It's just like a lot of time that the deaths cost them. But Learn to Fly, 81%, meaning they have to do this R&D pull that we've seen from Method in EU and Method in A, but they only did it in the teaming affix. Now, we don't have teaming anymore, and they're still choosing to do this trash, as they kind of failed their Shadow Melt somehow, so they have some of the Reaping Souls here. They need to finish them off, costing them a little bit of time, but it's not a disaster for them. Now, we will see how this R&D pool goes. As you see, there's a lot of...
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they completely missed their Shadow Melt, actually. So they have to deal with all those Reaping mobs, meaning, I mean, it's not going to be dangerous for them, but it's just going to cost them a lot of time just to deal with a Reaping Wave by itself.
Yeah, maybe somebody didn't have their meld up because of having to drop combat and drink from the side of Edel, or maybe Rev. He ended up pulling the Taskmaster a little bit before they wanted to whenever they were doing that Shroud, so maybe he ended up using it then and not having it back up. It is a 2-minute cooldown, so I kind of expected it to be back up, but maybe it wasn't. Regardless, they do end up pulling that Reaping by itself, which is actually super, super time inefficient, but fortunately enough for them, Limit with 14 deaths at 58% on Azerok here.
Yeah, Learn to Fly on the way to this R&D pool that we've talked about a lot. Now, we've seen Method and A actually do this pool cleanly. We also saw Method U do it cleanly once, but then have a complete wipe fiesta the second time they did it. So we'll see how Learn to Fly does here. As you have the Quaking Affix, but what you gotta watch out for, and Sanguine, right? A lot of these mobs are very hard to move, as you have constantly cast. You see the Mastermind just kind of standing in Sanguine here, as he just moved out at the very last second. We saw Undead drop very low, we saw the Quaking come in, so this is gonna be dangerous for them here.
Oh, Undead is actually a goop running around on the floor as they did not kick that transmute. You actually can move the Masterminds out of the Sanguine if you are like kind of, if you're super close to him as a tank in melee and you kind of just like shimmy step just away from him, you are actually able to move him, which is better. But those rats ended up dropping just a bunch of Sanguine, ends up sanguining a lot of this pack, making it last a lot longer than initially anticipated. But Learn to Fly looks like they're actually going to be able to deal with this pack okay. Where on the side of Limit, they are at 23% on Azeroth here, just kind of chugging along, making sure that they are in an okay position in order to be able to capitalize on the Learn to Fly mistake, like similar to how we ended up seeing an Atal'Dazar there.
Yeah, that was actually kind of scary from Learn to Fly. And look at the percentage. They're still only on 89%. There's still quite a bit of trash they have to do in this R&D wing. Well, Limit, 96%. They don't have to do that much at all. They only have to deal with Azeroth and like 1 or 2 mobs. Well, Learn to Fly just having to deal with all these Alchemists as assistants. These are the kind of mobs that we don't really see other teams pull just because of the inefficiency and the difficulty of these kind of pulls. I mean, Learn to Fly is doing well so far, but it's just, it takes them a long time to deal with this trash, considering just how much, how little percentage it really gives. Yeah,
it became an issue because of having to reset coin-operated crowd pummeler, and then after that, they ended up not backtracking for any of the Peacekeepers, the 300% health Sanguine Peacekeepers that we were joking about a little bit earlier, but they ended up pulling some of this R&D wing, which ends up being scary just because you can't pull a bunch of Masterminds together most of the time. Those test subject rats, which are normally a pretty good count for how much HP they have, end up sanguining a lot of your pack and ends up making the pack take significantly longer than you would like it to take. And Quaking, obviously not the most interactive of fix whenever you were talking about Motherload, but it's still one of those things that reduces your melee's uptime on all the mobs. And you do see Limit here proccing their last reaping of the instance, and they do, and Max does jump into those test subjects. He ends up running all the way to Rixa Flux Flame here, and the whole entire group is going to be looking to Shadow Mouths. You actually do see Jeeth go down on the side of Limit.
Okay, so they need to manage. Okay, so they need to have their Windwalker survive. If the Windwalker survive, he might be able to get a single target rest onto the rest of the druid, but it depends on the range, right? Because a Windwalker only has a normal rest and no mass rest. He needs to go pretty close to be in range. It's 40 yards, I believe. Okay, he did manage to go into range without pulling anything, so they are able to recover. As they get a very bad Quaking interrupting the rest here. He needs to recast it. Oh no, he didn't get it through. All right, good for Limit as they're on their way to the boss. Now Learn to Fly, still just kind of dealing with the trash here. This Mastermind will proc their 100% Reaping Wave, but I have to say, this just kind of felt very inefficient by them.
Yeah, that was actually super inefficient. I'm not a fan of what Learn to Fly ended up pulling in this R&D wing, but they are still significantly ahead just by virtue of the 13 death differential in the favor of Learn to Fly here. As both teams are about to engage Rixa Flux Flame, that 13 death differential is just something to really be of note of, because it might look like Limit is ahead, but they're really not here. And you actually do see Learn to Fly just kind of standing around for a second, waiting to pull Rixa.
Yeah, they're probably just waiting for their HP to go up, something happened like that. Now we see Rixa, one of those bosses actually does a lot of damage, and we see Atal'Dazar actually having some issues here, so that might be a super big problem as you see Revo just dropping low. If Revo goes down here, they're in trouble, because this boss does a lot of single target damage to the tank, and he does magic damage, so it's very hard for him to deal with as he procs the bombardment, and if he goes down, this is going to be a full team up coming in for Learn to Fly here, because they're having some issues. So at this point, Limit might as well just win this whole map. Limit is on Rixa, but we've seen Limit make mistakes before. We've definitely seen, they have 16 deaths, really. So there's definitely things that can go wrong for them at this point as well. Now we see Rixa on 60% here. The boss, as we talked about earlier, is definitely something to like very difficult on the tank because of this magic damage coming in.
Yeah, I'm sure Sloot's in the back room holding up his yikes sign. That's super bad for Learn to Fly as a team that we actually thought was going to make it past this and make it into the land, maybe potentially if they did have a really good run here. And we do actually see Learn to Fly getting full screened here, as we do see Limit on the screen here, dealing with Rixa Flux Flame, making sure that they end up baiting that propellant blast in order to be able to move that ground effect in a way that they would prefer.
Yeah, so we actually got the official note that Adel actually did disconnect, so that's why they had a full team wipe coming in here. Now, Limit, on the other hand, of course, they are dealing with Rixa here, 30% on the boss. It really shouldn't be a problem to finish it off here. We see Max drop very low, but they should be able to heal Max back up as long as they deal with this debuffs properly. And now, once Rixa is down, of course, they do have the 100% trash already. So all they have to do is stealth to the next boss or Shadow Melt the aggro away and just deal with the last boss.
Yeah, the Limit's actually done a really good job of dealing with Rixa here. As I cursed them, and Max does end up going down, they do actually have a battle res as Jeeth is dropping incredibly low, and Jeeth goes down too. They don't have a battle res for Jeeth because Jeeth is the only res on the team. Rixa is fortunately 12%, so they might be able to kill it though.
They might be able to kill it now. As I said, this is a lot of tank damage, and we saw how fast Revo died on the other side when they didn't have a healer, right? So this is going to be very difficult for them to deal. As Max goes down, 3%. They do have the debuffs on Trill. Now Trill is going to go down too in a second. Okay, they didn't manage to finish it off. That was so close. So that almost was a disaster for Limit. As this is like they have to win this map at this point. They have to win, right? They're one boss ahead at this point. They're on their way to the next boss. They do have the Bloodlust ready as well. They have to just, as I said, they have to go through. They have to Shadow Melt the aggro away and then aggro the next boss. Now, Learn to Fly, of course, has to do this whole skip again. Has to get to the boss again because their respawn is on the boss before. So they have to get their Shadow Melt off again. And I feel like they might not have their Shadow Melt ready as some of the teams go down, but as long as Edelweiss gets it off, and she doesn't. She's actually in combat here. She might get a battle rest off on the Windwalker, so the Windwalker can rest her and she can rest the team. But he needs to die.
No, but they're dealing with those Risen Souls from that Reaping. That's
fine. They will reset.
Do they reset? I think they just end up
No, they reset.
Okay, so Limit here pulling Mogul Raz Dunk here in a second as Jeeth ends up casting his Mass Res here on Max. Hopefully Max isn't 100 yards away. That would actually be horrible on the side of Team Limit. But Draz does end up getting that Battle Res. He is going to end up resing Edel, and then she's going to be casting that Mass Res on the rest of Learn to Fly as well.
Okay, so again, Limit is one of those teams that we've seen mistakes over mistakes over mistakes coming out of Limit here. So there's definitely still a chance for Learn to Fly to come back here. As Limit does have 2 battle rests ready, but if the rest of Druid dies, there's no way of them to rest him back up because there's no other battle rest available other than the Druid. So I feel like that's the only chance for Learn to Fly to come back at this point with their very unfortunate disconnect. Definitely just cost him so much time as they have Revo still just being that and kind of out of range for Mass Rest. Just Learn to Fly is so unfortunate for them.
Yeah, Limit would actually have to lose their healer here, and it is important to note that the healer does end up getting the honing missile on him every single time, so if for some reason Jeeth did end up going down, that would actually be a tragedy on the side of Team Limit. Learn to Fly has obviously pulled Rixa Flux Flame again, while Limit has Mogul Raz Dunk to 75%. They do have Bloodlust available to them, so they were going to be able to DPS down Mogul Raz Dunk very quickly once they do phase him out of the intermission at 50% here.
Yeah, so the intermission is pretty scary, especially on top of Quaking, because there's just so much AoE damage coming in. But once they are in intermission, they do have the Bloodlust for the second phase, and then it should be a ride for them. But now Limit here, the only thing you gotta watch out for is really the rest of Druid, right? If he goes down, they're in trouble. And the rest of Druid does have the most difficult job here because he's the only eligible target for dismissals, as we can see them coming out here, because he prefers ranged target, and he's the only ranged player in this whole group, so he will get every single missile. So what he has to do is go in to make sure to dodge the Gatling gun, as you can see right now. Then he has to go out again, bait the missile on you, make sure that your group doesn't get hit, and then you also need to dodge the missiles coming from the boom bots on the side as the intermission goes up now.
Yeah, Jeeth is actually doing a really good job of eating that honing missile, make sure he's pre-hotting himself. And you actually do see Limit popping their Bloodlust in the intermission here on Mogul Raz Dunk, which I definitely do not agree with here. I know those mobs are very kind of scary during the intermission. These Sky Scorchers put a pretty big healing debuff on your tank, but I don't think they're worth Bloodlusting, especially since you're going to get significantly reduced uptime on the Bloodlust here.
Yeah, I feel like the one reason why Limit Bloodlust is here is because they know they're very far ahead.
Okay, that's fair.
They probably just saw on the other stream that Limit Learn to Fly was wiping, and they felt like, you know what, we're very far ahead. Let's just Bloodlust the intermission phase just to be sure, because as I said, there's just so much AoE damage coming out on top of the Quaking. Just play a little bit safer, make sure we don't wipe, and then just play it safe. But the last race, there's still things that can go wrong as the boss goes down now, and they have to just deal with the last percent here, and then they're gonna be winning.
Yep, Rixa Flux flying down to 20% on the side of Learn to Fly. Mogul Razdunk obviously phasing again as he does hit that last drill with, as he does hit that last barrel with his drill down. He's sitting at 40%. You actually do see Max ending up pulling Mogul Razdunk out of the range of those boom bots, getting him to one of the safer zones here, as you do actually see them kind of marked on the map. You actually do see them marked with the world markers here, so they can kind of coordinate in voice like where they're going to be running or what is exactly is the safe zone. You do see Jeeth here getting that missile on him, and Limit's starting to get Mogul Razdunk down pretty low here.
Yeah, so one thing that I want to mention here is if you have a personal disconnect, there's not going to be a remake because it's your own personal responsibility. Just because in case a team is behind and they just kind of DC on purpose, then you can't have a remake every single time. So this is why the rule exists, and this is why Learn to Fly is not going to get a remake here because of the personal disconnect. It's very unfortunate for Learn to Fly, and they might have ended up winning because they were ahead, but this is how the rules work, and Limit is ahead here, and they're about to kill the boss and win this match.
Yeah, unfortunately nothing they could do on the side of Learn to Fly. Mogul Razdunk dropping down to 7%. As soon as he does end up dying, he will end up spawning a little guy out of him, and then you end up having to DPS him. He doesn't have very much health, but then the fight will end, and Limit will be crowned victorious here in this match versus Learn to Fly here. And that's just how she wrote it. That's an unfortunate series of events here for both teams.
After a very...
Because of the necrotic affix that we're on, getting that earthquake down really provides a fair bit of damage bolstered for the tank, so it helps out a lot. Games Revolted stealthing and grabbing a lot of the trash here on the side of Rux, on the side of Games Revolted from Rux, as Team Puolukka line of sights around the corner, equally large pull coming in for them. We'll see if any of them decide to hold on to their bloodlust. Oftentimes you do see that popped with the first boss instead, and they are indeed being a bit stingy with it.
This is very interesting. So Team Puolukka actually ended up playing Elemental plus Unholy DK, and both of the tanks are dwarves too. We see the Rogue actually going down. He did release. He's going to be able to come back fast. But yeah, both of the tanks are dwarves, and we see Unholy DK on both teams plus Elemental. This means they can only change one of those things for the next dungeon. So next dungeon, Tol Dagor, is going to be very interesting as we see some very weird comps coming out.
And that's totally okay with me right now. But unfortunately, for the side of Team Puolukka, Click trying to get away as desperately as possible, does manage to reset those necrotic stacks right now, but the mobs are just hounding him right in the corner there, trying to get out of that parrot poop as we speak. They already have a death on the board, did not use the battle res. Games Revolted about to proc their first reaping on the left side here. They will drag it on top of Sky Captain Craig, of course, that will spawn here in a moment, and pop that bloodlust. Team Puolukka moving just a bit slower.
Yeah, Team Puolukka being a little bit slower, but you can see the damage coming out of the Elemental Shaman, just doing so much AoE damage, definitely bringing the damage here. And one more thing to note as well, that on a necrotic affix, Elemental Shaman is especially good because they have the Earth Elemental that they can pop to draw aggro from the mobs and actually give the tank some breathing room, making sure he can reset. Now, of course, they're missing the Ring of Peace on the other hand, though.
Yeah, I mean, the Ring of Peace is certainly very useful with that low cooldown as well, but, you know, I'm sure the team can certainly play around that. Warrior has enough mobility to get out in the blink of an eye. The real issue will come when the Harpooners come in. We'll see exactly how they decide to deal with that. But for now, Sky Captain Craig, one-shot potential boss, certainly one of the most dangerous bosses in the dungeon with this tyrannical affix that we're running here. Team Puolukka is now just pulled as they get it down to 80% with their bloodlust at 75%. We do know that he will dismount, as we've seen over on the side of Games Revolted.
Yeah, so definitely don't want to make the boss reset here. Don't want to get knocked out from the birds and reset the boss. That's definitely not something we want to see again from these teams here. As we see, both of the Rassadors just kind of standing out and baiting those green pulls. Now, there's a certain positioning you can do, so the green pulls never spawn on top of the boss and never spawn on top of melees. And it seems like Games Revolted is doing a very good job at baiting it properly, and also Team Puolukka. Now, one advantage of being a ranged DPS here is you can just kind of stand outside of the arena and just kind of damage without having to worry about anything whatsoever. You just stand there and do nothing, basically.
Yeah, he just completely ignores pretty much all of them on the boss. So a bit of a field day here for DJ Frush, as he just managed to pump out single target damage as much as he can to get this boss down quickly. Games Revolted now to 33% for Sky Captain Craig. Both teams 22% trash apiece. No problem for Games Revolted. They have been displaced just a couple times from the kind of parrot poot coming down right now, but really they just want to prevent a combo of that frontal fire blast hitting them at the same time as either the bird would connect with them or some of the poop coming down. That's really what has the potential to one-shot players. As you can see, just one of those shots taking Curry Monk down to 17% health.
Yeah, we actually saw Gotcha on Team Puolukka side taunt the boss here for a second, just to make sure that Click can reset his necrotic stacks here, because there's no other way of resetting, of course. So he did have a hard time with necrotic, did manage to reset once the taunt came out though, so he should be able to recover. But Team Puolukka are a little bit behind in boss percentage, of course, because they did pull the boss later. Now Games Revolted are about to finish up this boss here, and then they're just gonna continue skipping the enforcers as we've seen from multiple teams, and then go ahead to do the next trash.
Well played here from Games Revolted. One last hit coming in on Adak as Sky Captain Craig is about to fall here, 2%. Team Puolukka trying to catch up a bit, only a few percent, kind of separating the teams now. It used to be 20, but they managed to close the gap just a bit as Games Revolted does start to head off. They will pull this Enforcer to the side and then start moving across the bridge. Now just very inefficient to deal with this Enforcer as a solo unit. It's also a Lieutenant style mob, just largely not CCable. You can, of course, displace it, but that's about it. So the rest of the team gets across the bridge safely with, once again, it's a beautiful view here from our observers as we see the rest of the dungeon down ominously below the bridge, moving to the side, making sure not to pull the oarsman on the side, and getting ready for what I assume, Nagura, will be a pretty substantial pull that we've seen from the other teams, getting ready for that second reaping.
Most definitely. We saw Gotcha actually dropping very low, probably got hit by one of those birds coming from the side. Ended up not dying though, so they did ended up killing the boss without having any deaths. But Games Revolted are pretty far ahead at this point, already dealing with some trash here. As I'm not completely sure if they pulled some of the neutrals here that they deal with and then jump down. Yes, that's probably what happened. Killed some of the neutrals. Now they're gonna jump down and probably do a bigger pull.
The entire team here from Games Revolted getting that beer debuff nice and early and making sure to kind of proc the captain's event. Big pull coming in here from them as they bring everything together, getting ready for their second reaping wave. Going to be a lot of damage and necrotic babysitting needed here for the tank with various forms of crowd control. And of course, we'll likely see that Ring of Peace coming out of them in just a bit. There it is right now. A bit of a defensive peel for Rux, making sure that they can get away properly to reset those necrotic. Team Puolukka following suit as well. Dropping right down now, there's a rat trapper in this pack. Want to make sure you don't get hit by those traps. They do root you in place and do a substantial amount of damage, but Click, 44 stacks of necrotic, finally gets it off with that dwarf racial, but they will be ramping up again quite quickly, and they don't have the Ring of Peace to really help him if he starts to get in trouble. So they do have the Ursul's Vortex down right now. We can see the Earthquake down from the Elemental Shaman, trying to give a bit of support with the random knockdowns that happen. And there's just, that Earthquake is really just so nice for damage intake. I've had it myself a few times, and it's just, you notice it as a tank. So Click manages to reset the second round of necrotic, and they head off trying to proc their reaping respectively. Yeah,
the Games Revolted here on the boss. 39%, so they most likely want to pull anything on top of the boss to proc this reaping wave, just because, you know, this combination is not very difficult to deal with, especially because you really have those brews on the ground that help you out. So there's 2 positive brews and 1 negative one. One buffs crit to your players, 1 buffs haste to your players and also the bosses, and 1 gives a debuff. So you want your players to get the positive buffs, and you want the bosses to get the negative buffs, to get the damage debuff on them, damage over time. Now this is where we see the reaping wave actually coming, the 41%, and they're just making use of these kind of brews coming in, just making sure they deal with the reaping wave faster.
Puolukka doing the same thing right now as they pull the remaining neutrals, getting ready to proc their second reaping, and they do just that as they pull Captain Jolly and Captain Roll together. They're pulling trash on top of this though, along with the reaping coming in. There's gonna be a lot of damage, and a few of those frost frontals got out from the brine scales right now. Finally they managed to stabilize, but Click just so much damage on him right now, not only with the necrotic damage over time, but the dots from the reaping souls. He needs a dispel desperately not to be able to die. Finally gets the dispel before the next hit comes in from Gotcha, as Sinkino unfortunately starts taking a bunch of residual damage from the remaining mobs that he pulled aggro on. A lot of healing needed for Gotcha here. He's pulled in every which direction. Looks like they're finally managing to stabilize just a bit. Games Revolted down to 25% on the 2 bosses.
This is so risky by Team Puolukka, but you gotta notice the off-healing coming from Frush here, as Gotcha did 50k HPS and Frush actually doing 20k HPS himself, so helping out a lot with this off-healing, and also helping out with the Earth Elemental, as I mentioned earlier, just making sure some of those mobs are not attacking the tank, but rather attacking the Elemental instead. So this is probably why they managed to do these huge pulls here, just having the utility from the Shaman come in, definitely paying off here for Team Team Puolukka. But the Games Revolted already dealt with the boss, and you know, they're just ahead at this time. 10% trash difference, but still just one boss ahead.
I'm not really sure if that was worth it, because it turned into one of those situations where the tank was frantically running around at the end. The mobs really weren't slow. There wasn't a lot of peel going on. Everybody was having trouble hitting the mobs with ground effects and cleave, just running around in circles. Probably taxed a lot of extra cooldowns from Gautya that he might have preferred to save for either later in the fight or afterwards. But nonetheless, unfortunately for them, no extra deaths on the board for Team Puolukka right now, as they get halfway through their Council of Captains fight and have stabilized after that very risky trash plus second reaping pull. Games Revolted aggressively grabbing some more things around the ring of booty as they prepare for Ludwig von Tortolen to spawn.
You really like saying that name.
I mean, wouldn't you? I might change my name to that.
Okay, so Games Revolted doing a decent pull here. They can pull it on top of Ludwig if they want to, because there's no affix really preventing them from doing so. There's no bolstering or anything like that. But we see Rax actually dropping very low, and one affix that is kind of preventing them to do the pull is necrotic, but they're doing it anyway. So that's why, that's why those tanks are dwarfs, right? Because they can, as we see the racial come out of Rax right now, getting rid of those necrotic stacks, but there's still a lot of mobs alive, and you still have Ludwig alive. So those necrotic stacks are going to ramp up again, and you need to see those Ring of Peace and those other CCs come out to make sure Rux actually can drop the necrotic.
Yeah, but the problem is they completely misplayed their Ring of Peace right now, and Rux is getting the brunt of it as their harpooners drag him back in. He's not able to reset his necrotic stacks outside of kiting in circles. They dropped the Ring of Peace at the same time he used his racial at 44 stacks, so really wasn't worth it there. Something that could have been used now quite well to save him at least a few of the stacks. Nonetheless, he managed to squeeze by because fortunately Ludwig von Tortolen, being a turtle, is actually very slow, and you can just easily outrun him at normal running speed. So able to just kind of reset those necrotic stacks on a whim if the rest of the mobs are temporarily slowed from the rest of the team. Finally, Team Puolukka does down the Council of Captains, or at least is about to here, as Captain Rule falls to 3% health, and Jolly has been eliminated. Click just dipping a bit low there, but no concern for them. They will get ready in a moment here, of course, to mass stealth over to the Ring of Booty themselves.
Yeah, Team Puolukka just needing so much time for this boss. Probably, like you said, it wasn't really worth it to do this huge amount of pull on top of it, because as soon as you go into this defensive mode, as I mentioned a couple of games earlier, you just lose damage because your tank all of a sudden is not doing damage anymore. And as we know, Proud Warriors do a lot of damage if they can. So if your tank is cutting, not doing damage, and maybe the Elemental Shaman even off healing, you know, helping out here and there whenever they can, as soon as you do that, you do less damage and everything just takes a little bit longer. So you definitely never really want to be in defensive mode, and maybe it just really didn't work out for them, as Games Revolted already procced a 60% Reaping Wave, and they're on their way to pull Rothak.
Yeah, so Team Puolukka is now proccing their 60% Reaping Wave on top of Ludwig, so they're kind of one-ish Reaping Wave ahead. They'll proc their 80% and pull that with Trothak, or at least near Trothak. So Games Revolted definitely has a bit of trash to make up versus Team Puolukka's very aggressive pull, but I still think we stick to our guns. It was a bit inefficient just because of the mass amount of kiting needed at the end. A lot of trash coming in for Puolukka here as they grab their 60% reaping on top of Ludwig. And we just see so much damage coming out of DJ Frush right now, and the Unholy DK absolutely destroying this reaping wave coming in for them and dealing only with Ludwig. But Gotcha gets a bit of a clip there and almost actually goes down, just sub 10% health. So really lucky save. Click needs to desperately get out before this necrotic gets too out of hand, and does just that as he unheroically leaps out of the group like a coward, making sure he doesn't die on the side.
You see Games Revolted, on the other hand, dealing with this reaping wave on top of Trothak. Now Trothak can be a very dangerous boss if you don't handle the mechanics very well, especially those sharks. As you can see, Asmon kiting the sharks on the side. You want to make sure you kite them through those red puddles on the ground, because they will stun the shark for a limited amount of time. And now, the sharks don't fixate the closest person, but sometimes the shark will actually get thrown into melee. So that's where you want to make sure that the melees watch out. If the shark is in melee, you want to make sure you have the Rested Root pick it up and kite it away from them, because if you tank the shark and you get hit by it, it does a lot of damage.
It does indeed, as Team Puolukka finally downs Ludwig and heads over, getting ready to pull some of the trash in order to get their 80% reaping wave, whilst the RP, the role playing for Trothak, occurs. About 25 seconds or so by the time he starts to enter the ring to the time he's targetable and aggroable from the team. Trothak down to 45% though for Games Revolted. A bit of an advantage here for Team Puolukka, Nagura, definitely, because they do have that extra ranged. DJ Frush can just sit on the outside safely, well outside of the Shark Tornado, and also, you know, just allow Gotcha in this case to kite the sharks and just really kind of turret the boss.
Yeah, and one more thing to mention here is that around this Ring of Booty, you actually have those dummies, the neutral mobs, that he can dot up on DJ Frush's side. So he actually gains a lot of single target damage, those lava burst procs, while having those dots on those Reaping Souls and also the dummies in the back. So definitely gaining a lot of single target damage here, probably doing a lot more damage than the Windwalker if you compare the damage to one another. Now, of course, Shaman does not provide a physical damage debuff, so that's what you also have to keep in mind. But still, Team Puolukka on Trothek now as Games Revolted is on 20%, about to down him.
Yes, some big damage coming in here for Team Puolukka, 82% now on Trothek. Games Revolted still has to deal with their 4th Reaping Wave, as we mentioned earlier. 9% trash left on the board for them to be able to proc that. Trothek rushing over across the arena to his Shark in order to pick it up on the side of Games Revolted, whilst Puolukka, both of them have that Bloodlust available, not opting to pop it. We'll likely, I assume at least, see a pretty aggressive pull with Harlan's Suite and the trash in front of him in order to try and kill them off as quickly as possible before the Necrotic gets too out of hand for the tanks, and of course using the Cannonball Barrage to their advantage for that too. But Games Revolted now 5% for Trothek, about to down it, so we're going to see exactly what they want to do for the trash before heading over to Harlan Sweet's bridge.
Yeah, so what we've seen from Method EU was kind of a pull on the left side of the Ring of Booty here, so maybe we see something similar coming out of Games Revolted here. As they're down Trothek, Asmon's probably going to sit down and get some mana back up as they need to pull the rest of the trash. Now, if they decide to go to the last boss room, then there's going to be a lot of trash that they have to do, because they're still missing 29%, while Team Puolukka of course, proc to 80% Reaping Wave already, and they're only missing 20%. So definitely less trash for Team Puolukka to deal with, but if Games Revolted just kind of pulls the 30% they still need on top of the boss and just kind of do it while killing the boss, then it's just going to be very efficient for them, and they're not going to lose a lot of time at all dealing with it.
Yeah, and DJ Frush really just not getting the amount of damage that we were hoping out. Now, I know some of that, of course, is unfairly bolstered by the fact that they had a Reaping Wave come in to Trothek on top of that, but that's kind of where Elemental Shaman really shined for them a bit earlier. So just not getting as much damage output as you would see. I'd be very curious to see the single target damage for that boss specifically, but fortunately don't have access to that right now, as Games Revolted has jumped up to Harlan Suite, indeed pulled the double Enforcer pack in front of the boss. One of the Mastiffs on the side has been sapped, likely perhaps saving it for the end of the fight, or just to proc a Reaping Wave on top of something. But Bloodlust has also been pulled here. A lot of damage coming in as the cannons end up, actually those are that was the first cannon, ended up hitting the 3 members of the team. Rux has had a reset on his Necrotic already, but those Enforcers need to go, because the only thing you can do is displace them. You can't stun them or anything.
Yeah, definitely want to watch out for the Necrotic here. If you don't have a Dwarf Racial, it's very hard to get rid of the Necrotic here. The only way of really doing it is have maybe the Druid taunt the boss away, but it's such a difficult thing to do because there's not that much room to kite the boss, and you also have a lot of other abilities coming out. But they managed to down the trash here, and Rux should be able to refresh, to drop the Necrotic rather. Team Puolukka on the other side, downing Trothek now, but they're pretty far behind.
Yeah, so Games Revolted indeed has kept the Mastiff alive on the side there, just to choose when they want to proc their 4th Reaping Wave. We see them at 78% trash right now. That Mastiff will get them above that 80% threshold. So they might be wanting to wait until Harlan Suite is at below 60%, because at that point, the entirety of the team, except for the tank, will get targeted with these cannonball barrages, quadrupling the amount of damage output from them on top of whatever trash / reaping that they decide to pull with it. Puolukka as well, sitting at that 80% mark, 3 deaths on the board for them now, unfortunately, as they cross the bridge over to Harlan Suite. God, I love that view.
So Games Revolted, not only are they ahead in time, but they're also 3 deaths ahead at this point. So it's really Games Revolted who are in the driver's seat here. Now you can see there's still things that can go wrong on this boss pull, because pulling a lot of trash on top of the boss is very dangerous. It's not as easy as it might look like. As they get the Reaping Wave on top of the boss here, they have to deal with the Reaping on top of just getting knocked around by the boss, right? The boss has this ability where it just knocks you around if you get hit by it. You also have the cannonballs come in at the same time, while having to dodge all those swirlies on the ground and all the other Reaping effects. So definitely need to make sure that they're dealing with all those abilities at the same time properly, as Team Puolukka use their Bloodlust and do the same pull as we saw from Games Revolted as they pulled the boss.
They might be, I don't think they'll actually prop their 5th Reaping for Team Puolukka on the side there, but definitely pretty darn close right now as they pull the Officer on top of it, which is a fair bit of mob count right now. They'll probably get to about 98, 99%. I think there's still an Enforcer in there, so they do actually proc their 100% of Reaping on top of it quite early, so they're going to use the cannonballs, especially the sub 60% one on Harlan Suite, to clean up the 5th Reaping Wave. Usually something that we see teams skip. Is it really the biggest loss in the world or that dangerous? Certainly not. Is it that efficient? No, but they don't really lose much by just kind of tanking it. Gautya, unfortunately, does need to heal and dispel on Click a bit, so he loses a bit of damage in the trade-off here. Nonetheless, Harlan Sweet about to get to that 60%, so they can use the cannonballs, the extra cannonballs, to finish off that pack. Games are vaulted 22% now in Harlan Sweet. They've entered the burn phase sub 30%, looking to close this one out as quickly as possible and move on to the remaining trash needed.
Yeah, so they still need 11% trash here, but they do have some trash on top of here. And the last trash really doesn't take a long time because you have those Ravagers who cast this ability that just kind of puts a debuff on themselves and 2 other mobs, just damaging themselves. It's a painful motivation. As you can see, it actually already happening on the side here. As we saw, I believe it was a mass root that came out of Asmon here, just rooting all those mobs, making sure he engages them, and then the Ravagers were casting the cast is damaging themselves. So I really like the strategy here coming by Games Revolted, just using this mass root.
Yeah, so unfortunately just a bit of extra sloppiness coming out of Team Puolukka as they accrue 1 more death on the board, 4 for them, and that is just not going to be enough as we get these painful motivations cast on the Ravager and its 2 closest allies. That does not include a boss level mob. So Harlan Sweet dead. Games Revolted 94% on the board, looking to close out these last few mobs that did not get clipped by the painful motivation. Shouldn't be too much trouble for them as Team Puolukka still only now at 40% on Harlan Sweet, and they will be taking the first game here in just a moment.
Yeah, it's kind of an upset, really. Games Revolted winning here versus Team Puolukka, who need to win.
Especially with the prisoners, the buff prisoners, if you will, is pretty much guarded only by double pulls that they can be sapped. So we'll see what they do, but Games Revolted right out the gate here actually pulls up a fair bit of trash right now, runs right by the Vice Jaws. Don't want those as the debuff. The tank occasionally with maximum health decrease, so you don't want that. Team Puolukka following suit, only a few of the crabs right now on top of the Sand Queen as Bloodlust comes up a bit prematurely from Games Revolted. We do know that there's going to be a here in a second for the Sand Queen, so they're going to lose a fair bit of time, at least on the boss, but there will be at least trash present for them to take advantage, full advantage of that Bloodlust.
Yeah, one more thing to mention is that the Team Puolukka actually has a real Bloodlust, as they have a Shaman who actually can cast that ability, while all the other teams that don't have a Shaman or a Mage available to them, of course, they need to use their drums, which are just slightly worse compared to Bloodlust, so it's getting a little bit of an advantage here by having the Shaman here. Just a lot of utility coming out of the Shaman as they do use the Bloodlust here and deal with this trash that they pulled on top of the boss.
Yeah, a fair bit of damage coming in on the rogues as well as some of those parasites. The drones did leak and apply some of their damage over time. Now we are back in an enraging environment, so any trash sub 30% will deal 100% increased damage, and we do have, as mentioned earlier, those volcanic plumes, so you gotta watch your feet on the ground. Now, not so bad out here, a lot of space to move around, a lot of camera work for the players to be able to see what's going on, but once we get into the nitty-gritty on the inside of the jail, it'll be a bit tougher for players. They won't have nearly as much space, and their camera will be quite zoomed in to make sure that they can see the play field well. So especially in the Jess Hallis room, we might see, hopefully not, well, hopefully, depends who you ask, but we might see some players get clipped by some of that damage. Click dipping just a bit low here for Team Puolukka as Gautya struggles to heal through the double drone ticks there.
Yeah, we see one thing to note here is that Asmon actually kept the mass root from the Freehold, which is interesting because we see Typhoon used kind of a lot in the cannon area to make sure the mobs are stacked up. But then again, there's some very unlucky things that can happen with Typhoon and Tol Dagor, so maybe that's why he's running Typhoon, running mass root instead, just to be sure that nothing strange is going to happen with this Typhoon, and just mass root the mobs when the cannon is coming out, just to help gathering them up.
Increasing damage coming here from Puolukka as the next upheaval is finally cast for them. We see one of the rogues run off. Now, rogues don't have too much of a difficult time as they do well there to actually dodge the entirety of the upheaval. Now, if you move quickly enough with the upheaval, just before it hits, you can actually dodge the entire thing, and we saw the mobility of that rogue coming in from Sinky as he kind of got himself back in just out of dodge there, didn't take any of that nature damage, and managed to get right back on the Sand Queen once she came down from her, came up from her burrow. Sand Queen down to 20% on Games Revolted as they look to try to close the boss out early, along with 14% worth of trash already, whereas Team Puolukka only has 5% trash on the board, about to be 15% on Sand Queen. But you know, we talk about this, it doesn't really matter that amount of trash. It's perhaps, hopefully at least, an intended setup on where exactly they're going to proc their first reaping.
Yeah, one thing to note here is as well that Frush doesn't look like he's doing a lot of damage in the damage meters here as he's getting out DPS by the tank, but the tank is probably just doing a lot of AoE damage to those drones, the same as with those rogues, while the Shaman is most likely just doing single target damage, so it looks like he's doing not a lot, but if it's all single target damage, then it's not bad at all. And of course, this first boss is not very caster friendly because you constantly get moved around by the sandstorm and you need to move to dodge the sand traps, so definitely a pretty movement heavy fight, meaning that it's not very caster friendly.
Yeah, and you know, on top of it, you could just see that their single target damage on their boss was actually quite comparable to Games Revolted. They only finished the boss about 2% apart. Both have moved upstairs and are waiting for the skip. Now, this is the hallway that I was talking about. All of these skips here are only in doubles, so you get the both saps ups right away, which are true CC. Rogues run ahead, grab some of the buffs in the cages here. Games Revolted members just wait on the side of the room. Same thing coming out of Team Puolukka. They will double sap just ahead those stone throwers, the strikers, unlock that door and already head up to Jess Howless's room, expecting to see a mass stealth coming out of the teams here to get past this 3-pack and then start clearing the floor in order to be able to access the second boss of the dungeon.
Yeah, I want to mention one more time that both of the tanks are playing Dwarf for each side, and we also have Fruge not being a Night Elf. So all of the Shadow Mail skips, they can't really be done anymore, which we've seen from other teams coming out in Tol Dagor. But they can just kind of play the live service strategy, where Horde players, of course, not having Shadow Melt available to them, just kind of doing those skips that take a little bit longer if you don't have the Shadow Melt, but you can still do the skips. As we see Team Puolukka doing a pretty huge pull, just pulling a lot of trash mobs on top of Jess Howless here.
Yeah, I mean, this is very aggressive coming out of them right now. They make sure to well line of sight. We already see the Earth Elemental come up, just getting as much damage as possible and helping relieve some of the damage on the tank right now. Got to be careful of those raging mobs once they start coming up, and unfortunately some of the water dome casts from the C speakers have hit those. You want to make sure that you're getting getting interrupts on those right away, else they will just have a huge amount of absorb for the enemies.
Now the thing is, so they have an Elemental Shaman who does have an offensive Dispel, right? Which you don't really have available to you otherwise if you run a comp like Games Revolted. So in case a Water Dome goes off, DJ Fruge can single target Dispel the boss in case it's on him. So that's one thing he kind of can save it a little bit, but still.
But come on, I mean, he's not going to waste GCDs dispelling the entire trash.
No,
if 10 mobs get... Yeah, of course, the boss. Or maybe the trash and not the boss, just because he's enraging, but nonetheless, he has that option to it. Puolukka now 75% on just Howless, whilst Games Revolted, if I'm not mistaken, did a trick to actually pull Jess around the edge and into the beginning area. So they're already technically pre-positioned on where they're going to end up. So they're just kind of letting Jess flow around the edge, grab all of the cages, and they're pulling some of these extra trash mobs on top of the boss now, while Jess has the RP of the cage opening, which will also release Bobby Howless, the brother of Jess.
Yeah, so this is a pull we've been talking about that a lot of teams try to do, where they pull the boss through the cage, but almost all of the teams that tried this failed and had some sort of full wipe coming in. As Games Revolted is just trying to do this exact same thing, as we see Jess Howless and also a lot of trash, a lot of arsonists, a lot of other trash is being on top of this boss. Now there's a lot of things you have to deal with here, on top of just interrupting the boss, interrupting Bobby. You also have to deal with all the trash, with the arsonist, with the debuff. So this is a very difficult pull. Let's see if Games Revolted can actually pull it off.
I'm a bit worried about the positioning here on Team Puolukka right now. It's not a very, just barely dragged Jess at the last second. There's not a lot of space for that line of sight in that pocket that most of the team ran into, but Klig did manage to kind of just grab Jess at the last second before the flashing daggers went out, which is a huge AoE physical hit on the group, and just get enough space for the rest of the group to make sure that they hide from it. We see a bit of crowd control coming in from Gautya in the distance on some of the arsonists that they pulled down. We see a Hex going down, a Blind, and of course a Root as well, just to keep those mobs well away from the boss until they're ready to deal with them. Right now, as the arsonist finally runs in, well picked up by Klig, and getting ready to cleave that on top of the boss, on top of Jess and Bobby as well. Games Revolted doing well to dodge the massive amount of volcanic plumes going down. Jess Howless at 20% on the board for them.
Yeah, there's some of those mobs, actually one of the arsonists going on top of the boss on Team Puolukka's side, because the blinds of the ropes ran out and you can't really see them because blind actually has a longer cooldown than it lasts on the boss. But we see their hacks coming out. He can just re-hacks them up all the time, and we see the Root coming out on the C speaker. So they can finish up Jess Howless here and then pull the rest of the trash. Of course, they don't have Shadow Melt available to them, so they either have to do a death skip or just have the non-Night Elves die.
Yeah, the non-Night Elves will unfortunately have to die. As we, I mentioned in previous weeks, unfortunately there just aren't enough Night Elves to go around for all these classes because of the burning of Teldrassil. Many were lost in that great fire. Team Puolukka moving upstairs now, getting the unlock on the cage, as Klig is actually just pulling the trash with him. And you know what? How they're going to skip this? They're going to skip this. Actually, for a second, I thought they were just going to aggressively pull it already into the cannon and just not even care about the skip, just get everything killed. But we see a similar skip, unfortunately, from both Games Revolted and Team Puolukka, so no real advantage on either side outside of the one extra death that they have to do with the skip for Team Puolukka. Plus 5 seconds on the board, but both teams had to do the same skip, run around the corner, have all the non-Night Elves die, and then res them on the other side of the wall in the cannon hall.
Yeah, this is a neck on neck here. The one thing that would be very sad here is if Team Puolukka loses this game by 5 seconds because they needed their Shaman to die too, while against Revolted only needed their tank to die. So 5 seconds difference, 1 death difference between those two teams. Against Revolted is slightly ahead in trash because they killed more trash earlier, but this doesn't mean anything really because you can just duel so much trash at the same time with these cannons. And I feel like Team Puolukka has a slight advantage because they just have the utility from the Shaman coming in, which is going to help them a lot. Just popping this Earth Elemental, making sure it tanks all those mobs here, making sure that the cannons are going to deal with them easier.
So here comes the Swiftfoot Potion from Click, as we just saw for Team Puolukka doing a massive pull of pretty much everything on the floor right now. Line of sighting around the doorway. Now the Rogues need to make sure to pre-tricks of the trade on the tank before going into the cannon to make sure that any threat they produce is actually temporarily given to the tank for 30 seconds. Otherwise, all of those range mobs, all the casters, all the gunners, everybody will shoot the Rogue in the cannon and kill them. But this way, the tank can just safely sit around the corner, line of sight everything coming in while the cannon does its work, and the tank collects any stragglers, or of course any of the reaping that is procced for Team Puolukka. Barua, though, starts to run out of gas right now. I'm pretty sure the tricks of the trade ran out, and he actually procs his cheat death as well, unless he has gone into the far cannon, it looks like. Yeah, so he actually ran over to the far cannon. Unfortunately, some of the Risen Souls from the Reaping Wave came with him and started damaging him, which is like why Click just reacted so quickly to jump over and get aggro on those.
Yeah, this is actually pretty scary as all the mobs drop very low because you do have the Raging affix. Now, Raging, not a big factor in general because you all deal with the cannons here with the trash, but if something happens and you have to run around, you can't line of sight the mobs because there's a lot of casters. And if the tank is aggro, you can get silenced with some of the casters, you can get other debuffs on them and shoot and so on. So if you don't manage to line of sight, you can definitely die if some of those raging mobs target you. So you gotta watch out for that. As Team Puolukka in both games Revolted proc the 80% Reaping Wave, they're so close to one another here.
Yeah, it's really close, and I have a bad feeling this is going to be decided by the difficulty and RNG of Korgus, the final boss of the dungeon. We'll talk about that when we get there, just with the explosive bursts that are going to be inevitably hitting the teams quite a lot, and it just depends which team's going to get more doubles and have difficulty healing, but we'll see when we get there. Team Puolukka now at 93%. You only need 88% trash before getting to Valeri's room, the third boss of the dungeon, if assuming at least that you want to kill the 5 mobs past her. But nonetheless, both teams have, of course, pre-calculated their percent. Games Revolted definitely pretty much done with their trash. They only need that one pull to proc their last reaping, which they'll likely do after Korgus.
Yeah, so both of those teams pulling Valeri within 1 second of each other. So both the teams is doing so well, just being neck on neck to each other. And Games Revolted, just trash different is not going to be a huge deal unless Games Revolted is actually doing the sneaky kind of thing where they pull one mob to the last boss and just perma CC it throughout the fight and then kill it at the very end, because that is actually going to save them a lot of time if Team Puolukka has to deal with trash and deal with the reaping compared to Games Revolted. So we will see how they do deal with it later. This might also be a thing that the teams end up doing, and they just watch the stream, see how far are we ahead. Are we super far ahead? Because then we're just gonna play it safe and not to see them up throughout the fight. And if it's close like this game, then maybe they're gonna risk it and just have the mobs seat next to the last boss.
Nice amount of damage coming out of the Elemental Shaman, single target here versus Knight Captain Valeri for Team Puolukka. Liking what the team's doing, they're trying to keep this corner as safe as possible. This boss is a huge pain in the butt to move. She constantly casts and even pauses between her casts sometimes before she recasts again. So if you get caught in the middle of the room, inside of one of the barrel explosions, of course the melee and the tank will run away from her, but then she'll just sit there doing nothing, and the melee can't access her, do no damage. So by parking her in the corner and making it a rule to keep one of the corners safe at all times, even if you switch corners, and pre-dragging her, the melee should have 100% uptime on the boss. And DJ Frush, of course, having an easier time too, can just park in any of the safe corners and just unload on Captain Valeri, which is allowing them to get slightly ahead. But some of that lead that they started with at the beginning of the fight is finally being overtaken now by Games Revolted as they tie them up at 30%.
Yeah, so at the start, the Elemental Shaman just doing so much single target damage, so much burst at the start, and the one thing to note as well, though, is of course, not only does Games Revolted have a Windwalker compared to Elemental Shaman, but they also have the physical damage buff. So it is kind of insane just how much damage Frush is doing here. Not only is he doing his own damage, but he's also making up almost for the damage of the Windwalker. But his damage does fall off, as you mentioned, Sloot. So now at this point, Games Revolted actually caught up, as their damage is a lot more consistent compared to the Elemental Shaman just having so much front-loaded damage.
Yeah, the sustain of Games Revolted just slightly overtakes Team Puolukka. They were a few percent behind, finally tied them around 30, and ended up beating them on the boss by 4 to 5% in that range. Games Revolted already only needing 2%, as we mentioned, for the trash, so they will CC this first Warden with true crowd control with the sap, and then just move past with a mass stealth here. Now somebody will run up the stairs likely and pull these Wardens to the side using their vanish. We can see the defensive pop there, of course, from one of the rogues, from Adak. As he runs over, he will pop his vanish while the rest of the team safely goes up to the side, and then they will engage Korgus, the final boss. Seems like they will likely backtrack for the Warden when it's all said and done. Team Puolukka following suit as we get the double blind action, but it looks like they're dealing with the trash first. No, they're not. Maybe they are. We'll see what Click does in a moment. But Korgus here has been aggroed by Games Revolted. Yeah,
so Korgus, one of the most difficult fights in the whole dungeons combined, especially in a tyrannical setting. Now, we don't have any affixes that make this fight even more difficult. We don't have anything like Quaking or stuff like that. Raging, a non-factor on this boss, and Volcanic can be a problem if you get knocked into one of the Volcanics, but it really shouldn't be. So the only problem is going to be the RNG, really. How many doubles are you going to get? How good is your healer going to be? As we see a double coming out of on Games Revolted side here.
More double trouble here for both teams as Team Puolukka finally engages Korgus as well. About 15% behind on the boss. Now, the percent trash difference between the two teams is really not too significant if they're able to group up the mobs quite quickly together, because the cannon will make quick AoE work of whatever trash there is. Unfortunately, because of the trash kind of confirmation downstairs of the 2-2-1, it'll be a bit more difficult for Puolukka to get everything together. They can't just bunch all 5 of them in the flick of a finger, so they'll need to not only surpass this boss's damage, but do it by 5 seconds and kill the rest of the trash over Games Revolted. So Games Revolted right now looking in a very prime position to win this dungeon and actually take the series 2-0, but anything can happen on Korgus here in Nagura, especially with still half health remaining.
You saw the Bloodlust, of course, coming out from both of those teams, and you saw DJ Frush is doing so much burst damage, bursting 50k DPS at the very start, and catching up quite a bit on the percentage. But Games Revolted is having more sustained damage, especially with this Windwalker and the physical buff. So Games Revolted should stay ahead at this point in time, and it should be their game to win. But again, anything can happen, especially if you get a bunch of doubles in a row, just causing trouble for the rest to do it. And one thing to note as well, that Team Puolukka does have a little bit of a disadvantage because they do have 2 ranged, meaning that Gotcha and DJ Frush will get the explosive rounds on them every single time, meaning if you get doubles, it's going to be more difficult for Gotcha to heal 2 targets up, while on the other side of Games Revolted, they only have 1 ranged, meaning that it's going to be a little bit more spread out on the whole team, the explosive bursts.
More spread out, and also getting your casts interrupted by knockbacks, needing to constantly move when Overseer Korgus casts one of his abilities, so with his cross ignition right here, so yeah, certainly a bit of a disadvantage there, as we can see Games Revolted maintaining that 9 to 10% lead on the boss. Team Puolukka did manage to catch up a bit just by virtue of that massive burst, plus having a true Bloodlust with the extra 5% haste as opposed to using drums, but it's just not going to be enough. So if Games Revolted manages to close out Korgus here, there's virtually nothing that can really wipe them in the rest of the dungeon, and it looks like they'll be able to just that. Even if the healer dies now, they should be able to finish him off.
Yeah, they do get a Deadeye cast here, and not a double, so maybe only 1 more explosive round to have to deal with. Not even 1, so as the boss goes down, they only have to deal with 1 more mob to proc their 100%, and they're gonna win. This is so bad for Team Puolukka. They're going to be out. They're not going to be able to qualify for the Spring Land because they're not going to get enough points to get this 4th place. So very unlucky for Team Puolukka, and just kind of having this underdog of Games Revolted win here as they qualify for the first cup out of the 3, and just kind of winning against Team Puolukka, doing really well here.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it took for Games Revolted. Really solid performance from them as they take the series 2-0 and defeat and eliminate Puolukka.